One day, a young man found himself reincarnated into a vibrant fantasy world. This new realm, known as Asfiel, was filled with wonders, brave adventurers, majestic flying dragons soaring through the skies, and magic straight out of a fairy tale. It was everything he had ever dreamed of as a child. In this dreamlike world, he began his second life, full of hope and excitement. But his initial excitement quickly faded as the harsh realities of this new world became apparent. He inquired about a bath, only for a young maid to respond with a puzzled expression, stating she had never heard of such a thing. He found the food equally unappealing, consisting of crumbly bread and hard, tough meat, a far cry from the meals he was accustomed to. Even the basic sanitation was primitive, with toilets that were little more than messy pits, relying on sewage processing slime for disposal. He slumped, a look of dismay on his face, realizing that this new life was proving far tougher than he had ever imagined. The lack of electricity meant relying on simple lanterns for light, confirming his suspicion that this was a civilization stuck at a medieval level. Suddenly, a knock echoed from his door. Lying in bed, he sighed, reflecting on his past life in a world of convenience. He longed for a return to such a world, or perhaps to find a new one that truly aligned with his desires. Suddenly, he jolted awake, his eyes wide with confusion. He sat up, looking around his unfamiliar surroundings, wondering what exactly was happening. He reflected on his unique power, the Moon Gate, an ability that granted him dimensional travel. Using this extraordinary power, he could traverse between countless different worlds, a realm ruled by dinosaurs, a futuristic sci-fi metropolis, and many others beyond imagination. Then, one day, his journey brought him to an entirely new destination. He found himself amidst a serene, rural landscape, birds chirping softly in the distance. A road sign confirmed his location, Okane Village. A wave of confusion washed over him as he wondered if he had somehow returned to Japan. He realized it had been over a decade since he last set foot in this world, and he doubted he would ever be able to return to the other side. Suddenly, an elderly woman's voice cut through his thoughts, calling out to him. The elderly woman, wearing a straw hat, approached him, asking if he had missed his bus and what he was doing there. He stammered, attempting to explain, but she quickly shifted, inviting him to join her for lunch since it was already midday. Moments later, he sat with her and an elderly man, slurping soba noodles, feeling much better after the meal. As he continued to eat, the elderly man remarked on his surprisingly good Japanese, despite his foreign appearance and attire. Alan, slightly embarrassed, apologized for slurping, explaining it had been a long time since he had enjoyed soba. He glanced at his reflection in a nearby window, observing his own image. He pondered the peculiar fact that language barriers seemed non-existent, wondering if this, too, was an effect of his skills. He noted his blonde hair and green eyes, features that clearly marked him as an outsider in this Japanese village. He recalled a crucial detail about his Moon Gate ability. While living beings could not pass through, inanimate objects could be carried across worlds. This realization sparked a thought. Depending on how he utilized this power, he could potentially make a significant profit. However, daily life in Asfiel was far from comfortable, and he desperately needed money, even for simple necessities like a public bath. He clenched his fist, resolving to find a way to leverage his ability for financial gain. He pondered the stark economic disparity between his two worlds. In Japan, a single gold bar could purchase a mansion, yet in Asfiel, it amounted to merely a month's salary. Conversely, items like luxurious cakes and spices, which were common in Japan, commanded exorbitant prices in Asfiel, enough to fund the construction of a house. This realization sparked a cunning idea. If he were to resell Japanese items in Asfiel, he could amass a fortune. A sly smirk spread across his face as the image of countless coins danced in his mind. Later, he assisted an elderly woman in a village, who expressed her gratitude. He humbly dismissed her thanks, explaining that the village was populated by many old people, and his help benefited everyone. The old woman, surprised by his earnestness, inquired if he truly enjoyed snacks that much. He gasped in mock surprise, then enthusiastically declared that he should be the one thanking her, as her payment allowed him to acquire many more treats. He then bid the old woman farewell, internally acknowledging that he could not reveal his true intention of selling goods from another world. With a resolute expression, he affirmed that it was time to commence his venture. Sometime later, the merchant Albert confronted him, his gaze sharp as he questioned the origin of an item Alan possessed. Alan, holding a small, dark, rectangular object, presented it to Albert, asking for his assessment and whether it would appeal to nobles. Albert, after a moment of consideration, confirmed that such items would undoubtedly captivate the nobility. However, he admitted his lack of direct connections to them, suggesting that an introduction might be possible through an acquaintance. Alan pressed him further, asking if that was the extent of his help and if selling to nobles was truly impossible. Albert explained that attempting to sell such items directly to the nobility would attract unwanted attention from various factions, and other merchants would likely view such an act unfavorably. Albert further elaborated that violating the unspoken rules among merchants could lead to significant trouble. He clarified that nobles typically employ merchants to manage their farmers and confectioners, and that sweets, in particular, served as a diplomatic tool to display a family's wealth and influence. He grumbled that his shop was too small for such an endeavor, implying he would not participate in Alan's venture. Alan, though frustrated by the merchant's skepticism, conceded that Albert had a valid point. Sighing, Albert then explained that a humble merchant like himself could not possibly compete against those who dealt directly with nobles. He told Alan he would have to look elsewhere for his business. Alan, understanding the limitations, agreed. As Albert continued to express his reservations, Alan, with a mischievous glint in his eye, revealed he had brought other items besides sweets, offering a bag of what appeared to be fried octopus snacks. Just then, an elderly woman and man, recognizing Alan and Albert, greeted them warmly, expressing their surprise at seeing them. Alan, seeking their opinion, asked them to try the new snack. The elderly woman, intrigued by the unusual packaging, asked what the foreign snack was. Alan explained it was something he had happened to buy, a foreign treat. She then asked if he had also become a merchant. He quickly clarified that he was not yet a merchant, but merely had an interest in the trade. Still grumbling about Alan's business, Albert was interrupted by the elderly woman, who, after trying the snack, exclaimed how incredibly tasty it was. She then playfully asked Albert if he was sure he wanted to aid his rival, but he simply stated he didn't mind. The elderly woman, delighted by the taste, declared she would buy one. The other elderly man, also enjoying the snack, agreed it was delicious, his mouth full. Thanking Alan for the snack, the elderly woman enthusiastically announced she would spread the word to the other mothers in the area, promising to champion his product. Alan looked on, surprised by her immediate and fervent reaction. Moments later, he stared at an empty display box, realizing with a slight shock that the snacks were completely sold out. Observing his success, Albert remarked that it wasn't bad, crediting the mothers for the rapid sales. Alan, still processing the unexpected demand, mused that if it had been chocolate, he would have been a billionaire, while Albert reminded him not to underestimate the power of business. He received a thank-you gift of chocolate from Aina, who then departed. He watched her go, pondering her unexpected skill in business, realizing she might be more capable than he initially thought. Later, a serene landscape unfolded before him, a vast lake reflecting the towering mountain. As he let out a deep sigh, contemplating his current circumstances, he found himself soaking in hot water, a rare luxury. He reflected on his precarious situation, acknowledging that it had been a long time since he enjoyed such a bath. He lacked a family register, which prevented him from renting a house or securing a permanent job, leaving him completely broke. Yet, a faint smile touched his lips as he considered the possibility of hope, a glimmer of optimism despite his challenges. He recalled his recent success, realizing that items from his original world, Japan, held unexpected value in this new realm. He mused that while selling sweets wouldn't make him rich overnight, it was a promising start. Still in the bath, he pondered his next move, wondering what else he should sell and acknowledging the complex rules governing merchants in this world. That evening, the tavern buzzed with lively chatter, its patrons enjoying their drinks and conversations. Alan, Albert, and Aina were among them, each immersed in their own thoughts or discussions. He savored a mug of local alcohol, finding it particularly satisfying after a long day, concluding that the drinks here were truly the best. Suddenly, a bell chimed, and the boisterous tavern fell silent, all eyes turning towards the entrance as a palpable tension filled the room. A new figure entered, her presence commanding immediate attention. Whispers spread through the room, identifying her as the Black Princess. He realized she was also a transferee, and like him, Japanese. Her sudden appearance in the tavern brought Alan's thoughts to the unique individuals in this world. He knew that in this town alone, there were at least one or two special people like him. Those born into this world with memories of a previous life were called reincarnated, while those, like the woman before him, who were suddenly transported from another world, were known as transferred. He understood that both reincarnated and transferred individuals often possess superior physical abilities and magic, far exceeding the average residents of Asfield. They frequently developed powerful skills, leading many to become formidable adventurers or dedicated research wizards. Back in the bustling tavern, Alan observed the beautiful woman who had just entered. The bartender, noticing his gaze, remarked on her striking appearance and asked if Alan knew her. Alan admitted it was his first time seeing such a person in person. The bartender then explained that she was the captain of an unusual all-female adventurer party known as the Dawn Moon Brigade. Not only was she dazzling, but she was also exceptionally talented, having defeated many powerful monsters. Alan took a sip from his wooden mug, finding it a little unsettling to see such highly trusted figures among nobles and merchants in such a casual setting. Moments later, Alan called for the bill, preparing to leave. The bartender, surprised by his quick departure, noted it was rare for him to have only one drink. Alan simply replied that he had some business to take care of. His business led him to a store, where he inquired of the clerk, Kita, about a popular manga. He wondered if it was a current trend. Kita, pleased by his interest, confirmed its popularity, stating it was the most popular manga in Weekly Shounin Champ, and that she also read it. Alan then presented another item, a fashion magazine for women, and asked Kita if his selection was correct. He explained that an acquaintance had asked him for a small favor. Kita confirmed the magazine was correct and Alan, acknowledging her help, asked her to settle the checkout for all the books. She thanked him and invited him to come again. As Alan departed the store, he reflected on the Black Princess. He realized it had been dangerous to interact with her in that situation. Unlike him, she had been suddenly transferred to this other world, and he suspected his guess was correct that there wasn't much entertainment in Asfiel, implying she might also be seeking familiar comforts. He considered the significant expense, yet he was counting on this plan to succeed. The sign on the establishment's door clearly stated it was reserved for today. He looked concerned, realizing the reservation presented a problem for his intentions. He pondered his options, knowing that if he missed this opportunity, he might not get another chance. Waiting until they left the store would only complicate matters further. He observed the restaurant's windows, noting the curtains were fully closed, obscuring any view inside. Suddenly, a young woman with dark pigtails confronted him, demanding to know why he was loitering in front of the store. He quickly apologized, explaining that he had something to give to Lady Black Princess and her captain, which was why he had come. He quickly shoved a package towards her, insisting it was a gift and completely free. He added that if the Black Princess was not interested, she could simply throw it away. She watched him depart with astonishing speed, leaving her to wonder who that mysterious man had been. Inside the establishment, the young woman, Kalkura, sighed as Aina finally arrived. Another guard, with long, light hair, asked Aina about the package Kalkura was holding. Kalkura explained that a suspicious person had just handed it to her outside, and it was addressed to the captain. Aina then asked Kalkura about the package, and Kalkura handed it over to her. Kalkura suggested they simply give it to the captain, reasoning that it was unlikely to be poison or a dangerous magic item. Aina, after a moment, agreed. She sat at the table as Kalkura approached, holding the mysterious package. Kalkura informed her that the item was addressed directly to her, the captain. Aina, looking at the package with a hint of curiosity, inquired about its contents. Kalkura then asked if she should open it, to which Aina replied that there was no issue, adding that the sender had given permission to discard it if she found no interest. As Kalkura proceeded to open the package, she discovered its contents were books, expressing her surprise aloud. Aina observed the items, her expression thoughtful, as Kalkura mused that while they seemed rare, she couldn't understand their relevance to the captain. Suddenly, Aina's eyes widened in shock, and the package slipped from her grasp, clattering to the floor. Still reeling from the unexpected revelation, Aina clutched the now-opened package, her face a mask of profound shock. She then urgently demanded to know the identity of the person who had delivered the package. A young girl in a school uniform found herself in a terrifying chase through a dark, distorted forest. Unseen pursuers shouted, demanding to go after her, and identifying her as, that woman must be the divine child. Disoriented and confused, she wondered, what on earth happened? And where am I? Moments before this frantic pursuit, she had been waiting for her school pickup, a mundane memory now overshadowed by the sudden, inexplicable distortion of the scenery around her. The ground gave way beneath her, and she plummeted through the air, surrounded by jagged rocks and dark foliage. A gasp escaped her lips as the chilling realization dawned. She was going to die here. Fortunately, her fall was not her end. She awoke to the concerned faces of an elderly woman and a younger woman. The younger woman, relieved, asked if she was awake and okay. The girl, now bandaged and sitting up in a bed, asked who they were. The younger woman explained that they were a humble couple who ran an inn and had found her collapsed at the bottom of the cliff. The elderly woman, standing nearby, offered a soft apology for startling her. Realizing the gravity of her situation, the girl thanked them profusely for saving her life, acknowledging that she must have fallen off the cliff. The younger woman, however, humbly downplayed their efforts, stating they didn't do much. The younger woman then continued, remarking that it was remarkable she had fallen from such a height and remained unharmed, adding, as expected of the divine child. The girl's eyes widened in surprise as she repeated the unfamiliar title, Divine Child. Still processing the revelation, she asked for clarification on what they meant by divine child. The younger woman explained that they were messengers from God who suddenly appeared from another world, and her black hair served as proof of her identity. The younger woman further elaborated that these divine children were said to have been given special powers, but seemed the girl was unaware of such abilities. The girl remained silent, her expression a mix of confusion and disbelief. Clutching her bandaged arm, she finally spoke, admitting that she honestly didn't know anything about any powers or her new identity, as everything had happened so suddenly. She sat in bed, a cup of tea warming her hands, as the innkeeper's daughter and the old woman urged her to prioritize rest. They assured her that she could contemplate her situation later. With a soft gaze, she expressed her profound gratitude for their kindness. After a period of rest, she prepared to depart, now clad in a simple cloak. The innkeeper's daughter and the old woman bid her farewell, asking her to take care. She promised she would, wishing them well in return, and then set out on a journey to find a way back to her former world. Her journey was not solitary for long. Thanks to the rumors of her power as a divine child, many people gathered around her. Before long, the group, now known as the Dawn Moon Brigade, became famous throughout the country, with her leading the way. She reflected on her companions, realizing that they had not questioned her purpose but simply followed her. Looking back, she felt blessed to have found such good people. One day, she hoped to tell them the full truth of her origins. A bell chimed, announcing an arrival as a door swung open into a dimly lit establishment, revealing barrels stacked against stone walls. Alan, seated at the bar, held a letter in his hand as the divine child entered. The bartender, Zine, offered a warm welcome. Alan then turned to the newly arrived girl, asking if she was the one who had sent the letter. He then instructed Zine to give her something to drink, adding a reminder to lock the door. The girl listened intently, her expression serious. They sat at the bar, a quiet moment passing between them as Zine stood ready behind the counter. He apologized, sensing her discomfort, and clarified that their interaction was merely a conversation between fellow citizens, hoping to ease any apprehension she might feel. He then posed a direct question, asking if she was Japanese. She confirmed his suspicion, explaining that her appearance was due to her being a reincarnated person. The young woman, having just revealed her reincarnation, introduced herself as Sayoji Shizuku, 18 years old this year. Alan, in turn, stated his name as Alan, unemployed and 20 years old, though he quickly clarified that was not his true identity. As she listened, Alan revealed his original name was Shinjo Masato, and that he had been an ordinary person who died at the age of 25. The sound of ice clinking in his glass punctuated his confession. Shizuku, tapping her fingers on the table, apologized for asking unnecessary things, but Alan assured her he did not mind. He then clarified that his family name was Shinjo and his given name was Masato. She then questioned if he had been famous in his previous life, wondering if he was an idol, but he seemed unaware of such a possibility. Shizuku, however, noted that he had not been surprised when he heard her name, Sayoji, suggesting he might be from a different time than other reincarnated individuals she had encountered. Alan chuckled, explaining that while his base in Japan resembled the Showa period, he did not truly feel it. He then added that it had been 20 years since his death. Shizuku, her eyes widening, exclaimed that she knew he could go to Japan and began to ask about the implications. However, Alan quickly interrupted, stating that it was impossible for her to return to Japan. She looked down, a crestfallen expression on her face, as Alan explained that no living things other than himself could cross between worlds. He apologized for giving her false hopes. He then reassured her that this limitation was not entirely a bad thing for her, as he could procure items and send them to her if necessary, implying that his ability to bridge the worlds offered other benefits. Shizuku gripped her glass, contemplating his words. Alan noticed her glass was empty and offered her something to drink, suggesting a bottle of green tea. He explained that the owner of the establishment was not present, implying he was taking the liberty to serve her. He poured the green tea into her glass, asking how it tasted. She thanked him, accepting the drink. He sampled the drink, noting that its taste, smell, and overall character were completely different from the tea he brewed in his own world, yet he found it surprisingly palatable. Shizuku, holding the glass, felt a wave of emotion. Despite the unfamiliarity, she found the drink truly delicious, a small comfort in her new reality. Alan observed her, a realization dawning on him. He had momentarily forgotten her true age, so accustomed was he to her dependable demeanor. She apologized, feeling she had shown an embarrassing side of herself, but he quickly reassured her, dismissing the notion entirely. Shizuku confessed that while she still wished for a way to return to Japan, she was also content with her current circumstances. Alan, understanding her sentiment, offered to procure soba for her if she desired, recalling his own emotional reaction upon tasting it again after his reincarnation. He then formally declared his intention to be her sponsor, requesting in return that she prepare all the items he might ask for. Her hand, reaching for the glass, silently accepted the terms. Shizuku inquired if he would send a letter, to which he affirmed, but cautioned her not to make unreasonable demands, as he lacked a family register and a stable income. He then shifted the conversation, asking if she possessed skills in organizing documents. The next morning, Shizuku, looking apologetic, addressed two women, explaining that she had called them early because she wished to introduce someone to them all. She then introduced Alan as a new member joining them that day. He offered a polite, if somewhat shy, greeting. One of the women, recognizing him instantly, exclaimed in disbelief, questioning Shizuku's seriousness and identifying Alan as the weird man from yesterday. Shizuku, however, calmly affirmed that he could be trusted, while Alan stood awkwardly beside her. She voiced her concern to Captain Aina, questioning the decision to allow a man into their ranks. Another adventurer quickly added that despite Aina's opinion, they would not be taking him on any quests. Aina, however, calmly responded, respecting the sentiment, but asking if there was truly an issue. Aina then clarified her reasoning, explaining that he possessed the skills to read and perform calculations, making him suitable to manage their supplies. She instructed Shizuku to train the new member in this role. Meanwhile, Alan, observing from a distance, pondered Satoji's true intentions. A collective gasp seemed to ripple through the air, startling a flock of birds from a nearby rooftop as the unexpected announcement settled. Moments later, within the brigade's storeroom, Kita turned to Alan, her expression curious. She inquired how he had managed to capture the captain's interest so quickly. He acknowledged that his efforts had been worthwhile, though he never anticipated actually joining the brigade. Kita, still processing the situation, remarked that she had never seen the captain so animated before. Shizuku stood nearby, her gaze downcast. A rustle of papers accompanied the quiet observation that a man joining the esteemed Dawn Moon Brigade was truly unheard of. Alan looked perplexed, but Kita, holding a catalog, reassured him that it was fine, as they could always use extra hands. She then offered him the catalog, asking him to confirm its contents. As he took the catalog, Kita, surrounded by towering stacks of crates and barrels, asked if he had been managing all of this by himself until now. He confirmed her assumption. She explained that there was no other choice, as only she and the captain possessed the necessary skills to handle the calculations for their group of approximately 30 people. Alan's eyes widened in shock at the revelation. With a sigh, Kita declared she would check the current stock and instructed Alan to go acquire some supplies. She advised him that mentioning the brigade's name would ensure merchants offered fair prices and wouldn't attempt to overcharge him. He acknowledged her instructions. Kita offered a final word of caution to Alan, urging him not to overexert himself. He listened, a thoughtful expression on his face. With that, she turned and waved goodbye, her pigtails swaying as she departed. Moments later, Alan found himself amidst the lively chatter of the town square, a document clutched in his hand. Even so, he mused, the task ahead was significant. He considered his new position, reflecting that he had never anticipated becoming a merchant for the Dawn Moon Brigade. A sigh escaped him as he admitted he hadn't thought such a thing would ever happen. Despite his initial surprise, he resolved that now that things had come to this, he needed to achieve results to be fully accepted as a member of the group. As he pondered this, Kita and an older woman approached him, the older woman asking if the rumor was true. Alan feigned ignorance, inquiring about the nature of the rumor, to which Kita clarified it was about him joining the Dawn Moon Brigade. The women, clearly excited, then pressed him further, expressing amazement that he had found a job and immediately asking about his relationship with the Black Princess. Alan quickly denied any such connection, internally marveling at how quickly the news had spread, realizing one should never underestimate the information network of the housewives. He attempted to downplay the situation, explaining that the Black Princess had simply liked an item he traded, and he was merely an extra in the grand scheme. The women, disappointed by his response, remarked that it was a scary rumor and a shame. Alan then clarified that for now, he was only handling ordinary supply errands. Kita, with a cheerful laugh, encouraged him to do his best on his merchant debut, while the older woman added that the snacks from before had been delicious. Kita, seizing the opportunity, then asked Alan if he was sure about his current tasks. When he confirmed, she offered for him to come to her shop, promising him the best price. As Alan continued his new role, he found himself constantly hailed by the townspeople. They called out to him, eager to offer their support and services, making it impossible for him to refuse their requests. He wondered who had put them up to it this time, feeling a familiar sense of being overwhelmed by their collective goodwill. The crowd pressed in, their voices a cacophony of encouragement. One person mentioned hearing about his progress, another offered special service at their shop, and Kita, standing nearby, asked if he needed any other supplies, assuring him of her support. He could only manage a bewildered expression as the sheer volume of their offers became apparent. Later, Kita approached him, her expression calm and questioning. She commended him on a good job and inquired about the success of his shopping trip. She then took a moment to confirm the bill, carefully reviewing the details. As she placed the document on a nearby surface, she voiced her confusion, asking why the bill seemed to originate from such an unusual source. Alan, upon seeing the total, gasped in shock. He questioned the amount, wondering aloud if he had somehow gone over budget. She quickly corrected his assumption, explaining that it was quite the opposite. The total was actually 20% cheaper than usual. Alan, still bewildered, accused her of using some shady trick. Kita, with a slight glare, clarified that her acquaintances had simply lowered the price as a favor, and he could confirm it with them himself. Alan let out a long sigh, a mix of exasperation and understanding washing over him. He realized Kita hadn't intended to go quite so far with her generosity, but the outcome was undeniable. She turned to leave, leaving him to ponder the unexpected discount. As she walked away, Kita glanced back with a small, knowing smile, stating that she would give him some credit for his efforts. Later, Alan found himself outside, a gentle breeze rustling the leaves around him. He touched his face, a thoughtful expression settling upon him as he mused that Japan, after all, was a calm place. He held a letter addressed to Ryoji Ryujin, the paper rustling softly in his hand. He wondered if things would truly work out with just this, acknowledging that he had received the letter from Ryoji. The journey concluded as the team arrived at the royal capital, a sprawling city surrounded by formidable walls. A carriage, carrying Alan and his companions, rattled through the gates, bringing them into the heart of the kingdom. Moments later, Captain Aina addressed the assembled group, including Alan, Kalkura, and the Long Light Hair Guard, commending them for their efforts during the long trip. She declared that, from this day forward, Lineberg would serve as their primary base of operations. She continued, instructing each member to check their assigned rooms, assuring them that the new team house had been fully prepared for their arrival. Her message was concise and direct, leaving no room for questions. A collective affirmation of understanding echoed through the group. Later, as Alan stood with Aina, she turned to him and inquired if he intended to travel to Japan after completing his current work. He responded that he did not mind, but then asked if she needed anything specific. She initially dismissed the thought, stating he would know if he went there, but then quickly changed her mind, asking him to purchase Yum Koi Volume 2. He seemed taken aback by the unexpected request. Soon after, Alan found himself in Japan, observing a bustling street scene where several men in dark suits were gathered around cars, creating a noticeable commotion. A man, Genji-san, approached him, expressing surprise at his presence. Alan, in turn, asked about the cause of the disturbance. Genji-san explained that the men had been in the village for a week, specifically looking for Alan. He identified them as members of the Saioji group, a name that seemed unfamiliar to Alan, who questioned it with a puzzled expression. Alan pondered the identity of this Saioji group, while Genji-san reiterated that they had been actively searching for him. Deciding to address the situation directly, Alan declared his intention to speak with them. He then cautiously approached the group, a slight hesitation in his voice as he called out to them. He found himself confronted by a young woman who directly asked if he was Alan. Without waiting for a full response, she calmly instructed him to simply get into the car. Moments later, the woman, now identified as Akira, lit a cigarette with a distinct click of her lighter. She exhaled a plume of smoke, remarking that it had taken considerable effort to locate him. And even here, she couldn't easily acquire cigarettes. Inside the vehicle, Alan offered an apology, then inquired if their current situation was a consequence of the letter from the Saioji group. The woman, Kamiki Akira, simply told him to call her Akira. A sudden realization dawned on him. She knew about the young lady. As Alan processed this, a voice from the front of the car reported that Kamiki, the target, has been secured, and requested support. Akira then turned to Alan, warning him that if he cooperated, they would not harm him, and pointedly asked if he wished to return home with all his limbs intact. The car continued its journey, speeding through the urban landscape. Inside the moving vehicle, he hesitantly asked Akira to explain the Saioji group. Akira, surprised by his apparent ignorance, began to explain that the Saioji group was a company involving core industries like information technology and real estate, operating as a large, diversified conglomerate both domestically and internationally. She elaborated, stating that the Saioji family was originally one of Tokyo's wealthiest, and its current immense scale was due to the efforts of the young lady's father, Ryujin-sama. She concluded by revealing that her own Kamiki family had served the Saioji family for generations. Akira continued her explanation, revealing her deep loyalty to the young lady, stating she had been by her side since middle school, a bond that included Akira herself. She then recalled a time 3 years prior, the year she began working full-time at the main Saioji house. Even then, the young lady had praised Akira's tea as the best. The young lady, Shizuku, had often told Akira there was no need for such formality between them, but Akira, ever diligent, would simply bow and express her gratitude that her service pleased her lady. Shizuku, with a warm smile, had then asked if Akira would be staying at the main house starting that day, suggesting they watch something together that evening. Akira, equally pleased, had readily agreed to her lady's wish. Suddenly, the memory shifted to a moment of chaos. A maid rushed in, delivering urgent news to Akira. It was almost time for the young lady to return, but the house was unusually noisy. The maid then revealed the shocking truth. Miss Shizuku was missing, having vanished without a trace. Akira reacted with immediate alarm, demanding that the security cameras be checked and questioning the guard's competence. When the maid hesitated, Akira pressed for an explanation, then quickly moved to the security room herself, determined to review the footage. There, surrounded by monitors, she stared at the blank screens, a single, chilling question echoing in her mind. Had Shizuku truly vanished? Akira's gaze fell, her expression heavy with the weight of the past. The search for the young lady had continued relentlessly ever since that day, with even an expert team traveling across the globe, yet no trace had been found. Returning to the present, Akira stood before Alan, her voice filled with regret as she apologized for attempting to deceive him. She confessed that despite all efforts, there had been no other clues to Shizuku's disappearance, save for Alan himself. The scene settled on the exterior of a modern building, as Akira's voice declared that it was now Alan's turn to speak. He walked alongside Akira, who remarked that she never expected to see a building of such scale in the town near Okane village. Moments later, Akira announced their presence to Chairman Ryujin, who stood with his back to them, gazing out a large window. Turning to face them, the chairman addressed Alan directly, asking if he was indeed Alan Kun. He confirmed that he was. As the chairman studied him, Alan felt an unsettling, intimidating presence emanating from the man, who then observed that Alan was just like the young man described in his daughter's letter. Still reeling from the chairman's intense gaze, Alan stammered, admitting he was shocked. The chairman chuckled, reassuring him not to be so cautious, as he knew Alan was not a kidnapper. The chairman then elaborated on the letter's significance, explaining that it was written in a secret family code, which meant its origin and content could not be faked. This confirmed his daughter was alive and that Alan was someone she trusted. He further revealed that Alan's appearance was mentioned in the letter, and his location could be identified to some extent by the postmark. Alan, still processing, asked how they had managed to find him, given his unknown address and unemployed status. As the chairman turned and walked, his thoughts drifted to the past, recalling Shizuku's disappearance 3 years prior. Despite being surrounded by dozens of guards, she had vanished into thin air, a fact that still surprised him. In his moment of despair, a letter, penned by his own daughter, had arrived. The letter's contents were clear. His daughter had a partner and wished for Alan to receive assistance. With renewed focus, he turned to Alan, urging him to speak and share what he knew. He inquired about any recording or surveillance devices in the room, to which Chairman Ryujin confirmed there were none. The security was already tight enough, he explained, noting that while there was a window, it was a one-way mirror, ensuring their privacy. As Alan spoke, Chairman Ryujin and Akira, startled, drew their weapons, demanding he put down his gun. Ignoring their command, Alan extended his hand, and with a surge of his abilities, a shimmering, glowing gate materialized before them, causing both Ryujin and Akira to gasp in surprise. He then explained that the gate, though hard to believe, was connected to another world, and his daughter, Shizuku, was on the other side. Both Chairman Ryujin and Akira stared, clearly taken aback by this astonishing revelation. Alan further clarified that while he didn't fully understand all the conditions for using the gate, no living beings could pass through it other than himself. Chairman Ryujin cautiously approached the shimmering portal, reaching out to touch its surface. He asked if it was permissible to do so, and Alan readily granted his permission, confirming it was safe. As Chairman Ryujin processed this, he inquired about his daughter's activities in this other realm. Alan explained that the other side was a fantasy world, and Shizuku led a group of adventurers there, with him serving as her subordinate. Chairman Ryujin, still grappling with the extraordinary nature of the situation, admitted that it was incredibly difficult to believe what Alan was showing him. Despite his skepticism, Chairman Ryujin then asked Alan for a favor, confessing that he had been doubtful because the entire story sounded like a fairy tale. Alan acknowledged this was a natural reaction to such unbelievable events. Chairman Ryujin then presented Alan with a smartphone, instructing him to take a picture of his daughter with it. He promised that if Alan complied, he would cooperate as stated in the letter. Alan, however, appeared unfamiliar with the device, prompting Ryujin to suggest that Akira would explain its use later. Alan looked down at the smartphone in his hand, a thoughtful, slightly bewildered expression on his face. He stood before Akira, who acknowledged the letter's authenticity and his undeniable role in its delivery. However, she openly expressed her suspicion of his ulterior motives. Despite her distrust, Akira then asked him to convey her regards to her daughter and offered her thanks. Following her words, he firmly shook her hand, confirming his agreement to her request. Meanwhile, in another world, Shizuku, sipping tea, inquired if he had successfully met her father. He, looking somewhat exasperated, explained that it had been unavoidable. Too many people had flocked to the village where he was staying, and he had never imagined her father would travel to the countryside himself. She acknowledged his explanation with a nod. He then informed her that Chairman Ryujin had given him a device called a smartphone and wanted a photograph of her as evidence, to which she simply nodded in understanding. As he watched her effortlessly swipe and tap the smartphone screen, he realized she was already accustomed to such technology. He asked to borrow it, and she readily agreed. Upon taking the device, he discovered a video message from Shizuku herself, where she stated that if he was watching it, she was likely still alive. The video message showed Akira, who commented that the voice sounded just like her father. He, still holding the device, marveled at the clarity, wondering if modern cell phones truly possess such high-quality 4K resolution. She, now holding the smartphone, offered a gentle smile, acknowledging that it had been rude of him to peek at her private message. Moments later, she found herself alone, looking around with a puzzled expression. She wondered where he had gone, realizing she still needed to return the phone to him. Suddenly, he was back in his own world, surrounded by the Syoji group members, asking if the smartphone was functioning well. Simultaneously, in her world, Shizuku exclaimed that it was perfect timing, as everyone had just gathered. She then called out to her companions, urging everyone to come closer for the photos, as murmurs of excitement spread through the group. She was startled as one of her companions called out, urging her to come closer. Shizuku looked back, a hint of surprise on her face, as Alan held the smartphone, preparing to capture the moment. He pressed the button, the device emitting a soft click as it captured the image. Shizuku watched him, a slight smile forming on her lips. The adventurers, including Shizuku, posed together, their faces bright with smiles as the camera clicked, preserving their camaraderie. He observed her, a quiet thought passing through his mind that she was truly beginning to adapt to this new world, finding her place among her companions. She then shifted the conversation, asking if he had heard of the Royal Capital Bazaar. She explained that it was a large, weekly event in the capital where merchants from all over the country gathered, offering many rare items. He considered her words, realizing that his activities as an adventurer might have to wait. Shizuku continued, mentioning that the bazaar featured numerous stalls catering to both commoners and nobility, suggesting he might find something of interest there. She then inquired if he had something specific he wanted to ask. He confirmed, his curiosity piqued, and asked if anyone, regardless of status, could open a stall at the bazaar. Alan sat, lost in thought, a troubled expression on his face as he pondered a difficult decision. He held an application form for the upcoming bazaar, his mind still wrestling with the uncertainty of what he could possibly offer for sale. Just then, Lazuli, Ryuka, and Camille returned, with Camille immediately questioning his activity. Camille pressed him, asking why he was attempting to flee, suggesting he couldn't relax in her presence. He quickly apologized, declaring his intention to depart. He paused, looking back at them, and assured her that no one in their group harbored such outdated sentiments anymore. A memory from some time earlier surfaced, showing him surrounded by the girls. They had apologized for their previous conduct, acknowledging that no truly decent man had ever joined them before. He had expressed genuine surprise, having believed he was unwelcome. Returning to the present, Ryuka expressed her gratitude, observing that Captain Aina, who had seemed troubled recently, now appeared much calmer. Camille added that Aina herself had praised Alan, emphasizing that the brigade welcomed anyone who could contribute. He mused internally that his situation would become complicated if they truly accepted him. Suddenly, Camille exclaimed with a decisive pow, declaring that he was like a father figure, not merely a younger brother. He sat at his desk, explaining that he had been diligently filling out the bazaar application form, as he intended to open a stall. Her excitement evident, Camille eagerly inquired about what he planned to sell. He admitted he was still contemplating his offerings, clarifying that it was merely a trial run. He gazed at a box of chocolates and some delicate jewelry, explaining his intention to sell sweets specifically for the nobility this time. However, he confessed his struggle to find anything suitable that wouldn't be excessively expensive. He listened as Camille pondered what nobles truly desired, finding it a challenging question. Lazuli agreed, noting the difficulty in identifying such items. As they continued their search, Camille suddenly pointed towards a shelf in the bookstore, a spark of realization in her eyes. With a triumphant tada, she presented a book, asking Alan what he thought of it. The book, recommended by Captain Aina, was a Japanese title, prompting Ryuka to exclaim her desire for the sequel. Lazuli wondered how they could read Japanese, while Alan, quill in hand, considered that while books might be difficult to acquire, entertainment items in general could be a good idea. He acknowledged their enthusiasm, agreeing to stock just a few of the books, much to the delight of Camille, Ryuka, and Lazuli. The girls, beaming, promised to visit his stall, making it a firm commitment. Far above the bustling city, the sun cast long shadows over the myriad buildings, marking the passage of time. Later, as he rode an elevator, Alan reflected on his recent meeting with Chairman Ryujin. He had given the chairman his smartphone and other items, but he remained uncertain if Ryujin truly believed his story. A voice from the reflection of the elevator door announced their arrival, stating they had been expecting him. Stepping out, he was greeted by Akira, who bowed deeply and formally introduced herself as Kamiki, stating she would be serving as his attendant from that moment forward. She expressed her anticipation of working with him again, leaving Alan utterly surprised by her sudden change in demeanor. Still reeling from the surprise, he asked her if she could speak to him more frankly, as she had before. Akira, sighing softly, apologized for her earlier behavior, explaining that she had been caught off guard. Akira, observing Alan's reaction, felt a sense of relief wash over her, realizing that his actions confirmed he had believed her words. She continued, assuring him there was no longer any reason to doubt her, and added that Chairman Ryujin was also very pleased. The ore they had received, which glowed when struck, the shockstone, had been determined to be a completely unknown substance. With a soft sound, she placed several items on a desk, promising to explain the promised support in order. He watched as she presented the items, explaining that they included documents related to his ID and family register. She then revealed a black credit card with no limit, assuring him he needn't worry about expenses, and informed him that the room would serve as his residence, complete with a PC and all daily necessities, with staff available for meal requests. Finally, she showed him his bank account, displaying a staggering balance of 100 million. Alan could only stammer in disbelief, utterly overwhelmed. Akira then clarified that this extensive support came with 2 conditions. Alan, clutching his head as if struck by a sudden headache, expressed his gratitude, but admitted that the scale of it all felt like a definite exaggeration. She continued, detailing the first condition. They required his cooperation in the research concerning the gate and the other world, as well as his unique power. The second, and most crucial, was to support the young lady, Shizuku-sama, as much as possible. Leaning closer, Akira fixed him with an intense gaze, asking if he would cooperate. He readily agreed. Akira's expression brightened, pleased with his answer. He, still slightly intimidated, promised his full cooperation. He offered his thanks, then mentioned he actually had a favor to ask. Akira, in turn, declared that from that moment on, she would be responsible for his protection and assistance, encouraging him to feel free to say anything. As they walked through the bustling town, Alan pondered her words, specifically the mention of entertainment items. He considered his options, acknowledging that while he could have chosen his own path, his lack of knowledge about modern Japan made it difficult. He then explained to Akira his desire to build a network, noting that while he had relied on acquaintances in his hometown, this was his first time in the royal capital. Akira, in turn, questioned his intention to open a store. Despite Akira's offer to provide him with as much money as he desired, he maintained that while her generosity was appreciated, his true goal was to win the hearts of nobles. He believed that by obtaining connections and information through his own efforts, his finances would stabilize, and he could contribute more effectively to the brigade. Akira expressed a sense of relief, remarking that he was surprisingly earnest. He seemed taken aback by her comment, but then reaffirmed his dream to become rich, emphasizing his desire to achieve it entirely on his own. As they continued their walk, Akira turned to him, asking what he intended to purchase. His eyes lit up as he pointed excitedly at a display, declaring that he had found exactly what he was looking for. Akira looked at the display, questioning if he meant card games. He confirmed it, explaining that many people in Asfield were desperate for new forms of entertainment. She admitted she understood his point, but had never seen such games before and was unsure which type would be best. He elaborated, stating he had initially thought trading cards would stand out due to their simplicity, especially when compared to the more common board games and playing cards favored by the nobility, such as chess. Akira then revealed that the entertainment business was no exception to the Syoji Group's diverse ventures, mentioning that a company under their umbrella specifically dealt in trading cards. He confirmed that he remembered her earlier mention of the group's extensive involvement. To his shock, Akira immediately pulled out her phone and made a call, instructing the person on the other end to deliver one warehouse worth of cross-world cards to Kamiki's location right away. Holding a bag from the card game shop, he asked if that was truly all she needed. She replied that for now, it was merely a trial. He expressed his sincere gratitude to Akira for her assistance, acknowledging how much she had helped him. She, in turn, dismissed his thanks, stating it was no problem. However, he then explained his intention to look for sweets and books on his own, believing he would be fine. Akira immediately countered, asserting she could not allow that, suggesting he might be too busy to manage alone. She insisted he leave the task to her, offering a resolute smile. He apologized, realizing the truth of her words. She was indeed a determined individual, and any mishap befalling him would undoubtedly cause trouble for the young lady, Shizuku. As they continued, his attention was captivated by a store display advertising books, games, manga, DVD/CD. He stared in utter amazement, questioning if videos were now referred to as CDs and even DVDs, wondering aloud what it all meant. He reflected that he had never truly felt the passage of time or the changes in the world while living in Akane Village. The games, too, were astonishingly advanced, a testament to how much things had evolved. Meanwhile, Akira's gaze fell upon a particular display, and a flicker of recognition crossed her features, prompting an internal thought about what it could be. He noticed her focus and inquired if she was looking at Koi, the title that Syoji also enjoyed, remarking on its evident popularity. Akira remained silent for a moment, then explained that the title simply evoked a sense of nostalgia within her. She recalled that the young lady, Shizuku, had once invited her to watch it together, but circumstances had prevented it from ever happening. He quickly apologized, realizing his question had been insensitive and that he had not intended to cause her distress. Akira acknowledged the unfortunate reality that she could not meet Shizuku, but asserted that serving by her side was not the only way to show devotion. She then instructed him to take care of the item and ensure it was given to the young lady. He understood her directive. She continued to ponder the logistics, wondering if it would be easier to store all entertainment, including manga and dramas, on a tablet. Meanwhile, Alan mused that if entertainment was scarce, it would be wise to prepare even more. As they walked, Akira remained deep in thought, her expression pensive, while Alan looked ahead with a slight smile, perhaps already envisioning his plans. Moments later, the sound of a door opening echoed as they arrived at a sturdy, half-timbered building, its roof tiles neatly arranged. Akira, already inside, called out to Alan as he quickly entered, announcing that she had received the permit for the stall he had mentioned earlier. He thanked her, noting that everything seemed to have gone smoothly. She then explained that the items would be brought on the designated day, as there was no space to store them there currently. Meanwhile, Ryuka inquired of Camille about her arrival time, mentioning that Lazuli was occupied with her work. The three of them, in their chibi forms, then collectively expressed a competitive sentiment, hoping Alan's stall would not fare well and that his goods would remain unsold, acknowledging that they couldn't simply cheat. Returning to Alan and Akira, she then asked him about the location of his store, having heard it was intended for nobility. He revealed it would be at number 13, West Street, a detail that visibly surprised her. She then examined a map, questioning the choice of location in the Western District, practically adjacent to the Central District, given that many merchants had always operated in that area of the royal capital. Alan then shared a rumor he had heard. The Central District was surrounded by a wall, separating it from the other districts, and some of the most prominent nobles in the royal capital resided there. He added that commoners, of course, never had the opportunity to see them. Akira, with a knowing smile, elaborated on the rumor, suggesting that some of those very nobles who enjoyed such things, might secretly visit the bazaar if it were located near the central district. Alan considered her words, acknowledging the truth in her statement. Akira confirmed it was indeed a rumor, but if it proved true, it would undoubtedly cause a significant stir. He faced Akira, who inquired about his true purpose. With a knowing smile, he replied that he would leave it to her imagination. She responded, a hint of intrigue in her voice, that he shouldn't tell her. Akira then burst into laughter, finding his response truly interesting. He questioned her amusement, to which she clarified that she found his answer fascinating. He pressed further, asking what she meant, feeling as though she were making fun of him. She assured him it was a compliment, and expressed her anticipation for the day his plans would unfold. Later, as he stood alone, a quiet shoe sound marked the moment. He pondered the recent exchange, a subtle unease settling over him as he felt something was not quite right. He took a deep breath, gazing out at the city's architecture. All that remained, he mused, was to wait for the appointed day and observe how events would unfold. The Royal Capital Bazaar buzzed with activity, a vibrant tapestry of merchants calling out their wares. One merchant proudly announced the sale of high-quality mineral accessories. Amidst the clamor, a young man, Alan, stood ready, a sense of determination settling over him as he prepared for the day. He had brought some books with him, intending to sell them only to selected individuals. However, his primary focus was on selling chocolate, though he had also impulsively brought some trading cards. Despite his preparations, a subtle unease began to creep into his thoughts as he observed the bustling market around him. He noted that while the main event was scheduled for the evening, the bazaar was already crowded with people, many of whom appeared to be from the upper class. Alan clenched his fist, reaffirming his resolve. The nearby stores were high class, but he believed the quality of his own products would not be outdone. He knew he had to seize this opportunity, no matter what. As the sun climbed higher in the sky, hours passed, yet Alan remained steadfast at his stall, repeating to himself that he had to seize this moment. Despite his unwavering resolve, a leaf drifted past his empty stall, highlighting the stark reality. No one had approached him all day. He pondered if his sales skills were lacking, or if his products were simply too unusual for the crowd. Other stores had customers, but he seemed to be the only one being avoided. Just then, Albert approached, noticing Alan's gloomy expression and asking what was wrong. Alan, surprised, questioned Albert's presence in the royal capital. Albert explained he was there for a business meeting, but decided to take a look at the bazaar. Alan grumbled, asking if Albert had come merely to be sarcastic. Albert, however, expressed genuine surprise that Alan had become a merchant and stated he was glad to see his business doing well, though his tone suggested a hint of amusement at Alan's current predicament. Alan conceded that Albert was right. It was difficult to sell unknown items, especially food, as customers likely wouldn't try them immediately, even with samples. Albert then seemed to consider his words carefully, as if about to offer a significant piece of advice. Albert, continuing his advice, suggested that Alan's current struggles were to be expected. He then advised Alan that it would be a wise decision to open a shop targeting the middle class next time, reminding him that the bazaar happens every week. He continued, noting that the afternoon session was about to begin and urged Alan not to give up until it was over. Alan, however, sighed internally, realizing he needed to study more about business. Albert then emphasized that as a fellow merchant, he was sure Alan already possessed the two most important things in business: product quality and trust. Alan, surprised by the compliment, thanked him profusely. Albert, however, quickly clarified that he never said Alan's shop was small, playfully adding that hearing such a statement from a small merchant wouldn't be very convincing. As Albert turned to leave, he paused, adding one more piece of advice. It might be beneficial for Alan to find something other than his primary purpose along the way. Later, Alan reflected on the day, noting that while a few people had approached his stall after Albert's advice, their responses were still not very good. He let out a small sigh. He pondered Albert's final words, wondering about finding something beyond his purpose, even as he held onto his dream of becoming rich through his own efforts. As the sky began to darken, he decided they should close the stall early once Ryuka and her friend arrived. Suddenly, the sound of footsteps drew his attention. Another merchant nearby exclaimed, wondering if that person had arrived. Alan looked up to see a young man, clearly not an ordinary person, walking through the bustling crowd, surrounded by guards. He overheard whispers identifying him as the eldest son of Marquis Casciano, a revelation that surprised Alan. The other merchant quickly surmised that the Marquis' son was likely there in disguise to inspect the shops, urging Alan to hurry and get ready. The Marquis' eldest son, having heard the rumors, confirmed their truth. He took a deep breath, steeling himself, knowing he needed to maintain his composure. He then looked upon the stall with a curious gaze, wondering what kind of establishment it truly was. As he approached, Alan, bowing respectfully, explained that they offered some of the rarest items in the world, with their main products being confectionery and toys. Alan then presented a tray of small, dark squares, identifying them as chocolate and noting their distinct aroma, offering some for the Marquis' son to try. His guard, Ryuka, immediately interjected, reminding him that a lord should not eat at a commoner's shop. However, the Marquis' son dismissed her concerns, stating that he would personally explain if anyone questioned his actions. Alan then elaborated on the nature of chocolate, explaining it was made by grinding cacao beans, mixing them with sugar and vanilla, and then solidifying the mixture. He also instructed the Marquis's son on how to properly hold the treat by its wrapper, as it would melt at body temperature. The Marquis's son, intrigued, took a bite, and a moment later, his eyes widened in surprise, a small sound escaping his lips as he savored the taste. Ryuka, observing, wondered if the scent had been too strong. Overwhelmed by the taste, the Marquis's son exclaimed his amazement, momentarily forgetting his manners. Alan, pleased, expressed his gladness that the chocolate was to his liking. The Marquis's son then inquired about the price, asking how much a single pack cost. Alan informed him that a pack of 8 sold for 30,000 gold. Upon hearing the price, the Marquis's son, still savoring the taste, declared that if that were the case, he wished to purchase all of them. Ryuka, startled, questioned if 30,000 gold was truly considered cheap. Alan clarified that this particular price was a special introductory offer for the chocolate. Alan, with a gentle smile, reassured the Marquis's son not to worry about the price, explaining that the special offer was simply because he had been surprised by his visit. The Marquis's son, however, mused that even with the special price, it was still considerably more than the original cost. As their transaction concluded, the Marquis's son, now holding a piece of Kampido, a traditional Japanese sugar candy, asked Alan if he could also tell him about the other products available. Alan readily agreed. He then pointed to a caramel candy, declaring his intent to purchase it. His gaze shifted to a jar of small, round candies, and he inquired about their nature, noting the surprising variety of sweets, all made from sugar. He decided to buy the caramel, then another item, and yet another. Alan watched, a faint sound of coins clinking, as the Marquis's son continued his spree, having already spent a staggering 1 million on his own. His curiosity unquenched. The Marquis's son then inquired about the contents of a plain paper bag. Alan explained that these were trading cards, part of a game where players constructed 40 card decks for duels. Each pack contained 5 random cards, and the rules were detailed in a separate book. Without a moment's hesitation, the Marquis's son declared his intention to purchase all of them as well. Alan, though grateful for the immense sale, felt a peculiar mix of emotions. Unaccustomed to such unquestioning patronage, he eagerly opened a pack of cards, marveling at the beautiful design of one of the revealed cards. He mused about buying a pack as a souvenir, noting that the quality surpassed his expectations. One of his armored guards remarked that 3,000 gold for just 5 pieces was indeed a considerable sum. Moments later, Alan's stall stood completely empty, every last item sold. As their transaction concluded, the Marquis's son inquired about Alan's name, to which he replied. The Marquis's son expressed his gratitude for a meaningful day, and Alan returned the sentiment. With a final gesture, the Marquis's son handed Alan a small object, stating his anticipation for their next encounter. Alan reflected on the impressive financial acumen of the nobility, his gaze drifting towards a grand mansion in the distance. He then examined the medal the Marquis's son had given him, pondering its significance. Just then, Camille, Ryuka, and Lazuli arrived, apologizing for their tardiness, only to find Alan's stall completely sold out, much to Camille's utter shock. Camille, Ryuka, and Lazuli stood before Alan's empty stall, their faces etched with disappointment. They had rushed to the bazaar, hoping to find his unique wares, but found nothing. Camille lamented that she had really wanted to read the next volume of Yuuyuu. Alan, slumped nearby, seemed to have forgotten something important. He then suddenly remembered, exclaiming that he had the 3rd volume of Yuuyuu right there. His friends, initially annoyed that he hadn't mentioned it sooner, quickly became excited at the revelation. He chuckled, suggesting they should all read it together, including Captain Aina. Later that night, under the soft glow of the moon, Alan diligently updated his ledger. The Black Princess approached him, her expression one of surprise, remarking that he was quite devoted to his work, staying up so late. She inquired if he wasn't joining the others to read Yuuyuu. He explained his task, then asked why she was awake. She replied that she merely came for water and would return soon. Her gaze then sharpened as she asked if there had been any problems at the Royal Capital Bazaar earlier that day. He hesitated, then assured her that while much had transpired, everything was ultimately fine. He admitted there were still many things he didn't fully comprehend, promising to explain the details at another time. The Black Princess confessed that despite his assurances, she felt a strange sensation. He then reflected on his journey, recalling how he had initially decided to become a merchant solely to make a fortune for himself, not for others. Yet, he found himself in a situation where many people were genuinely grateful to him, a feeling that didn't quite sit right with his original intentions. As he pondered this, the Black Princess presented him with a small, elegantly wrapped box, declaring it a token of her gratitude to him. He looked at her, surprised, asking if she had truly heard what he had just said about his mixed feelings. He then hesitantly opened the box, his eyes widening as he saw its contents. "This is a necklace," he murmured, clearly taken aback. He marveled at the necklace, noting its beautiful rainbow color. The Black Princess explained that it was a rare jewel, often used as a medium for magic, but even such a precious item felt insufficient to fully express the depth of her gratitude. He listened as the Black Princess spoke, then acknowledged her words, stating that regardless of her true intentions, he was grateful to have been able to speak with his family and Akira once more, thanks to her actions. She seemed taken aback by his directness, uttering a surprised sound. He, however, simply offered a small apology, then chuckled, remarking that Chairman Ryujin had expressed a similar sentiment, noting the striking resemblance between father and daughter. The Black Princess then looked directly at him, calling his name. Her expression grew serious as she entrusted him with the care of her father and Akira from that moment forward. He readily agreed, promising to do everything within his power. Internally, he couldn't help but observe the undeniable similarities between her and her father. With her eyes gently closed, she offered her heartfelt thanks once more, assuring him that she would treasure the magical necklace he had given her. As she began to walk away, her footsteps echoing softly, she reflected on the day, finding the bazaar to have been a truly enjoyable experience. He called out to her, waving goodbye and playfully telling her not to phrase things in such a way. Then, with a bright smile, he revealed he had brought a gift for her too, presenting her with a box of chocolates. She stood, her back to him, gazing up at the grand, arched ceiling of the building, the box of chocolates now clutched in her hand, as he continued to wave goodbye in the distance. A coin-like object, emblazoned with an intricate symbol, spun through the air with a metallic clink before descending. It landed near Alan, who sat quietly amidst lush foliage, the gentle chirping of birds filling the air around him. He picked up the object, his gaze fixed on its design. A thought formed in his mind, wondering if it could be a pro-mica metal. Just then, Camille bounded into view, her voice bright as she greeted him. She asked if he was training, but he explained he was merely on a break. Without waiting for a full answer, she eagerly requested to see the medal he had just found. He turned to her, holding out the medal, and inquired if she knew anything about it. She hummed thoughtfully, her expression shifting as if a realization had dawned on her. The Black Princess, observing their exchange, gracefully offered to host them for tea. Camille, meanwhile, expressed her astonishment that Alan, of all people, seemed unaware of the medal's significance, assuming it belonged to him. He could only offer a hesitant well. In response, a tray laden with an assortment of exquisitely crafted cookies sat before them. Some were shaped like delicate flowers, others like intricate checkered patterns, and a few charmingly resembled cats. Camille exclaimed in delight, wondering aloud what these delightful treats were. Alan explained that these were the very cookies he had received as a gift from the Black Princess, given after he had sought her advice regarding the bazaar. As they settled into a relaxed and peaceful tea session, Camille pointed out the cat-shaped cookies, finding them adorable. Alan, however, recalled a detail about this world, noting that cats in Asfiel were known for their ferocity. Despite the pleasant atmosphere, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was the only one who felt out of place. The Black Princess, with a gentle smile, recounted the immense success of the bazaar. She attributed its triumph largely to a single individual who had purchased all of her products. Camille reacted with a surprised gasp, questioning the extent of the success. Alan then added, almost as an afterthought, that the same person had also given him the medals earlier. He listened as Camille burst into laughter, declaring it impossible. Alan, however, calmly affirmed that it had indeed happened, prompting her to ask to see the mysterious item for herself. Before them lay two distinct medallions, one crafted from gleaming gold, the other from polished silver. These were, as he understood, pro-mica medals. The Black Princess, holding one of the medals, began to explain its purpose. Alan, seated across from her, inquired about the nature of a pro-mica medal, as she clarified that it served as a pass for entering and exiting restricted areas, including dungeons. Camille added that the gold pro-mica, in particular, was exceptionally difficult to acquire, as its possession required recognition from the guild. She emphasized that it was not an item one could easily obtain. Alan then realized the implication. A silver pro-mica from the academic district would only grant entry to academies bearing the same emblem. Camille confirmed his understanding, stating that she also possessed a silver pro-mica from the academic district. This meant that the academy bearing that specific emblem was the N5 Magic Academy, granting Alan free passage in and out of the academic district within the royal capital. Camille suggested that for now, he should inquire about the gold medal with someone at the academy, as she believed it originated from the central district but lacked further details. Alan pondered her words, realizing that the very fact he had been given the medal suggested it was an invitation. He wondered if this was what the benefactor had meant when they expressed looking forward to seeing him again. The Black Princess then offered Camille's assistance, noting that Camille was an alumna of the academic district and that the district itself was quite large. Alan, however, felt a pang of apprehension, wondering if he truly had to meet the Marquis's heir all by himself. Camille, beaming with confidence, declared she would be his special guide, adding that she was also indebted to him for Koi. Alan felt a wave of relief wash over him, grateful for her assistance. Camille and Alan stood overlooking a sprawling city district. Alan observed that this must be the academic district. She confirmed his observation, explaining that the academic district was the largest in the royal capital, housing not only academies but also government-run research facilities. He expressed his profound gratitude for her guidance, admitting he would have been utterly lost without her. She seemed pleased by his sincerity. She then urged him to hurry, pointing the way to a checkpoint and reminding him that the gift they carried needed to be kept cold. He acknowledged her words, agreeing to hasten their pace. As they approached, a heavily armored city guard stood watch at the checkpoint, observing all who passed. After clearing the checkpoint, they continued their journey, crossing a grand bridge that spanned a wide waterway. Entering a new section, she exclaimed with a sense of nostalgia, remarking how it felt like stepping into an entirely different world. He agreed, feeling the distinct change in atmosphere. His gaze then fell upon a magnificent, ornate building in the distance, prompting him to ask what it was. She identified it as the Grand Cathedral of Sandrique's religious school, the sole religious institution in the royal capital. He inquired about the curriculum taught at such a school. She explained that its teachings encompassed medical techniques, holy magic, and healing magic, emphasizing that healing magic, in particular, demanded specialized training. He registered his surprise at this information. She continued, revealing that Nana, the vice leader, had also graduated from a religious school, though a different one. She further elaborated on Nana's formidable reputation, stating that rumors placed her abilities above even the captain's. Nana, she explained, possessed the rare talent of mastering both healing and holy magic, a combination found in extremely few individuals. Alan considered the situation, realizing he still hadn't spoken to the vice captains. Camille, however, reassured him that it couldn't be helped as both of them were busy. He then acknowledged that because Raphine disliked men, it was probably best to maintain their current distance, though he believed she didn't truly mean her aversion. Moments later, Alan shifted the conversation, asking Camille what kind of school she had attended. She looked up, surprised by the question. She explained that she had attended Lyethil Magic Academy, describing it as a regular, lower-class school for commoners. Alan, recalling a past lesson, questioned if there was a class hierarchy within the magic academies. Camille confirmed his suspicion, detailing that the amount of magic power determined one's status, with royals above nobles and nobles above commoners. She clarified that high-class magic academies were for nobles, while commoners attended lower-class ones, and emphasized that the N5 academy they were about to visit was a particularly elite institution. Alan absorbed this information with a soft exclamation of understanding. He realized this system was a form of magic supremacy, where the lineage of powerful sorcerers was enhanced to give birth to even stronger ones, explaining how the Chinese kingdom had grown and evolved through such practices. As they continued their journey, Camille suddenly exclaimed, pointing ahead, that they could now see the academy. Alan, however, still found it difficult to fully grasp, remarking that it didn't quite feel real, as such elite institutions had nothing to do with commoners like them. They finally arrived at the N5 Magic Academy, a colossal structure that resembled a grand castle. Alan, overwhelmed by its sheer scale, wondered why everything around them was so immense. He then approached a guard, politely inquiring if his companion could also enter, as he possessed a promica. The guard confirmed that entry was possible and instructed Alan to present his right hand. Alan, slightly confused, complied, and a faint glow emanated from his wrist, where a magic item was secured. The guard explained that the item was a magic artifact for security purposes and advised them to be careful, warning that guard would intervene if they caused any trouble. Alan, still bewildered by the glowing object, wondered aloud what it truly was. As they walked through the academy grounds, Camille remarked on how truly amazing it was, completely different from Lyethil. Alan, still observing his surroundings, agreed with her assessment. He and Camille stood before a grand structure, and she pointed, explaining that it was the famous Lion Dormitory, a place traditionally reserved for royals for generations. He then inquired about the person they were scheduled to meet today. Camille responded that it was Ray Castiano, the same individual who had been her customer at the bazaar the other day. As he spoke the name, Camille suddenly froze, her expression unreadable. She turned to him, her eyes wide with surprise, and asked him to repeat the name. He calmly reiterated that it was Ray Castiano, the eldest son of Marquis Castiano. Upon hearing the confirmation, Camille's composure shattered. Her eyes closed for a moment in despair, and then she abruptly turned and dashed away, leaving him bewildered. He quickly reached out and grabbed her arm, demanding to know why she had ties to such a great noble, reminding her that he had already explained the situation. She struggled against his grip, insisting he release her. Still struggling, she frantically explained that the Castiano family was one of the 3 great magic families in society. She warned him that if a commoner mage were to simply go and meet him, they would be killed for being disrespectful. He, however, dismissed her fears, telling her she was overthinking it. Overwhelmed, she cried out in despair, realizing she had been tricked, and vehemently declared her absolute refusal to go. With a dejected expression, she quietly thanked him. He then clarified that besides the Lion Dormitory for royals, there were 3 other dormitories, each associated with one of the 3 great noble families. Since Ray was from the Castiano family, she should proceed to the Great Eagle Dormitory. Still visibly distressed, she attempted to leave, but Alan reminded her that she lacked the necessary promica for this restricted area and would face arrest. She conceded his point. She continued to express her profound fear, murmuring that meeting the heir of a marquis was far too overwhelming. She would have been more comfortable encountering someone of a knightly or even a nearly fallen baronial family. Meanwhile, Alan was being escorted through a lavish mansion by a polite butler. The butler confirmed his identity as Sir Alan, stating they had been expecting him, and directed him to a room where he was to wait for Lord Ray's return. Alan silently resolved to apologize to Camille later. Moments later, Alan and Camille found themselves in a waiting room. Camille appeared noticeably pale and distressed. He inquired about her well-being, but she quickly dismissed his concern, insisting she was fine. She continued to assert her composure, though her internal thoughts revealed that her soul had nearly slipped from her body. Alan, surprised by her candid admission, reacted with concern. Suddenly, the heavy door to the room swung open with a loud, distinct sound, startling Camille, who gasped in surprise. Alan's gaze immediately shifted towards the entrance. Through the doorway stepped Ray Casciano, who greeted them casually, remarking that it had been some time since their last encounter at the bazaar. He reassured them, stating there was no need for tension as he was the one who had extended the invitation. Alan, bowing respectfully, thanked him for the invitation. Ray Casciano then walked past Alan, his eyes fixed intently on Camille. Alan watched him, a subtle tension building in the air. He stopped directly in front of Camille, who kept her gaze lowered. Ray then turned to Alan, inquiring about the identity of the person beside him. Alan hesitated for a moment, before introducing her simply as his friend. Alan stood dazed, a look of uncertainty clouding his features after introducing Camille as his friend. He found himself under an intense glare, his heart pounding as he wondered if he had committed some grave error. He felt singled out, silently pleading for Camille's assistance, but she remained unresponsive, seemingly overwhelmed by the situation. As he processed the tension, Ray Casciano offered him a gift, explaining that these were special sweets prepared specifically for their meeting, unavailable at the shop due to storage constraints. Alan, intrigued, inquired about its contents. Moments later, a butler entered, carrying a large, covered tray. Alan clapped his hands together, a spark of anticipation in his eyes. He then inquired if the tart needed slicing. Ray Casciano quickly assured him it was already portioned, remarking on how swiftly everything had been prepared. The grand reveal presented a magnificent fruit tart, a sight that made Alan exclaim in delight. He thought it resembled a precious jewel and felt immense satisfaction that Ray Casciano seemed to enjoy it, acknowledging Akira's recommendation for such a special and thoughtful gift. Still beaming, he turned to Camille, urging her to enjoy the tart while it was cold, suggesting they eat before talking. However, he noticed her extreme pallor and stillness, wondering if she had completely succumbed to her anxiety. Ignoring the frozen Camille, Ray Casciano then formally introduced himself, stating his name and his current academic standing as a first-year junior high student. He then introduced the person beside him as his cousin, Chris Elisa. Chris, meanwhile, was internally celebrating, confirming her earlier suspicions and reveling in the fact that this was the most exquisite and delicious treat she had ever encountered. Alan, internally astonished by Ray Casciano's casual demeanor towards the heir of a marquis family, was abruptly told by Ray that he was annoying and should remain silent. Ray observed that Alan, usually composed, had never behaved in such a flustered manner. Ray then turned his attention to Chris, admonishing her not to lie and implying she possessed another name. He elaborated that as commoners, both Alan and Chris only had given names, whereas he, as a noble, possessed both a given name and a family name. Therefore, he concluded, Chris must still have one more name, leaving Alan utterly shocked by the revelation. The truth of Chris Elisa's identity was laid bare. She was Chris Elisa Cain-Lees, the very princess of this kingdom. The presence of Chris Elisa Cain-Lees, the second princess of the country, caused a stir, prompting Alan to wonder why she was there. The Marquis's son, however, seemed to find amusement in the situation. The Marquis's son continued, explaining that Chris's father had been directly integrated into the royal family through marriage, and his magical prowess rivaled even that of the head of the Casciano family. He then clarified that despite her branch family origins, Chris held a right to royal succession because she was the awakened one from the royal lineage, possessing a magical power that surpassed even the previous kings. Alan, still processing, echoed the term, the awakened one. The Marquis's son smiled, then asserted that even among commoners, individuals existed who possessed immense magical power regardless of their lineage. He then pointed directly at Alan, declaring, just like you. Alan visibly gulped, his expression a mixture of shock and apprehension. Alan pondered the nature of these awakened ones, recalling that the Zain religion regarded them as divine children chosen by the Creator God, and wondered what their true essence might be. The Marquis's son continued, explaining that the awakened ones possessed a perception far exceeding that of ordinary people, and admitted to making an unreasonable request, specifically to arrange Alan's meeting with Chris. The Marquis's son concluded that, given their discussion, the princess was likely also a reincarnated individual, making it reckless to speak carelessly about such matters. Alan, his expression now tinged with suspicion, realized that the day's events had been meticulously planned. As Alan grappled with this revelation, He internally questioned his next move, realizing he could not simply remain silent when dealing with nobility, yet unsure of the proper course of action. Chrysalisa stood nearby, seemingly listening intently. Chrysalisa then interjected, looking directly at Alan, and declared that merely being an awakened one did not inherently make someone special. She pointed out that he was in trouble due to an unfounded accusation. Alan, caught off guard, began to respond, but she continued, challenging Alan to consider how such a truth affected him personally, given that reincarnated individuals were few and, even if powerful, typically achieved the rank of a viscount at best. She then directly questioned him. Am I mistaken? Alan remained silent, deep in thought, as Chrysalisa watched him, awaiting his response. He acknowledged the truth in her words, a quiet agreement settling over him. As the conversation continued, the Marquis's son observed Chrysalisa and Camille, remarking that they did not seem like mere children. Chrysalisa, in a moment of playful self-awareness, apologized for any fright she might have caused, but Alan quickly reassured her that it was not the case. Alan, taking a sip of his tea, expressed his desire to regularly purchase product from the Marquis's son in the future, specifically mentioning the sweets from his stall. The Marquis's son then revealed there was one more matter he wished to discuss. The Marquis's son thanked Alan for his interest and, in return for the continued patronage, offered his full support to Alan and his brigade. Alan clarified that he had not yet informed Sayoji of this arrangement and sought confirmation from his captain first. The Marquis's son readily agreed, assuring him that he would personally handle all the necessary documents for the captain. With the meeting concluded, the Marquis's son bid Alan farewell, asking him to extend his regards to the captain. As they departed, Camille appeared visibly dizzy, being led away by a guard. Alan, noticing her state, inquired if it was indeed Camille. The Marquis's son watched Camille, wondering if she would be all right. Still feeling unwell, she murmured that she needed to step outside for some fresh air. Moments later, the door shut, leaving Chrysalisa alone in the room, seated quietly as the Marquis's son stood nearby. From her elevated position, Chrysalisa called out to the Marquis's son, asking if she could speak with him. He readily agreed, revealing that he also wished to converse with her, Your Highness. As Chrysalisa stood in silent observation, the Marquis's son felt a surge of anxiety, uneasy under her intense gaze during their one-on-one encounter. He stood before Chrysalisa, who, before anything else, asked him to lift his bangs. He complied, raising his hand to his forehead and inquiring if that was the desired position, while Alan watched, a question forming on his lips. Chrysalisa's reaction was immediate and overwhelming. She gasped in utter delight, her face flushed with excitement as she exclaimed, calling him Hakuba-kun and declaring him so cool. Alan, meanwhile, remained utterly bewildered by her fervent outburst. She quickly clarified that Hakuba-kun was her idol, a character from the social game, Wonder Stage. She insisted that the Marquis's son was not merely similar to her idol, but his very reincarnation, leaving both him and Alan stunned by the declaration. Chrysalisa continued, detailing the uncanny similarities. His height, his golden hair, his emerald eyes, and even his deep voice were identical to Hakuba-kun. She felt a profound sense that something significant had just begun as the narrative shifted to a memory of a young woman gazing intently at a character on a screen, a memory from a few years prior. The memory continued, focusing on Sakakibara Yuuyuu, a second-year university student who proudly presented an Ida bag she had meticulously crafted for an upcoming concert, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm. Yuuyuu was then seen engrossed in a mobile game, her excitement palpable as she discovered Hakuba-kun's new outfit gacha and event. A wave of worry washed over her as she realized she'd spent all her money on a live show and would need to take more part-time shifts, which would prevent her from participating fully in the game's event. Her friend observed that Yuuyuu was still the same as always, while Yuuyuu, with an innocent smile, playfully suggested they forget about college. Her dedication to her idol clearly overshadowed her academic pursuits. Her friend, concerned, offered Yuuyuu some carriage, noting that she was once again eating bean sprouts to save money. Yuuyuu accepted gratefully, but her friend's expression conveyed a deeper worry about her frugal lifestyle. Her life revolved entirely around her idol, a path she pursued with unwavering dedication. Though she lived frugally, her days were filled with a profound sense of reward. But then, without warning, that life abruptly came to an end. Yui's eyes widened in shock, her expression one of utter disbelief, as if a sudden, urgent command to get up had shattered her reality. She explained that she had obtained wealth, power, talent, and beauty, but only by sacrificing Hakuba-kun's very existence. Alan listened, a look of utter confusion on his face. Tears streamed down her face as she continued, lamenting the painful days that followed, asserting that since then, Hakuba-kun had only existed within her heart. Though she appeared shaky, she declared herself fine now. Alan, still not fully grasping the depth of her words, acknowledged that her past sounded truly difficult. As Alan began to walk away, perhaps seeking to distance himself from the intensity of her confession, she followed close behind, her footsteps echoing his. He tried to clarify, stating firmly that he was not Hakuba-kun. Yet, She dismissed his words, convinced that being sent to this world to see him was an act of fate. Without warning, she suddenly tripped him, sending him sprawling to the floor. He cried out in pain as he hit the ground, while she, now seemingly consumed by an unsettling excitement, drooled slightly and commanded him to stay still. He wondered if some strange switch had suddenly flipped within her. She continued to struggle with him, dismissing his protests about a princess acting in such a manner. She assured him there was no need to worry, as she could easily make any rumors disappear. He, however, insisted that the situation was no joke. He struggled desperately, his thoughts racing. Even as a reincarnated individual, he found himself unable to break free, questioning the mysterious source of her overwhelming strength. With a triumphant grin, she declared the room soundproof, ensuring no one would hear his cries for help. She then bound him completely, asserting that he would no longer be able to move. She explained that her training was perfect, even without experience from her previous life, and urged him to stop resisting needlessly. She suggested he simply count the stains on the ceiling until it was all over. He could only groan in despair. Her grip tightened, squeezing the life from Alan as he struggled against her overwhelming strength, his face contorted in silent agony. Meanwhile, Camille watched the scene unfold, her eyes wide with shock and concern, unable to intervene. Moments later, Sakakibara Yuuyuu remained atop Alan, who lay subdued beneath her, while Camille, overwhelmed by the sudden turn of events, felt a wave of dizziness wash over her. A loud thud echoed through the room as Camille cried out, her voice filled with alarm. Following her outburst, Sakakibara Yuuyuu bowed deeply, her voice filled with genuine remorse as she offered a heartfelt apology. Alan, now free, reflected on how fortunate he was to have Camille's presence, wondering what might have transpired had he been alone. Meanwhile, Sakakibara Yuuyuu chastised herself for losing composure in front of her idol, expressing disbelief at her own actions. He then turned to Sakakibara Yuuyuu, inquiring if she had been reincarnated or merely transferred, noting that their earlier conversation suggested a transfer. She, however, insisted he simply call her Sakakibara, stating it was an order, to which he acknowledged with a quick understanding. Alan pondered the implications of her words, considering the term possession as a possible explanation for her presence. The truth was revealed. Only Sakakibara Yui's consciousness had been transferred to this world, and her memories and personality were now inextricably linked with Chris Elisa's body. Chris Elisa explained that her current personality felt like a blend of both consciousnesses, prompting Alan to question if this meant she now harbored two distinct personalities. She processed the revelation, a faint smile gracing her lips as she acknowledged the title of the strongest otaku girl in the kingdom. It was a strange, almost unbelievable truth. Alan, still trying to grasp the full scope of her explanation, admitted his confusion. He had never encountered a case of consciousness transfer before, finding it surprising and unique. She continued, explaining her social anxieties in this new world. The people here were incredibly attractive, making her nervous to even attempt conversation. This led to rumors spreading that she was a weirdo and bad at socializing, a consequence of her inability to move freely due to her position. Alan listened intently, his thoughts turning to the need for caution. He resolved to keep quiet about Sayoji for safety. He reflected on his own 20 years of normal life, realizing he had never met an awakened individual, and it would be a different story if they were adventurers from the same place. With a slight sway, she concluded their lengthy discussion, expressing genuine pleasure at having met him. Meanwhile, Alan, seemingly overwhelmed by the conversation or perhaps seeking comfort, clung to her side. He readily agreed to speak with her again, not just as a trade partner, but as a fellow Japanese person, promising to send a letter of support to her brigade. She confirmed his promise, then, with a slight stumble, asked for his name again. He clarified that his name was Alan, and Shinjo was also acceptable. Moments later, Alan stirred, his eyes fluttering open. Disoriented, he mumbled, wondering aloud where he was. A voice nearby greeted him, confirming he had finally woken up. Still rubbing his eyes, he recalled meeting Lord Ray and the princess. The person carrying him inquired if he still felt unwell, to which he responded that he was fine. Suddenly, a jolt of realization struck him. He remembered that she still recalled him, and the events of returning to the room, the princess, and Alan himself. The person carrying him chuckled softly, dismissing his recollections. They told him he must have had a strange dream, explaining that he had collapsed shortly after leaving the room. He was still being carried, his mind reeling from the vivid encounter he had just experienced. Zine, who held him, apologized for tricking him and for pushing him so hard that he collapsed. Yet, Alan's internal thoughts echoed a deeper wish. He also wished it was only a dream, even as Zine insisted it couldn't have been real. The memory or dream persisted. Sakakibara Yuuyuu, in Chris's body, playfully pulled at his hair, eliciting a complaint from him. She cheerfully declared her forgiveness and presented this playful gesture as her apology for the day, mentioning the next volume of Koi. Back in the present, Zine scoffed at Alan's lingering thoughts about Koi, dismissing them as mere fantasy. He challenged Alan, suggesting that if he felt well enough to dwell on such things, he could walk on his own. Alan, however, internally acknowledged Camille as his savior, a small price to pay for whatever peace he had found. Still being carried, Alan let out a tired yawn. Zine informed him that Captain Aino wished to see him. Alan, still groggy, simply acknowledged the request, while Zine mused that despite past difficulties, things had been peaceful lately. Moments later, Captain Aina stood before him, her expression stern and direct. She looked at Alan with an intense gaze and demanded to know what on earth he had done. Alan, holding a stack of papers, looked up in surprise, questioning what he held. The documents clearly bore the names of Chris Elisa Kane-Lees and Ray Casciano, indicating their significance. He then explained to Aina that much had transpired, a long story indeed. He presented the papers as proof of support from the second princess and the Marquis family, then asked Aina if this unexpected development was her doing. Aina, however, pointed a gloved finger at him, accusing him of ruining her entire plan. He, in turn, asked if he had truly gotten in her way. She quickly dismissed his concern, stating that he had not ruined anything. Rather, she was thankful. Seeing his confusion, she then inquired if he understood why they had paused their adventurer work. He admitted he did not. Aina continued, explaining that it was crucial to establish connections within the royal capital to ensure a reliable supply chain and secure skilled blacksmiths. She stressed that none of these vital tasks could be accomplished without significant credibility. She elaborated that even for a brigade of their caliber, they could not simply approach the Lord if they were merely operating in a regional city, despite their individual skills. Aina then revealed the harsh truth. In reality, none of the nobles or merchants she had interacted with were decent people. She lamented that even if they managed to make a name for themselves elsewhere, everyone in the royal capital would still look down on them simply because she was a woman, clenching her fist in quiet frustration. Meanwhile, Albert, seated comfortably and smoking his pipe, listened intently. He finally acknowledged her plight, stating that he understood she was asking for his support. Aina, now joined by Sakakibara Yui, offered Albert a share of the money earned from their activities, clarifying the terms of their proposal. Albert, however, inquired about what he would receive in return. With a slight smile, Albert stated that money was regrettably not an issue for him, and he would prefer something else entirely. Aina looked at him, clearly taken aback by his unexpected demand. He continued his demeaning offer, suggesting Aina become his mistress or provide any of her good-looking companions. Aina remained silent, but her companion, Lapine, erupted in fury, calling him a bastard as she slammed her hand on the table. She firmly rejected his proposition, stating she had no intention of selling herself or her companions. She then politely, but coldly, asked him to pretend the matter had never occurred before excusing herself and Lapine. As they turned and walked away, leaving the room, he grumbled to himself about the insolence of these women. Aina sat quietly, reflecting on the incident. Alan, observing her, acknowledged that similar things had happened before, but this was the first time they had been mocked so openly. He found the situation truly horrible. She confirmed his thoughts, explaining that such incidents were not limited to the royal capital, but occurred quite frequently, adding with a clenched fist that it was simply how men were. He considered her words, realizing that this pervasive discrimination was likely the reason her group was composed entirely of women, concluding that they must have endured a great deal. Aina then apologized for complaining so much, acknowledging that such things were bound to happen, even with people like him present. He simply listened, offering a quiet understanding. He then inquired about the man's name, asking if having a family name meant he was a noble. Aina identified him as Alex Barn, the chairman of the Barn Company, clarifying that he was not a noble, but was involved with the struggling Knight family. Alan absorbed this information, stating he would keep it in mind, but then warned Aina to be careful as well, noting that Alex Barn usually ran transportation businesses between the royal capital and surrounding cities. She agreed, acknowledging his concern, and then pointed out that he himself had dark circles under his eyes, suggesting he should take a little break. She sat amidst towering stacks of documents, her quill poised over a fresh sheet, the soft chirping of birds outside a stark contrast to the immense workload that had suddenly descended upon her. Moments later, Lapine burst into the room, her arms laden with even more papers, calling out to her captain. Alan, observing the scene, wondered if the sheer volume of work meant they no longer needed to actively seek connections. As Alan pondered the situation, he suddenly exclaimed that it was perfect. Lapine, startled, questioned his presence, while Aina, looking shocked, realized that a multitude of people now desired to meet with them. Lapine's surprise escalated as she heard the names of the Marquis and the Princess, questioning their involvement. Aina clarified that thanks to Alan's efforts, they had indeed received support from both the Marquis and the second Princess, and the rumors of their backing had spread rapidly. Alan, flustered, internally tried to downplay the situation, insisting that these influential figures weren't just random acquaintances and had simply taken a liking to some of his work. Yet, he admitted to himself that he couldn't fully grasp the situation either. Lapine, still bewildered, demanded a proper explanation from him later. Aina, holding a document, then instructed Alan to handle the incoming guests, telling him he only needed to listen to their proposals while she would sort out the information on her end. He was left dumbfounded, realizing things had taken an entirely unexpected turn as the door slammed shut behind him. Aina, now alone, reflected that Princess Chris rarely made public appearances, which likely meant the sudden influx of interested parties was due to their connection with the princess. Her hand moved across a document as she continued to strategize, realizing this turn of events actually worked in their favor. At this rate, their operational base would be established in no time, and she would need Alan's help once their adventuring activities resumed. Turning to Alan, Aina proposed that he ideally become the brigade's exclusive merchant. He questioned what exactly that would entail, perhaps being in charge of supplies. She explained that since their team primarily handled monster slaying, many requests involved large sums of money. She preferred to sell the monster materials directly, bypassing the guild and wholesalers to avoid unnecessary commissions. She explained that they would maintain their current state for now, as they likely lacked sufficient manpower and experience. He responded, stating it was acceptable and that he was glad to be so busy. She then inquired if he could manage such a heavy workload, assuring him she would ensure they had enough personnel. Alan looked on, his expression thoughtful, as she then addressed him directly. She reminded him of his past words, asking if he recalled saying he felt strange being thanked for actions taken solely for his own benefit. He confirmed her recollection, adding that for her, such actions were simply the duty of an adventurer. She elaborated that while her journey began with the goal of returning to her original world, her motivations had since evolved. Now, she prioritized the present and the well-being of everyone who had stood by her side. He listened intently, acknowledging her words. He reflected that he, too, had much to learn from her. Confirming his understanding, he then offered his assistance, to which she responded that there was no need for concern. Moments later, Kita, looking utterly drained, declared that the ordeal was finally over. Alan stood beside her, equally exhausted. She grumbled about someone still withholding details despite having been told everything. She then mused on the difficulty of dealing with people appearing daily, yet expressed relief that the negotiations were progressing smoothly. She continued, explaining that they had managed to narrow down their options to a few reliable trading companies. At this rate, they might even finish in time for the regular meeting scheduled for next month. Alan, surprised, inquired about this regular meeting, and she clarified that it was where team leaders provided status updates. He acknowledged her explanation, but a sense of unease settled over him as he realized this would be his very first time attending such a gathering. He listened intently as Kita explained that she had been the sole member of the supply team until now, making her exempt from certain duties, but she simply couldn't keep up with everything. He understood her predicament. Kita then asked him if he was good with calculations, noting his usual accuracy. He hesitated, replying somewhat, which prompted her to question his pause. She quickly declared that in that case, she would handle the accounting documents. He chuckled nervously, admitting that he wasn't actually the one doing all the calculations himself. He was getting help from other people. She simply accepted his explanation, telling him she would leave it to him anyway, and then departed, closing the door behind her with a soft slam. Now alone, he extended his hand, a faint glow emanating from it as he prepared to utilize his unique abilities. He sat before a glowing screen, his fingers flying across a keyboard with rapid clicks and clacks. He smiled, relieved, acknowledging the wonders of modern convenience that allowed him to manage the complex tasks. As he reviewed a spreadsheet, he noticed one particular section was unusually expensive, marked at 145% of the budget. He mused that about half of the spreadsheet setup and usage was thanks to Akira. He continued to work, the soft clicks of his keyboard filling the quiet room. He realized the high cost was primarily due to the upkeep of the potions. He reflected on his regular trips to Japan, not just for sourcing products, but primarily to share information and assist with gate research. He then shifted his thoughts, wondering about the potions. He understood that the gate's maintenance was difficult over long periods and prevented the use of other magic. Instead, they were conducting magical energy research using materials he brought from the other world. He continued to review his device, contemplating the situation. As part of that, I brought in herbs and potions. Maybe I'll try listening to their side. Suddenly, a voice startled him, making him wonder if he was being watched. Akira called out to him, asking why he was being summoned. The scene shifted to the Sayuji Group's top-secret research facility, known as the Leaf Institute. There, head botanical researcher Yoshida greeted Alan, informing him they had been expecting his arrival. Alan apologized for the sudden intrusion, but Yoshida reassured him that the timing was perfect as he was just about to provide an update. He gestured toward a tablet. As Alan looked at the tablet, Yoshida began to explain the fundamental workings of potions. He detailed how the solution penetrates the cell membrane, excessively activates the nucleus, and promotes cell proliferation, thereby temporarily replacing damaged areas and accelerating wound healing. Yoshida summarized that potions generally heal wounds by enhancing the body's natural healing ability. Alan, seeking clarity, asked for a simpler explanation. However, Yoshida continued, the genetic information of the herbs used as ingredients was not significantly different from plants found on Earth. Alan pondered this, realizing that if the genetic makeup was similar, then the power of the plant itself was not the sole factor. He wondered what else could be at play. Yoshida confirmed his unspoken question, explaining that an unknown energy commonly referred to as magic, was indeed involved. Yoshida noticed Alan's troubled expression and asked if something was amiss. Alan, however, was preoccupied with the thought that Sayuji and Sakakibara were stronger than him, recalling the world record-breaking results from his physical examination, which Yoshida had already suspected. He observed the potted plant as Yoshida explained that its effect was only half as strong in this world. Yoshida then revealed their success in cultivating some medicinal herbs, a feat Alan found surprising, especially considering the mystery of how a living plant was even brought through the gate. Yoshida elaborated that while establishing a cultivation method would be worthy of a Nobel Prize, most of the otherworld plants could not survive due to the scarcity of mana, making them indistinguishable from ordinary flora. He then shifted his focus, expressing curiosity about the opposite phenomenon. Alan, intrigued, asked for clarification. Yoshida explained that such an endeavor would be challenging, as the plant originally grew in only a few specific locations in the otherworld. Yoshida, now seated, contemplated the possibility of plants from this world retaining mana and the potential effects such a phenomenon might produce. He then turned to Alan, requesting a favor and instructing Tsukamoto-kun to guide him. Alan, feeling a strange sense of familiarity, questioned if he was indeed the one being addressed. The young woman, Tsukamoto-kun, then led Alan and Yoshida through a door, announcing their arrival at the third laboratory. Inside the laboratory, she presented various potted plants to Alan, explaining that these were typical earth plants, specifically chosen for their genetic similarities to medicinal herbs found in the other world. She then instructed him to channel a small amount of magic into one of the plants. He acknowledged her request, admitting he had never attempted such a feat before. As he concentrated, a faint glow emanated from one of the plants, a subtle testament to the successful transfer of magical energy. He confirmed feeling a sensation, but apologized, noting that the magical effect was not visible to the naked eye. Yoshida and Tsukamoto-kun accepted this, and Tsukamoto-kun thanked him for his cooperation, promising to relay the full test results once they were compiled. He readily agreed. He then mentioned that while the magic channeling had shown initial success, there was a chance the mana would gradually dissipate, necessitating further magical applications. Tsukamoto-kun, listening intently, had a question of her own. She shifted the conversation to the finance report, confirming that it appeared to be in order. He seemed surprised, perhaps by the meticulousness required for their regular meetings, which she implied were quite strict. He offered reassurance, telling her not to worry if anything went awry, admitting that he, too, felt nervous. She, however, remained cautious, explaining that her apprehension stemmed from it being her first time, and she wanted to ensure everything was handled correctly. Her gaze then drifted, and she revealed that she had been pondering something else for a while. He noticed the small, rectangular object she held and inquired about it. She simply presented it to him, and he promised to explain its purpose later. She stared at him, a hint of exasperation in her expression, questioning if he ever truly provided a proper explanation for anything. He, however, offered a slight smile, suggesting he believed he did, at least within his own understanding. She continued to stare for a moment longer before looking away, then observed that he had changed somewhat. He, in turn, asked what she meant by that. Lapine, the vice captain, presented the gathered intelligence regarding the dungeons near the royal capital. She announced that several parties would challenge these dungeons in 2 days. As she concluded, Alan prepared to move on to the next team, while Camille seemed to doze off. Meanwhile, Nana, also a vice captain, confided in Alan that ever since he joined, they had received numerous requests from other male adventurers to join their ranks. She explained that they had turned away all of them, as none were qualified, and Alan expressed his sympathy for those rejected. Elsewhere, Aina, with a rustle of her cloak, prepared to make a recommendation, stating that she did not wish to overshadow the current discussion but had someone in mind. Nana inquired about the individual, and Aina revealed it was Diana Ishan, a member of a renowned knight family, possessing a high aptitude for healing magic. Nana seemed to agree that she was the kind of person they needed, but questioned Aina's certainty about her potential. Aina, however, remained convinced that with half a year, she could become incredibly powerful. Nana, with a knowing smile, asserted that she was the only one who had truly recognized Diana's talent, emphasizing that the present moment was ideal for recruiting her. Aina, accepting the terms, confirmed that Diana's conditions would be the same as her own. Nana, pleased, instructed her to proceed with the recruitment. Back with Alan, he continued to review the teams. Camille, startled by a sudden clatter, quickly composed herself and confirmed that due to yesterday's incident, all business negotiations regarding supplies had been settled, and they had even managed to secure a few blacksmiths. She seemed to be struggling to keep up. She, still a bit flustered, then turned to Aina and asked if there was anything else to report. Aina simply acknowledged her. Alan observed Camille, noting that her frantic demeanor reminded him of his own stressful days at the office. Nana, noticing Camille's panic, gently reassured her not to rush. Just then, Aina raised her hand, indicating she had something to report. He turned to Aina, asking for her report. She revealed that after reviewing the brigade's expenses, they had discovered an issue concerning potion maintenance fees. Consequently, he instructed Aina to distribute the relevant information to everyone. She listened intently to Alan's explanation, her expression shifting to one of surprise as she processed the implications of his words. "I see. This is," she murmured, clearly taken aback by the information. He then presented a new type of potion container, a flexible pouch rather than a traditional glass bottle. He explained that, through his connections, he had managed to create this new design, which was both more durable and less bulky than the usual glass vessels. Alan continued, detailing the most useful feature of the new container: its extended shelf life. Due to its unique processing, the potion stored within could last 4 times longer than normal, up to a full month. The surrounding adventurers reacted with audible shock at the mention of such an unprecedented duration, while Alan calmly directed them to read the provided document for further details. The skepticism among the adventurers grew, their murmurs filling the room. They questioned Alan's trustworthiness, dismissing the claim as nonsense, arguing that potions typically lasted only a week and there was no way they could endure for an entire month. Aina, observing the rising tension, stepped forward. She acknowledged their doubts, but firmly stated her belief that Alan would not tell such an obvious lie. With a decisive clap of her hands, she commanded silence from the group, her authority instantly quelling the chatter. She then proposed a practical solution. For the next month, they would utilize both the new and old potion containers, allowing them to verify Alan's claims firsthand. Alan, visibly relieved, readily agreed, expressing his gratitude. Aina concluded the meeting by reminding everyone to disseminate the details to their respective groups, ensuring no one had any further objections. With the meeting concluded, Alan stretched, a sigh of relief escaping him. He felt confident that the potion maintenance costs would now be manageable, and he made a mental note to thank Yoshida and the research group for their efforts later. He then turned and exited the room. His gaze fell upon a single, elegant rose, its petals unfurling delicately. He mused internally, realizing that it all depends on this now, hinting at a deeper significance for the seemingly simple flower. The rose stood alone, its form distinct and captivating. A voice from off-panel questioned its identity, asking, "Is that a rose?" A woman in a lab coat confirmed its identity, explaining that it was indeed a rose, a result of their collaborative development. She further revealed that they had confirmed roses possessed the highest ability to retain magical particles, a significant discovery. She presented her findings, revealing that roses exhibited effects remarkably similar to medicinal herbs. However, her research also indicated that other plants showed concerning signs of being toxic to the human body. Following this revelation, she formally requested Alan to undertake the cultivation of these special roses in the other world. He readily accepted the task, acknowledging the importance of her discovery. Alan understood the implications and decided to prepare a few extra samples, ensuring he had a manageable scope for his work. He then began experimenting, observing a peculiar bluish-purple glitter emanating from the roses. He recalled that Sayoji had previously prevented him from reporting such findings to the lab. He pondered the mutation, wondering if pouring all his magic into the rose would yield quicker results, and mused that the mutation was likely his own fault. Despite the potential waste, he decided to experiment further, hoping the rose could serve as a substitute for medicinal herbs, rather than simply discarding it. As he channeled his magic, the rose began to shine brightly. Moments later, Alan approached May, asking if she would teach him how to make potions. She expressed surprise at his request, but readily agreed, acknowledging his reputation for being knowledgeable. However, she cautioned him that the item in question was not a regular herb. May, intrigued, questioned what he meant by it not being a regular herb. He clarified that it was a type of pseudo-herb. Observing the unique roses, May admitted she had never seen a plant quite like them before. She then playfully remarked that Alan, as always, remained full of mysteries. Alan confessed that he only knew the basics of potions. May, undeterred, declared that with a bit of ingenuity, they would likely succeed and suggested they give it a try, even if it risked failure. She then began her explanation, stating that potions came in 4 distinct colors, each with 3 grades, resulting in a total of 12 different types. She promised to explain it simply. May continued, detailing the effects of each type. She explained that purple potions possess the ability to regenerate damaged body parts, though the extent of the regeneration depended on the potion's grade. She further clarified that the lowest grade, green grade 3, was specifically used for treating minor ailments like chapped skin and bruises. She continued her explanation, stating that they only utilized blue potions and never the green ones, due to Nana's presence. Alan, listening intently, expressed his astonishment at the scope of this information. The conversation shifted to the elusive purple potions, which it was revealed could only be concocted from herbs found exclusively in perilous regions, making them impossible to acquire on the open market. As the pot continued to simmer, she further elaborated that these purple concoctions represented the pinnacle of human alchemical achievement. He affirmed her statement, admitting he had never encountered such a potion. May then turned her attention to red potions, explaining that they were now mere legends, having not been seen for over a decade. She wondered aloud about their properties. The most potent of these, a grade 1 red potion, was said to grant resurrection, earning it the moniker Blood of God, or Ichor. She clarified that even grade 2 red potions possess the power to heal fatal wounds, and apparently had a rejuvenating effect. However, she stressed that no verifiable record of a grade 1 red potion had ever been found. A sudden cough racked her, prompting Alan to inquire about her well-being. Recovering, she explained that such potent potions were originally sacred relics, only discovered in the most challenging dungeons, and had likely been completely plundered over time. With a final stir, May announced the potion was complete. The liquid in the pot glowed a distinct purple, astonishing Alan and Kita. They questioned how she could have made such a rare potion, with Alan wondering aloud about its immense value. The revelation of its potential worth, a staggering 5 million gold, echoed through the air. May, holding the finished purple potion, playfully chided Alan for his lack of common sense, though she meant it as a compliment. He looked on in surprise, while Kita added that even the artificial cultivation of medicinal herbs was considered an impossible feat. She firmly stated that selling such a valuable item casually on the open market was out of the question, as it would undoubtedly cause a stir. However, she acknowledged that simply wasting it was not an option either, suggesting they consider selling it to the guild. Kita, considering the public's perception, worried that people might think they couldn't conduct business properly without the guild's involvement. Alan agreed, adding that not only other merchants, but even the guild staff would likely think the same, and it would ultimately affect Kita's reputation. He concluded that this presented a significant problem. Despite Alan's hesitation, May offered a solution. They could try taking a field trip to the black market in the capital. She reasoned that the black market, after all, was not illegal. She continued, asserting that the team's name wasn't necessary for such a transaction. She warned that if Kita considered this a nuisance, she wouldn't be able to continue in her role. Alan, dumbfounded by May's unexpected maturity, mused that she seemed more mature than him. Meanwhile, May instructed Kita to keep the matter a secret from the other members and ensure Aina accompanied her. Kita, shocked, exclaimed that she was going too, to which May simply replied that it was obvious. Kita, dejected, acknowledged that she understood. May then reminded her of the stakes, stating that a good sale could potentially be worth 5 million, and questioned what the negotiator was supposed to do if Kita wasn't there. Kita, still looking somewhat reluctant, quietly agreed, while Alan, with a decisive gesture, accepted the responsibility, stating he would leave it to her. As Kita looked on, Alan suddenly realized he had forgotten to ask what to do with the 5 potions worth of roses. He wondered what was wrong, a crackling sound accompanying his realization. In a lab, a beaker bubbled over a flame, the liquid inside swirling. The thought echoed that this single potion would be worth 5 million. Alan, dozing off while reading, realized he couldn't ask May for the specific details of the magic rose. He concluded that he would have to make the remaining potions himself. He worked diligently, knowing he needed to complete the task in time for tomorrow's black market trip. He had just added approximately 50 of the remaining magical roses into the mixture, questioning if this was the correct procedure, yet feeling he had no choice but to trust the process. As he observed the concoction in the test tube, a wave of confusion washed over him. The liquid had turned a distinct red, a color he had not anticipated. He stared at the reddish-purple liquid, noting its significantly decreased volume. He wondered if this meant the entire batch was a failure, unable to reconcile the outcome with the expected purple potion. The potion in the test tube emitted a faint tingling sensation, yet showed no signs of evaporation. He found himself utterly perplexed by its properties. He considered discarding the potion, but the thought of the nearby water purification facility and the potential danger to everyone's safety if he were caught made him hesitate. He muttered to himself that it was clearly not purple, and if anyone noticed, it would undoubtedly lead to a major problem. With a decisive gesture, he declared this his last resort. He resolved to bury the problematic potion deep within the wilderness, his foot pressing down on the earth as if to solidify his decision. Silence enveloped the desolate, empty world around him, a vast expanse of rocky terrain stretching under a stark sky. He turned, thinking it was the perfect opportunity to quickly bury the potion and make his escape, but a deep sigh escaped him, betraying his underlying frustration. Suddenly, his gaze was drawn upwards. Above the desolate landscape, a colossal, intricately designed disc-shaped structure descended from the heavens, emitting a powerful beam of light towards the ground, while ethereal aurora-like lights danced across the sky. He stared in stunned disbelief, a single thought forming in his mind as he recognized the impossible sight, an orbital lift. Alan, having just disposed of the unstable potion, was still in the desolate area when Aina appeared, urging him to leave the bad place and go somewhere else. He held the empty bottle, agreeing to bury it. As they moved, she turned to him, her expression concerned, asking if he was all right. He responded with a quiet, questioning sound, his eyes heavy with fatigue. He admitted he hadn't gotten much rest lately, rubbing his tired eyes. Aina, her gaze intense, wondered if his nervousness had kept him from sleeping, then seemed astonished, questioning if he was half asleep. He chuckled nervously, acknowledging her point. She then suggested they train next time, just to be safe, reminding him that he lacked combat experience. With a gentle smile, she reassured him, promising to protect him properly. Still, he remained somewhat nervous, observing her. She, in turn, urged him to hurry, warning that they would be late. He mused internally that she likely believed his lack of sleep was due to nervousness. With a renewed sense of purpose, he resolved to get his head in the game. He confirmed he was on his way, following Aina as she stepped through the open doorway, ready to face whatever lay ahead. At the Royal Capital Black Market, Alan declared his preparations complete. Yet, as he surveyed his stall, he realized there was nothing left to sell but a single certificate and a purple potion, leaving his inventory conspicuously empty amidst the bustling market chatter. Aina, observing the peculiar goods like a special herb and good medicine being openly traded, reminded him that the captain had assured them it was not illegal. Still, she confessed her surprise, having expected a black market to appear far more clandestine. He then inquired what she meant by needing to be careful. She clarified that it was essentially just a market operating outside the government or guild's direct involvement, where everything sold was perfectly legitimate. She continued, explaining that while merchants might charge exorbitant prices far exceeding guild rates, the customers were often just as desperate, and no one would be charged with a crime for being ripped off. Alan, observing the growing crowd and their excited chatter, remarked that it was just about time for the event to begin. Aina, with a slight smile, responded by asking if he looked like someone who was willing to haggle, acknowledging his astute observation. Moments later, a voice boomed, announcing that the doors were now open. The crowd immediately surged forward, pushing and shoving, with shouts of "Everyone, please don't push," and "Out of the way," echoing through the market as Alan and Aina were swept into the chaotic rush. As they navigated the throng, he turned to Aina, his expression bewildered, and asked if the black market was always this overwhelming, noting the clearly excessive number of people. His attention then shifted to a merchant, and he directly challenged him, asking if he was truly claiming his wares were genuine. The portly merchant scoffed, asserting that a certificate like the one Alan held could be easily forged. Alan, however, maintained his stance, insisting that it was indeed the genuine certificate. Another merchant questioned if the item was merely a blue potion, while Alan, clearly annoyed by the customers, thought to himself that they were nothing but trouble. The first merchant then offered 1.3 million, but Alan quickly dismissed the offer, stating that such a price would only be for a grade 1 blue potion, implying his item was far more valuable. He continued his tense negotiation, but the merchant grew increasingly agitated, demanding he either buy or leave. Aina, witnessing the escalating rudeness, interjected sharply, telling the merchant to shut up and stop hindering their business. The merchant, taken aback, reacted with outrage, insulted by her words. As the merchant reached out and grabbed his arm, warning him to be silent, Alan's patience snapped. He swiftly delivered a powerful punch, striking the merchant with unexpected force. The blow sent the merchant sprawling through the air, his body twisting before he landed heavily on the ground, twitching from the impact. Aina watched, her eyes wide with shock at the sudden violence. She stood frozen, a look of profound distress washing over her face as the reality of the situation settled in. Overwhelmed by her actions, she covered her face with her hands, murmuring an apology. Alan, observing her distress, calmly advised her to be more careful in the future. He reiterated that next time, she should leave such matters to him, while a nearby voice lamented the shameful act of an adventurer attacking a civilian. Alan then turned his attention back to the market, noting that potions still appeared to be in high demand, yet no one seemed willing to commit to purchasing his item, despite the guild certificate he possessed. Just as he sighed in resignation, a new figure approached, expressing a clear intent to purchase the item. Alan was pleasantly surprised by the swift decision. The man, introducing himself as Maxwell, explained he had used a few connections to secure the purchase, and then inquired how Alan had acquired such a valuable item. Maxwell then asked if there was a chance the item would be restocked. Alan, however, could not make any promises regarding future availability. Maxwell then presented Alan with a card, stating his name and reiterating his desire to purchase more if the item ever became available again. He reassured Alan that if he brought the item to the guild, they would process the purchase immediately, adding that he was fine with whatever price Alan named. Alan acknowledged his understanding. However, Maxwell explained that the potion itself was subject to significant price fluctuations, noting that its value could easily double during a monster surge or conflict. Alan dismissed the concern, stating it was no problem. He continued, emphasizing the rarity of purple potions, which only appeared once a month, and how many adventurers often gave up when unable to heal their wounds. Maxwell further elaborated that while there were individuals capable of regenerative treatment, they were few, perhaps countable on one hand, making it nearly impossible for a mere adventurer to hire one. Healers, he mused, were probably rare to begin with. Alan, understanding the gravity of the situation, reiterated his earlier statement. If money could overturn the impossible, then any price was a small one to pay. Maxwell then shuddered, recalling a grim incident from the previous month where someone had lost a finger, requiring the affected area to be cut off again before applying the potion. Alan, listening intently, realized that with such a potion, he could heal his own companions. Alan confirmed his intention to keep as much stocked as possible to avoid similar dire situations. Maxwell, in turn, expressed his reliance on Alan. As their conversation concluded, Maxwell casually inquired if something significant was happening that day, noting that everyone seemed to be heading in a particular direction. Alan, looking surprised, explained that an elf slave had reportedly just arrived, though he admitted he didn't know many details. He yawned, then decided to investigate, considering it a social outing. As he walked through the bustling street, a young woman with dark hair walked beside him, and he glanced towards the murmuring crowd. He learned that this country indeed had a slavery system, though it was not as extensive as he had initially imagined. The new girl, standing beside him, expressed her surprise at this revelation. She then pointed to a document, asking about its contents. The paper detailed various aspects of the system, including salary, job conditions, duration, and qualification for those entering into such contracts. The new girl clarified that individuals in this country did not fall into slavery due to debt or crime. This surprised Alan, who questioned if slaves received payment and could even choose their occupations. He then asked her about her origins. She continued, explaining the tiered system. Tier 1 involved dangerous, high-paying work like adventuring. Tier 2 encompassed heavy labor such as farming, and Tier 3 consisted of simple, low-paying chores like housework. She emphasized that mutual consent was crucial for these contracts, which allowed employers to use binding magic for confidentiality and behavioral restrictions. Ultimately, she concluded, these individuals were more akin to servants bound by contract. Alan acknowledged the system, understanding its nature. The new girl added that while much of the work was hard labor, possessing a specific skill could significantly alter one's circumstances within the system. He pondered this information for a moment before turning to Maxwell and inquiring about the rarity of elf slaves. He mused that he wouldn't be surprised if their value was such that they could fetch 10 million a month. Meanwhile, the crowd around them murmured, questioning why an elf would willingly choose to be sold into such a system. As the crowd surged, the new girl warned Alan not to get separated, but he was already being swept away. He admitted he could not see anything ahead due to the sheer number of people. The throng pressed forward with increasing force, accompanied by loud thuds and shouts. The new girl, struggling to keep up, called out to Alan, urging him to wait. Caught in the crush, Alan winced in discomfort, while the new girl, squeezed tightly, wondered how far they had been swept away from their original position. He finally located her amidst the surging crowd, calling out her name in surprise. The new girl, startled by his sudden appearance, turned to face him. The object of the crowd's attention was an elf, standing quietly, her expression tinged with sadness as she held a small book. The new girl, standing beside him, gasped softly, remarking on the elf's striking beauty. He, too, seemed captivated by her presence. He then turned his attention to the displayed contract terms, noting the elf's lack of preference for salary, contract period, or type of work. He found the last term particularly unsettling. The terms of her contract were stark. It required 1 red potion of grade 3 or higher, a rare and potent item. As they continued to navigate the throng, he observed that the elf's companion was also present, and it seemed the elf herself was suffering from some serious injury or illness. Maxwell, having caught up to them, offered further insight, explaining that the elf was traveling across the country to help someone. He then questioned if her worth truly equated to a red potion, acknowledging it was a touching story. He considered Maxwell's words, understanding that this was why she accepted such demanding terms. He wondered if she would truly be treated well for it. Still pondering, he acknowledged the inherent value of the red potion, admitting that in terms of pure monetary worth, it might indeed be more valuable than the elf herself. Yet, he quickly dismissed the notion of simple value. This was not about a price. It was a sacrifice. He worried that, at this rate, the girl would inevitably face a grim fate. He murmurs to himself, contemplating the possibility of creating the necessary potion. If he could make it happen, he thinks it might be enough. The new girl, noticing his sudden stillness, asks what is wrong, as he had abruptly stopped walking. He apologizes, explaining he was merely lost in thought. She looks at him intently, then asks if he is interested in that elf. He quickly denies it, looking away with a slight blush. Maxwell, walking beside him, interjects, telling him to listen. He warns Alan that if he keeps sympathizing with every little thing, he will wear himself out. He then advises Alan to only give his heart to those he can actually save, asking if he understands. The new girl, walking with Maxwell, tells him to hurry up and go home. She then thinks to herself that Maxwell actually says nice things sometimes, even if he didn't need to say it quite like that. Alan clenches his gloved hand, reflecting on Maxwell's words. He acknowledges that Aina probably meant something different, but in a way, Maxwell's advice gave him a push. He realizes this might be a chance, and that he also wants employees who are tight-lipped, like those who handle repackaging and sorting goods. Later, under the moonlight, Alan stands alone, looking up at the sky. He admits to himself that he is not the type to ask for help, but if there is a chance, it is worth trying. The sound of a doorbell, ding-dong, echoes through the quiet evening, accompanied by the buzzing of insects as the camera focuses on a traditional Japanese-style house. An old man opens the door, surprised to see Alan. He exclaims, "Oh, it's Alan, my boy." Alan apologizes for his sudden visit, but the old man reassures him, telling him it is okay and to come in for now. The old man, now holding a tray with freshly picked eggplants, asks Alan if he is sure about something, then offers, "It's been a while. Why not join us for dinner?" Alan, looking slightly flustered, tries to clarify that's not what he meant. Inside, Alan sits formally on a cushion in a traditional room. The old man, observing his posture, asks him what is wrong with the sudden formality. He stood before Genji, his expression a mix of seriousness and slight apprehension, as he began to articulate a formal request, stating that there was something important he wished to ask of him. Alan, with a hopeful expression, inquired of an older man if he might borrow some land. He specified his need was only for a single month. The older man, seemingly unconcerned, granted Alan's request, noting that the land was merely wasteland and questioning if that suited his needs. He then jovially suggested they celebrate with a feast. Overwhelmed with gratitude, Alan profusely thanked him. Having secured the land, he now stood amidst a vast, overgrown field, a straw hat shading his face as he surveyed the challenging expanse before him. He acknowledged to himself that he had indeed managed to borrow a field. As he fretted about his first foray into farming, a young man suddenly arrived on a roaring tractor, apologizing for the delay. He introduced himself as a reliable helper, much to Alan's wide-eyed surprise. Shite explained that he had borrowed the powerful tractor from his parents, who were also farmers. Alan, still somewhat bewildered, inquired further about the impressive machine. The field itself was a formidable challenge, choked with an incredibly dense growth of weeds. Shite observed aloud that it was quite a sight. Alan, with a determined expression, laid out his ambitious strategy. He intended to plant 4,000 roses the following week, aiming for a harvest within a single month, even though the seedlings were still mere buds. He detailed a precise schedule, allocating the first 10 days for field preparation and planting, the second for mana infusion, and the final 10 for harvesting and potion making, all to coincide with the elf slave's departure from the royal capital. Shite, observing the overwhelming density of the weeds, stared intently at the field. He silently conceded that the task ahead would prove to be exceptionally challenging. He pointed towards a specific area in the field, questioning Alan on his apparent knowledge. Alan, however, responded with unwavering confidence, assuring him they would find a way to manage, which clearly surprised Shite. His finger traced a clear demarcation line in the field, where the types of weeds abruptly shifted, distinguishing the forest's edge from the cultivated land. He grasped the implication of this subtle, yet crucial detail. He listened intently as Shite explained that the absence of troublesome weeds like cedar or sasa on the field side indicated it had likely been used not long ago. Shite added that these specific weeds tended to multiply when the soil was tilled. Despite the uncertainties inherent in farming, Shite declared that it was better to simply begin rather than overthink. He then squeezed the handle of his weed whacker, activating the machine with a sharp whir. The two worked tirelessly, first clearing the dense overgrowth with scythes, then loading the cut vegetation onto a truck. Shite later took the wheel of a tractor, efficiently tilling the vast expanse of land. As the sun began to set, they paused, having made remarkable progress for the day. Alan, still marveling at their accomplishment, confessed his disbelief at how much they had achieved in just one day. Shite, in turn, praised him, remarking that he had been practically a human tractor, a feat he attributed to Alan being a farmer's son. As they sat resting amidst the cleared land, Alan turned to Shite, inquiring what he meant by his earlier comment. If this is okay. Shite explained that Genji-san had been genuinely happy about the land being used and had given Alan full permission to do as he pleased with the wasteland. However, he still harbored a lingering doubt, noting that it seemed someone had been using the land not long ago. Alan, his expression one of surprise, pressed him further, asking for clarification on what he meant by the land finally being used the way it was meant to be. Shite elaborated, explaining that Genji-san owned a significant amount of land, and that such ownership often came with its own set of struggles. He then wondered aloud if the land had been inherited. Alan thanked Shite for taking days off from his part-time job to help, admitting he had initially thought Shite would only assist for a single day. Shite, however, offered to return tomorrow for Genji-san's sake, despite acknowledging the harsh reality of the work. Considering the extensive list of remaining tasks, digging up roots, clearing trash, plowing, soil analysis, applying fertilizer, and ridge formation, Alan politely declined Shite's offer. He stated he couldn't possibly trouble him further and would handle the rest of the work on his own. He apologized profusely, promising to compensate for the fuel and equipment expenses later, but clarified that he could only offer assistance for a couple of days. His companion, Shite, looked at him with a slight frown, asking why he was being so distant. Shite then explained that he was helping simply because he wanted to, because they were friends. Alan looked surprised, then thoughtful, as Shite pressed him, asking if he had never heard the word friends before. Alan, a hint of regret in his voice, admitted it was his first time meeting someone like Shite in Japan. Shite sighed, calling Alan stubborn, and reiterated that if they were friends, he would want to make it up to him even more. With a sudden, beaming expression, Shite declared he had a small favor to ask, prompting Alan to inquire what it was. Shite then revealed his true request. He wanted Alan to join him in spreading the gospel of anime, and mentioned someone named Koi. He mused aloud if he was the only one not getting anything out of this situation. Time passed, marked by the gentle chirping of birds and the delicate flutter of a butterfly near a budding rose plant. Eventually, Alan stood amidst a field of newly planted roses, reflecting that he had somehow managed to finish the extensive planting. Akira approached Alan, bowing slightly as she sincerely apologized for the trouble, explaining that she had ultimately received help from many people. She insisted that merely preparing the roses was enough, and apologized again if she had been unreasonable, citing it as a personal matter. Alan quickly reassured her, denying any unreasonableness. As a person handed her a bottle, Akira asked if they would be willing to provide any extra red potions, expressing gratitude for any assistance, but only if things went well. She turned to Alan, a thoughtful expression on her face, and began, Akira-san, there's something I want to ask. He looked up at her, inquiring, what might it be? Akira's gaze hardened slightly as she confessed, I tried to report the magic roses to the Leaf Institute, but Sayoji stopped me. She then pressed him. Do you know what her intentions are? He gasped in surprise, a question mark appearing above his head, and quickly apologized. It's not that I'm trying to force you to answer or anything. Saudi. Akira, however, calmly replied, I don't mind. I'll have to speak about it sooner or later. After all, with that resolve, she began to elaborate. First, let me explain the Sayoji main and branch family. She added, you might already be able to guess at this point. She continued, explaining that Ryujin-sama, the head of the main family, and Okai-sama, the head of the branch family, were rivals. On the surface, they're close cousins running the same company. She clarified. Alan, listening intently, asked, both families are on bad terms? She confirmed his suspicion with a nod. Yes, of course. Then, shifting the topic, she asked, do you remember the man when you met with Ryujin-sama? That bodyguard, huh? Akira revealed the truth. He was a spy sent by the branch family. She continued. After he disappeared, information that could only have been known by someone present at that scene was leaked. She further explained the intricate family dynamics. At their core, they're rivals, but they manage the business together. She clarified that there's no significant difference in wealth or influence between the main and the branch family. It's just a matter of whether they're from the direct lineage or a side branch. Akira then detailed their respective domains. Ryujin-sama is involved in industries such as automotive, real estate, and information technology. She stated. However, the work they handle varies depending on what they are in charge of. She added, Okai-sama primarily oversees advanced technology sectors such as genetic research. Alan's eyes widened in understanding as he processed the information. I see, so that's how it is. He murmured. He then concluded, in other words, the Leaf Institute is under Okai-sama's jurisdiction. Right now, the branch family's dominance is a troubling factor. He sips his drink, a conflicted expression on his face, admitting he feels conflicted but also owes a debt of gratitude to the Leaf Institute. He coughs, asking Akira to clarify what she meant by otherworldly industries. She explains that this incident will likely intensify the power struggle to gain control over these very industries. She elaborates that these businesses involve materials and magic from the other world, some valued at hundreds of billions, with many companies already established. He, overwhelmed, ponders his duty to supply everything and questions if it is truly acceptable. She then quickly dismisses her previous statement, remarking that on second thought, it's fine. He sighs, wondering how he could have been so carefree. He realizes he never imagined such intricate power struggles were unfolding behind the scenes and concludes that Chairman Ryujin and his subordinates must have shielded him from it, which he considers a fortunate circumstance. She then points to a location, revealing it as the cultivation site for magic roses. He asks for clarification. She muses that if it is a village society closed off from the outside world, controlling information would be simpler. He shivers, visibly anxious, prompting her to quickly add that she was only joking, though his expression appears far too serious. He, now fully grasping the situation, declares his decision to establish a cultivation base for magic roses in Japan. She further informs him that potions are also highly sought after on the black market, suggesting that if their plans succeed, they could secure a high, steady income. He confirms his understanding, noting that the preparations will span several months. He then stresses the critical need to keep the existence of the elf a secret. She offers to share more information, mentioning that she also learned a great deal from Akira-san about the Sayoji family circumstances. He, however, declines, and she acknowledges his decision. She looks downcast, acknowledging his decision, and internally resolves that the only thing she can do now is believe in her father. Alan turned his attention to a new matter, as a hand presented something to him. More importantly, take a look at this, a voice urged him. He observed the plant, questioning if it was a magic rose, but the response indicated it was not. He then wondered if merely exposing it to magic was insufficient for it to mutate, to which Aina confirmed that she had tried, but it had not mutated as expected. Aina considered the implications, realizing that if such a simple method could yield herbs strong enough for a purple potion, there would be no way for them to become so highly valuable. She concluded that the key must lie with individual magical attributes. However, she then questioned Alan, asking if he possessed any usable magic. He admitted that he had a feeling something was off, and that normally transferred or reincarnated individuals were supposed to possess a skill in elemental magic affinity. Alan confessed his ignorance, stating it was the first time he was hearing about such a concept. Aina stared at him, pondering if he didn't seem to have any extra attributes, wondering if it could be an unconfirmed one, or perhaps the effect of his unique skill. Aina then agreed to inform him if she discovered anything further, turning to leave. Alan, left alone, continued to observe the magic rose, realizing that the moon gate allowed living plants to pass through. He pondered the true nature of this power. He remained deep in thought, his gaze fixed on a plant. Moments later, he walked away from the grand building, his footsteps echoing softly. He resolved to begin other preparations, beyond just the red potion, acknowledging the complexity of his current task. He mused to himself, acknowledging that his current endeavor might not proceed without complications. As he approached the grand door, a maid opened it, greeting him warmly and inviting him inside. He expressed his gratitude. Moments later, having entered the room, he thanked Chrysalisa for making time in her busy schedule to meet with him. She, in turn, smiled gently and inquired about the reason for his visit. Chrysalisa questioned Alan about the concept of an elf slave, finding it reminiscent of a light novel. He admitted that despite his initial desire for a quiet employee, he simply couldn't ignore her plight. She then inquired why he maintained such a distance from her, to which he nervously swallowed. Chrysalisa remarked that she had expected as much, before shifting her focus to a more pressing matter. With a subtle but palpable aura of menace, Chrysalisa instructed him not to avoid her too much, claiming it only made her more excited. He, still visibly nervous, could only manage a hesitant agreement, noting the serious expression on her face. Moments later, Alan presented her with a small box, announcing it as today's souvenir. She looked at him with a surprised expression, questioning if he was truly sure about the gift. Chrysalisa graciously accepted, thanking him profusely and apologizing for any trouble. He responded that he had always received much support from her, and today's gift happened to be cream puffs. She took the cream puffs, stating she would enjoy them with her family. As she spoke, she effortlessly used ice magic to create a convenient storage box for the pastries. Alan watched, amazed, realizing the magic was quite versatile, useful for both storage and attack. Alan then pressed her, asking what she meant by her earlier comment that it wasn't magic. She clarified that she had only momentarily lifted a small portion of the magic she constantly used to suppress her own immense power, demonstrating by causing a crack in the ice. He noticed his tea had also frozen, a clear sign of her incredible magical prowess. Chrysalisa sighed, admitting that the only flaw in her convenient power was that these unintended effects occurred whenever she lost focus. She then acknowledged that she had gotten sidetracked and reminded Alan that he had a favor to ask regarding the elf slave. He confirmed, revealing his intention to prepare a house for her in the royal capital. Chrysalisa questioned the necessity of a separate house. Alan explained that the situation was not so simple, as the elf also had a companion. Chrysalisa then asked if the elf was not permitted to stay in the brigade's own house. He explained that if the brigade were to operate abroad and it was discovered they harbored a slave, it could pose a significant problem. Chrysalisa acknowledged this, confirming that indeed, there were countries where slavery was explicitly banned. She understood his meaning, realizing he wished to keep the elf's presence a secret from everyone to avoid any potential trouble. He added that, beyond the brigade's reputation, he personally might face severe consequences, even losing his head over the matter. Chrysalisa, in a fleeting thought, pictured the elf slave, wielding a knife with a menacing glare. With a gentle touch to his teacup, he conceded, agreeing to find a safe place for the elf. He then warned her that dangers would likely arise from this point forward. She looked at him, questioning what dangers he foresaw. He clarified that those who had failed to acquire the red potion might attempt to steal the elf if they discovered her whereabouts. Chrysalisa suggested that they should be secure as long as they cast a powerful magical ward, capable of detection and counterattack magic, though she noted such a ward would be quite costly. He agreed to the plan. Then, with a serious expression, she revealed she had one more request. He understood her reason for seeking him out. She desired a different name, explaining it was the only way to truly hide from both the public and the brigade. He mused that such a task seemed incredibly difficult. Chrysalisa, with a confident smile and a decisive gesture, asserted her authority. In this country, the royal family stood above the law, meaning nothing was impossible for her. Alan, taken aback, questioned if it was truly acceptable. She confirmed it was, adding that he had been a great help to her, partly as an apology for their initial encounter. The arrangements were finalized, with a voice of authority stating that a merchant guild card would be issued along with a registry, to be used whenever needed. The recipient expressed gratitude for the assistance. She then apologized for taking up his time, but he quickly assured her it was no trouble at all, expressing his pleasure in being able to help. He promised to repay the favor, offering a warm, genuine smile. As he departed, she watched him go, a small, almost divine smile gracing her lips before she composed herself and quietly excused herself from the room, the door closing with a soft slam. Meanwhile, Alan stepped out into the open air, his thoughts turning to the next phase of their plan. He knew the truly important part was just beginning. His residence was now surrounded by an imposing fence, clearly marked with no entry signs. Surveillance cameras meticulously scanned the perimeter, their mechanisms whirring as they tracked every movement. A guard post, manned by a vigilant figure with binoculars, ensured no unauthorized access. Alan, observing the extensive security, expressed his surprise at how elaborate it had become. Chris Elisa, standing beside him, calmly explained that it was all for security. She reiterated her earlier warning. The matter could not be allowed to leak out. She acknowledged that the measures might seem a little exaggerated, but insisted they were quite normal given the circumstances. He conceded that he was fine with it, but she continued, explaining that it was only a matter of time before the existence of the other world became public knowledge. These precautions were also for his safety, and she urged him to understand. Alan then questioned if everyone in the village was scared, but she calmly assured him that in that case, there was no problem. She explained to a small group of villagers, including a man, a woman, and a child, that she had informed them Alan possessed special cultivation techniques. Furthermore, entry to the area was prohibited due to a joint development project with the Sayoji group. She had certainly not said anything wrong, and the villagers, though surprised by the new restrictions, had accepted her explanation. Alan understood he would need to provide his own proper explanation to them later. Meanwhile, the roses in the special cultivation area were thriving, expected to be ready for harvest in a week. Their final development, however, still depended on the infusion of magic. As Alan and Chris Elisa observed the plants, he confirmed that he had been infusing magic at twice the usual frequency and duration, believing it would be sufficient. She simply acknowledged his efforts. Chris Elisa then inquired if he would mind her watching as he poured in the magic. He readily agreed, preparing to demonstrate the process. As Alan began to infuse the roses with his power, a soft, ethereal glow emanated from the plants, surprising Chris Elisa. She questioned the light, to which he admitted he didn't fully understand it either, noting that the roses had recently started to glow. She pondered if analyzing the glowing roses might allow them to detect the magic power. He, however, stated it was outside his area of expertise, and he couldn't be sure. Despite his uncertainty, the researchers from the Sayoji group, who were present, reacted with immense excitement, eagerly photographing and documenting the glowing plants, exclaiming their wonder. Chris Elisa observed their enthusiasm, reflecting that these were still the researchers the Sayoji group was proud of, even if she hadn't explicitly told them about the magic. She thanked him for his efforts and assured him that they would handle the cultivation management, promising to be present when it was time for harvest. Later, as Alan walked near a building, Kita approached him, holding out a letter. She announced she had finally found him and presented the letter. She handed Alan a letter, explaining it was from a real estate agent. Aina, standing nearby, inquired about its sender. Alan noted the letter concerned a house, arriving sooner than he had anticipated. Aina reacted with a surprised gasp, prompting him to confirm his intention to purchase a house in the near future, as he planned to move. She questioned the suddenness of his decision, asking if it wasn't too soon. He explained there was no particular reason, but he thought it might be a good opportunity for a new member. Aina, recalling the princess and the marquis's heir, wondered how he had accumulated so much wealth. His thoughts, however, were consumed by a headache, finding her perspective on wealth unimaginable. Aina then asked if he had informed the captain of his plans. He replied that he had not yet, intending to tell her only after the purchase was complete, given the many uncertainties still present. Before she could say more, he swiftly departed, declaring he was off to inspect the property immediately. Meanwhile, Aina remained in the bustling town square, her mind filled with questions about Alan's sudden and mysterious actions. Moments later, Alan arrived at a charming house, where a maid greeted him, apologizing for the wait and presenting the property. He gazed at it with a delighted expression, proclaiming it his temporary dream home. The maid invited him inside, detailing the house's layout, which included a living room and 7 other rooms, among them a study. She also highlighted the excellent natural light and ventilation throughout the residence. As he stepped further inside, Alan observed the pristine condition of the interior, noting that it looked new, exactly as one would expect from a house chosen by the princess. The tour continued, revealing a modern bathroom equipped with a sleek shower and a pristine sink, reflecting the overall newness and quality of the property. He looked surprised as Sakakibara Yuuyuu explained the features of the new house, specifically asking if the large fixture could be a bath. Yuuyuu confirmed it was indeed a bath, then demonstrated how to use a special stone to boil water with magic, making the process effortless. He expressed his happiness at this convenience. Still marveling at the advanced civilization, he wondered if the toilet also possessed similar sophisticated features. His expectations, however, proved to be too high, as he slammed the door shut in disappointment. A moment later, Yuuyuu called out to him, her voice gentle, as he stood lost in thought. He quickly apologized, explaining his curiosity about the capacity and realizing he was acting as he had when first arriving at an inn. Yuuyuu, however, pointed out that he had already thoroughly checked everything. He then affirmed his decision to proceed, and Yuuyuu confirmed she would prepare the necessary documents. With a sigh of relief, he sat down on the porch as Yuuyuu departed, the door clicking shut behind her. He reflected on how far he had come, noting that he hadn't even managed to create the red potion yet. He then pondered the possibility of living alone in this new house if his current plan were to fail. He stood gazing out at the open sky, birds soaring freely above. He knew there was no point in dwelling on certain thoughts now. He would simply have to wait until next week for developments to unfold. Nevertheless, his mind continued to wander, a specific question forming in his thoughts as he sat by a window. He wondered what kind of person she was trying to save. Aina presented Alan with a guild card, fulfilling her promise. He accepted it with gratitude, acknowledging her help. He inspected the card, his brow furrowing in confusion as he read the name inscribed. Hakuba Issei Merchant, Krems. She explained with a slight chuckle that it was a rare chance to use a different name, suggesting that using Hakuba-kun's name would be nice. He, however, was more focused on the card itself, demanding to know what it was. He questioned the meaning of Krems, acknowledging that he had asked for the card, but clearly perplexed. Aina, sensing his confusion, cleared her throat and offered to explain everything in order, as there was much to tell. She began her explanation by asking if he was aware that guild cards possessed various ranks. She clarified that both merchants and adventurers shared the same 5 ranks: bronze, silver, gold, and platinum, with platinum being the highest standard rank. She continued, detailing how status was determined. For merchants, it was based on the size of their company and the amount of tax paid to the guild and the country, while for adventurers, it involved subduing powerful monsters or conquering unexplored dungeons. He interjected, stating that he had never been taught about a purplish-red card at the guild, implying the card he held was beyond the standard ranks. Aina confirmed his suspicion, explaining that guilds only had the authority to appoint ranks up to platinum. He asked for further clarification, his expression one of growing bewilderment. She then revealed that, in reality, a special rank existed beyond those known to the general public. She explained that Krems was the highest rank, named after the rarest or in their world. Normally, this prestigious rank was only awarded to major trading companies that had made significant contributions to the kingdom, and it required the royal family's direct approval. Alan listened, utterly stunned by this revelation. He reacted with an astonished gasp, realizing the immense implications of holding such a card. Aina further emphasized its significance, stating that it was the same rank held by the chairman of the Margus Trading Company and the head of the Peddlers Guild, both of whom were the biggest trading companies in the country. Princess Chrysalisa approached Romani's Faye Cainlees III, the king of the Cainlees kingdom, apologizing for the intrusion. He, a man of regal bearing with a full beard and crown, inquired if something was amiss, observing her slightly troubled expression. She then presented a peculiar, round sweet to him, explaining that she had acquired some special foreign sweets and wished for him, her dear uncle, to try them. The king, along with Yoshida, observed the item, noting its stone-like appearance, but surprisingly lightweight, as Chris identified it as a cream puff. He took a bite, his eyes widening in surprise as the light texture and fragrant aroma enveloped him. A sweet, soft liquid melted in his mouth, a sensation he had never experienced before, clearly delighting him. Still savoring the taste, the king asked how she had managed to obtain such a remarkable treat. She, in turn, inquired if it had suited his taste. Chris then revealed that the sweets came from a merchant she had recently taken under her wing. She admitted that she actually had a favor to ask regarding the matter. She requested that this merchant be granted a family register under a different name, along with a certain level of status. The king, intrigued, gave her permission to proceed with her explanation. The king and Yoshida listened intently as Chris elaborated. She explained that while the merchant dealt in rare items, their operation was not large-scale. She stressed the inherent danger. A merchant lacking power could see their relatives threatened and taken hostage, and others might even attempt to seize their assets by force. An imagined scene depicted Alan and a pastry chef being cornered by shadowy figures, highlighting the vulnerability. Chris then proposed her solution, granting the merchant the Krems rank. Both the king and Yoshida reacted with utter shock, exclaiming the name of the highest rank. Chris, with a confident smile, affirmed that Krems was indeed the appropriate choice. Yoshida, still processing the implications, voiced his concern to the king, suggesting that such a hasty decision to grant the Krems rank might provoke objections from others. The king, however, dismissed his worries, stating his intention to distribute the sweets to his wife and daughters, confident that after they tasted them, no one would dare object. The king mused that while they were just sweets, they were also much more than that. He concluded that it was better to treat the merchant generously rather than risk their exceptional talent being lost to another country. The power of the cream puffs, which had just secured the Krems rank, was undeniable, destined to bring their creator into the spotlight whether he wished it or not. Princess Chrysalisa, observing the situation, felt things had spiraled beyond control, while Alan looked on with concern. She tried to explain her intentions to Alan, stating that she only wanted him to achieve the silver rank. He questioned her reasoning, but she insisted that with the Krems rank, he could borrow unlimited funds from the guild without collateral, making land acquisition much easier. He acknowledged her point, but still seemed hesitant. Despite his initial reservations, Alan considered the implications, realizing that given the significant matters they would soon be dealing with, such a flashy and high-ranking guild card might indeed prove beneficial. Chris, still feeling she had been unreasonable, apologized to Alan, offering to fulfill any request he might have in the future as thanks for his help, not just with the house. He tried to dismiss her apology. Her eyes widened in surprise as she processed his words, realizing he had just offered anything, and quickly clarified that her offer was only for something she could purchase. He chuckled, agreeing to her condition, and then, changing the subject, mentioned he had something for her, rummaging for it. She looked on, curious about what he might produce. He then presented a magnificent costume, explaining that since she would be using a fake name, she would also need a disguise. He apologized for not knowing her exact sizes, but assured her he had tried it on himself to get a general idea. Chris, taken aback, asked him to wait and put it on, even if just a sleeve. Later, with careful precision, she pruned a rose, snipping a stem with a delicate hand. As she continued her work, Alan approached, apologizing for making her help with the harvest. She reassured him it was fine, explaining that the researchers present had volunteered their time. He then noted that the plants needed pruning, and she added that if everything proceeded smoothly, they might even manage another harvest before the year's end. She concluded that they would need to discuss future plans with Genji-san. She continued to discuss the ongoing negotiations for land acquisition and the future plans for potion production, even considering the creation of the rare red ones. Alan, for his part, expressed his gratitude, though he admitted that being overly prepared felt somewhat unsettling. However, she quickly dismissed the need for further discussion, urging him to prioritize their immediate task. They needed to finish the harvest by noon, and there was no time to waste. To Alan's surprise, not only was the harvesting complete, but the loading was also finished. The glasses man, brimming with extreme enthusiasm, declared all preparations were done and insisted they hurry to the lab. As they stood before the laboratory building, she offered a slight apology for their researchers' intense eagerness. Alan simply acknowledged her words, ready to proceed. Inside the lab, the harvested materials were meticulously processed. A large machine pressed the raw ingredients, extracting a dark liquid, while the glasses man, now wearing a mask and goggles, carefully observed a test tube filled with the concentrated essence. His professionalism was evident as he worked with serious focus, carefully dripping a precise amount of the essence into a beaker. The liquid transformed, becoming a distinct red potion. Chris watched, recognizing the color and the substance taking form. Alan, observing the large quantity of potion being produced, wondered aloud if the process was progressing as intended. However, despite witnessing its creation, Chris found it hard to believe the potion's legendary properties. She apologized to Alan, admitting her difficulty in fully grasping that a substance could truly regenerate vital organs like brains and hearts. Alan knew the legend spoke of Grade 1 potions, capable of resurrecting the dead and granting immortality. Yet, even with such tales, his research through historical records had only yielded vague information, with no concrete proof of their actual existence. He continued, explaining that Grades 2 and 3 were similarly shrouded in mystery. In the past, these potent substances were excavated only once every few years, and the authorities of that era had monopolized most of them. She looked intently at the newly created substance, seeking clarification on its properties. She understood it possessed a rejuvenation effect, but wondered if there was more to it. He explained that the potion had rarely been used for medical treatment, especially in cases of severe brain or heart damage, where it was often too late. However, he confirmed that records existed of individuals living up to 150 years, suggesting the rejuvenation effect was indeed genuine. He conceded the point, but she quickly interjected, arguing that if even purple potions could regenerate limbs, it would not be surprising for the red potion's legendary properties to hold true. He maintained a cautious stance, expressing concern about giving false hope. He reiterated that the efficacy of red potions for treatment remained uncertain, with no concrete evidence to support their use in such capacities. He simply stated his disagreement with the glasses man's cautious assessment, his expression firm. He then considered Chris, acknowledging that she, too, must be aware of the risks involved. Yet, he concluded, even a glimmer of hope was preferable to utter despair. He then shifted the conversation, wondering aloud if Akira had experienced similar feelings during Sayoji's absence. The glasses man concurred, acknowledging the parallel. He offered an apology for the demanding schedule. Chris, in turn, expressed regret that they hadn't been able to conduct more extensive studies on the potion's effects, which might have provided a greater sense of reassurance. The production of the red potion had yielded more than anticipated, resulting in approximately 2 bottles, exceeding the initial plan of just over 1. She observed the potion being carefully bottled, remarking on the seamless flow and pure color, noting how advanced science and technology could appear indistinguishable from magic. He agreed, holding one of the ornate bottles, acknowledging the truly magical nature of their accomplishment. He arrived at the black market, a place teeming with activity and the murmur of countless transactions. Leaves swirled around him as he moved through the bustling crowd, his hooded figure drawing little attention amidst the chaos. He observed the scene, noting that, as expected, the black market remained incredibly busy, even on its final day of operation. As he continued to navigate the crowded stalls, he overheard a conversation. Someone remarked that, even for an elf, the terms for sale were proving too strict to actually complete a transaction. He considered this, recalling that some companies had offered and prepared several grade 3 purple potions, yet their proposals had still been rejected. This reinforced his belief that the red potion was, after all, an absolute necessity. Moments later, he arrived at a large tent marked Slave Market. A young man with a friendly smile greeted him, asking how he could be of assistance. He stated his intention to purchase an elf slave. The merchant, in turn, sought confirmation, asking if he had read the purchase conditions. He affirmed that he had, of course, read them. The merchant then offered an apology, acknowledging that it was only natural for them to be on guard given the circumstances. The merchant then requested to see his guild card. As he presented it, the merchant's eyes widened in shock, gasping at the sight of the card. The merchant, clearly flustered, abruptly declared, "Please wait a moment," before rushing away with a clatter. After a brief, frantic absence, the merchant, Bank, returned, bowing deeply and profusely apologizing for the wait. He then declared that he, Bank, would personally handle the matter, acknowledging the incredible significance of the situation. The merchant, Bank, extended a welcoming hand, inviting his client to follow him. He expressed his anticipation for their continued collaboration, though a subtle reservation lingered in his tone. He then offered his deepest apologies, admitting he did not know his client's name despite their status as a Krem's rank merchant, and inquired about the timing of their promotion. Alan acknowledged this, explaining that he had recently acquired a client who was a member of the royal family, which likely led to his new status. As the conversation continued, Alan stated his intention to purchase the elf. He then asked if Bank happened to possess a red potion. Bank, reaching into a container, confirmed that he did. Bank, surprised, asked if he could hold the potion, to which Alan readily agreed. Bank carefully took the potion, remarking that despite being a merchant for a long time, it was his first time seeing a real one. He stared at the item, clearly astonished. Bank then requested to conduct an appraisal of the potion, to which Alan, with a casual gesture, gave his permission. While Bank proceeded with the appraisal, he offered a brief explanation about the elf slave, whose name was Yuuyuu. He detailed her abilities, which included reading, writing, and simple arithmetic, as well as proficiency in magic and archery. Alan, reviewing a document, noted that he had red elves possessed extensive knowledge of plants, confirming it to be true. Bank added that Yuuyuu also had vast knowledge regarding plants, making her suitable for roles as a servant, an adventurer, or even a researcher. Despite these varied talents, Alan considered that for those who purchased an elf woman, there was typically only one purpose. He mused that in the future, Yuuyuu might be able to assist him with the cultivation of magic roses. Bank, with a knowing smile, continued to list Yuuyuu's attributes, stating that, as an elf, she held the highest level of value. He specified her age as 18, unmarried, and a virgin, and mentioned that he was looking for a tier 3 work contract for her. Bank then asked Alan if he knew the market price of slaves, specifically mentioning Lord Hakuba. Alan admitted he did not know the details. Bank, with a surprised expression, repeated the word slave as if in disbelief or confusion. The value of slave contracts varied greatly. The most expensive, such as a wife or girlfriend contract, could reach into the millions. Elf slaves, capable of reading, writing, and arithmetic, were approximately 5 times more valuable than regular slaves. A Tier 3 contract for light work, for instance, would command a salary of several 100,000 gold per month. He acknowledged Alan's statement, confirming his understanding that while it would take time, Alan could indeed create the red potion again. Bank, however, still seemed to grapple with the sheer value of the red potion itself. Bank then elaborated, explaining that while selling products was undoubtedly important, maintaining strong relationships and connections held equal significance. He questioned Alan, asking if such an arrangement wasn't ultimately beneficial for him as a merchant. Just as Bank finished speaking, an assistant approached, announcing that the potion appraisal was complete. Bank promptly inquired about the results. The appraisal confirmed it. The potion was indeed a genuine red grade 3. Alan expressed his relief at the successful appraisal, admitting he would have been at a loss if it had failed. Bank, still processing the revelation, conceded that he had no doubt about the potion's overwhelming aura, but remained astonished that Alan truly possessed a red potion. The distinct sound of footsteps echoed through the room. A young elf woman, Yuuyuu, was then presented. Bank introduced her, and an assistant acknowledged her presence. With the appraisal complete, Bank eagerly suggested finalizing the contract. Alan remained silent, observing the proceedings. Bank clarified his role, stating he had acted as an intermediary at various slave markets at Yuuyuu's request. He emphasized that all expenses had already been covered, meaning he was not entitled to any additional portion. Furthermore, Yuuyuu carried no debts, so Lord Hakuba would not need to make any further payments. Yuuyuu confirmed that she had indeed handed over the red potion as part of the required terms. She added that Lord Hakuba had already accepted these terms, and the appraisal was now fully completed. She expressed her astonishment that they had actually managed to find a red potion. She confirmed she had no issues with the contract. The merchant, Bank, explained that Lord Hakuba desired a Tier 3 work contract, and considering the red potion's handover, a monthly payment of 350,000 gold would be appropriate. However, she internally mused that she didn't even need money, willing to sacrifice herself if it meant truly obtaining the red potion. As she looked away, slightly startled, Alan acknowledged her feelings but pressed on, asking what would become of the person she was with if she didn't earn money. She then revealed that the red potion was intended for that very person. Bank then interjected, explaining that the individual Yuuyuu referred to was named Arya Fainchis, a high elf, one of the rarest races in the world. Alan, taken aback, questioned the term high elf. Bank clarified that high elves were akin to royalty, possessing immense magical power and a special aptitude for magic, and their scarcity made Alan's unfamiliarity understandable. Yuuyuu confirmed that regular elves served the high elves, and she herself was sworn to Lady Arya's side. Alan then inquired about the precise nature of her relationship with Arya. Bank continued the explanation, revealing that Lady Arya had been unconscious for over a year, having sustained severe injuries in a battle against monsters. Alan clenched his fist, pondering Arya's unusual background. Bank elaborated that her injury was also rumored to be the result of a scheme by pure-blood supremacist elves. He explained that elves were divided. Some feared a curse of blood too thick and sought to integrate Lady Arya into the royal family, while others, the pure-blood supremacists, aimed to eliminate her to preserve the current bloodline. He added that high elves were naturally born from two high elves, implying Arya's unique situation was due to atavism. He remained silent, absorbing the gravity of the situation. Bank then warned that it was possible the pure-blood supremacist elves would launch another attack in the future. Bank, however, offered a measure of reassurance, stating that if Arya remained quietly in the royal capital, there should be little danger, especially since the Forest of Gaja, the elves' homeland, was located over 2 countries away. Alan acknowledged the warning, stating he would keep it in mind as Bank held the finalized contract. He reflected on the unexpected revelations, particularly the complex issues between high elves and other elves. He wondered if it was part of Yuuu's nature to withhold such critical information until after a contract was made, but ultimately, the most important thing now was Arya's recovery. He concluded that ensuring her recovery without complications was the immediate priority. Under the pale moonlight, the grand mansion stood, its windows glowing faintly, a silent witness to the unfolding events within. Inside, Alan observed Arya Fainchis, noting that she hardly appeared to be someone who had been unconscious for an entire year. Yet, he sensed an incredible amount of magic power emanating from her, a sensation similar to what he had felt from Sakakibara. He questioned Yuuyuu, asking if this was truly less than half of Arya's original power. Yuuyuu confirmed it, explaining that despite her appearance, Arya's magic power was indeed less than half of what it once was, as she continuously consumed it just to stay alive. Yuuyuu further clarified that while Arya's current magic power was not comparable to Sakakibara's, it was still several times greater than Sayoji's. As the preparations continued, Lord Hakuba approached Alan, asking if he was truly certain about proceeding. Alan, resolute, affirmed his decision, granting permission to continue. With a soft clink, Alan stirred the red potion in a beaker, its dark liquid swirling. Yuuyuu watched intently as he prepared the potent medicine for her master. Yuuyuu carefully took the stirring rod, now coated with the potion, and gently brought it to Arya's lips, administering the life-saving liquid. Alan and Yuuyuu remained by Arya's bedside, watching over her as the clock on the wall steadily marked the passage of time, awaiting any sign of change. He stood by Arya's bedside, watching intently as Yuuyuu administered the red potion. Lord Hakuba and his servant observed from a distance, the servant questioning if the potent elixir was failing to work. The moment stretched into an agonizing wait, both Alan and Yuuyuu's faces etched with concern as they continued to watch the unconscious Lady Arya. The only sound was the relentless ticking of a nearby clock. Then, a subtle tremor ran through Arya's hands, a faint twitch that quickly gave way to her eyelids fluttering open, revealing her light-colored eyes. She lay there, disoriented, her gaze slowly sweeping across the room before settling on Yuuyuu. A soft, questioning murmur of Yuuyuu's name escaped her lips. Arya's eyes, now fully open, welled with tears as Yuuyuu, overwhelmed with emotion, gently called out her name. A wave of relief washed over the assembled crowd as May exclaimed her gratitude that Lady Arya had awakened. Others murmured their disbelief at the miraculous recovery, while Alan watched Arya, who was now openly weeping. As the room filled with joyous exclamations, Lord Hakuba, accompanied by his servant, began to quietly withdraw. His servant questioned his departure, but Hakuba simply stated he would return later, not wishing to disrupt the celebratory mood. The servant, still bewildered, asked Hakuba about the outcome, but he offered only a cryptic farewell before disappearing through the doorway, leaving his servant behind. Moments later, Hakuba's servant, now back among the others, excitedly announced to Alan that their little Arya had truly woken up, suggesting they spread the news to everyone. The servant then explained to Alan that despite Arya's typically calm and reserved demeanor, she was, in fact, quite good with people. He continued to observe the reactions of Alan and Yuuyuu, noting that their expressions clearly conveyed their understanding of the situation. As he stood there, Arya Fainches approached him, her footsteps light, and she inquired if he was the one who had purchased Yuuyuu. He confirmed her query, and Arya, with a heartfelt expression, thanked him profusely, stating her gratitude from the bottom of her heart. As Arya spoke, he internally pondered her age, noting that Yuuyuu was the same age as his own child, which made him feel a paternal connection. He reassured himself that he had no intention of harming Yuuyuu, though he knew she would not be able to return to her hometown for some time, now destined to be a slave. He then revealed a surprising truth to Arya, admitting that he too was a former slave. Arya reacted with a startled, "Huh," as he chuckled softly, asking what she thought of that revelation. He continued, explaining that differences between countries or cultures were not as significant a problem as many people might believe. Arya, with a gentle smile, acknowledged his point, then shared her own experience, revealing that her husband was her former master from when she was a slave. She then posed a rhetorical question, suggesting that encounters could be just as wonderful as the hardships one faced. She then looked out, reflecting that while Yuuyuu was an elf and she herself was human, she was confident that Yuuli's inner strength would enable her to survive in the future. Meanwhile, elsewhere, Alan adjusted his hair, realizing he needed to prepare the house before the arrival of two individuals. A leaf drifted past him, rustling softly. Suddenly, Akira appeared before Alan, remarking on the coincidence and stating that she had heard he recently bought a house. Alan's heart pounded as he wondered if his secret had been discovered, but he quickly reassured himself that she likely hadn't found out everything, as she then asked if he had properly bought it in full. He explained his preference, stating he did not particularly care for the items found in this world. Akira, listening intently, then inquired if the furniture for the new house would, in fact, be sourced from the other world. Following her question, she then made a direct request, asking if it would be acceptable for her to visit his house. He looked back at her, clearly taken aback by this sudden proposition. Alan stood outside his house, questioning Akira about her presence, asking why she was stuck in the team house and specifically in his home. She offered a brief apology, explaining that she hadn't had a proper place to relax recently. As they stood outside the house, Akira thanked him and apologized for the intrusion. Alan, with a welcoming smile, assured her it was his house and she should make herself at home. He then turned to leave, telling her to enjoy herself, but she quickly called out, asking where he was going. Despite his attempt to leave, Alan found himself in a chibi-like form, conceding that if she wasn't bothered, it was fine, but he still seemed hesitant. Akira, also in a chibi form, firmly demanded that he show her around, reminding him that as the owner, he needed to stay. Yielding to her demand, Alan led her inside, pointing out the living room. He noted its emptiness, a fact Akira readily agreed with. She then turned to him, her expression serious, stating she had one more request. Surprised by her words, Alan's eyes widened as he repeated her request to open the moon gate. She clarified, asking him to connect it to her previous house in Tokyo. Following her unusual instruction, Alan opened a door, a look of confusion still on his face. Akira then calmly stated that Kamiki Akira would handle the rest. As he looked into the newly opened space, Alan's confusion deepened, prompting him to ask what exactly this was. Akira, however, simply brushed him off, promising to explain later, and then pointed to a table. Meanwhile, in a different location, Kamiki Akira sat calmly, sipping tea. She remarked with satisfaction that, as expected, Akira, the one with Alan, did a good job. Back at the house, Alan found himself apologizing to Sakakibar Yui for disturbing her relaxing time. With the room now inexplicably furnished and sparkling clean, Alan turned to Yui, demanding she explain everything to him immediately. She simply acknowledged his request. Alan, still reeling from the sudden transformation of his home, heard Akira declare that the new furnishings were a gift for his new home, even if it wasn't a newly built house. He questioned her, asking if she intended to bring so much home and if she was going to live there. She quickly retorted that she was not a pushy wife. He looked around at the newly furnished room, filled with a sofa, a bed, and other items, and asked if all of these were part of the gift. Akira confirmed it. He thanked her profusely, wondering silently about the immense cost of everything. Akira, meanwhile, assured him of the quality, stating that all items were signature pieces from trusted brands, and encouraged him to let her know if he needed anything else. As she offered him a cup, he politely declined, explaining that he couldn't drink coffee. She seemed surprised, asking if she had been too meddling, but then revealed her intention was to provide a coffee machine as well. He decided to try the coffee anyway, taking a sip from the cup. To his surprise, he found it unexpectedly good. He mused that it was probably thanks to his new body, then changed the subject, asking Akira if she believed taste buds change with age. She turned her back to him, her long hair flowing, and asked if he was the one who bought the elf being sold at the black market. He paused, a drop of water falling from faucet, and asked why she thought so. He looked surprised as he took another sip of coffee. She confirmed that everyone in the royal capital knew the elf had been sold, then asked if he was following her explanation. He considered her words, thinking about the handover of the red potion. She continued, explaining that normally an elf would not sell on the same day, no matter how strict the terms. But this particular elf had not sold even after a month. The reason, she revealed, was that even merchants with shops in the royal capital couldn't provide the price for her. He realized that if they had the elf, they likely wouldn't have been able to afford her. She continued, explaining that for the past few years, no red potions have been excavated or brought into the royal capital. While it was possible they were brought in secretly, she believed that if such information were completely blocked, the country itself would likely be involved. He then revealed that he had recently learned of someone who managed to artificially cultivate herbs to produce purple potions, a feat previously considered impossible. He wondered if it wouldn't be surprising if that same person also succeeded in making a red potion. She acknowledged his point, stating that she already had an inkling something was going on. She then added that he had been spending his magic power to the limit for the last month. The narrator explained that half the value of a red potion lay in how difficult it was to obtain, being a sacred artifact excavated from high-difficulty dungeons. These artifacts were likely cleared out during past dungeon explorations, making any future excavations seem hopeless. Understanding the rarity, he stated that because of it, trading the elf slave was worth the effort. However, she countered that if someone could prepare such a potion by themselves, its value to that person would not be much. She added that she knew his personality to some extent and was not trying to criticize him. With a sigh, he surrendered, admitting that everything she said was exactly right. He then expressed shame for causing trouble due to his lack of influence. Her hand clenched as she stated that if she had the power and reputation to keep others in check, he wouldn't have needed to act in secret. Or at the very least, he wouldn't have needed to ask her for advice about it. He reacted with surprise, trying to interject that she didn't need to worry, as it was his own personal matter. However, she firmly asserted that he was an important member of the brigade, and protecting its members was her duty as the captain. He internally questioned being a member of the brigade, having been sure she would be disgusted by his purchase of slave. She then turned away slightly and apologized, stating she was no longer concerned about the matter. She continued, asserting that since the other person involved was of the opposite sex, Alan should rely on her if any problems arose. That was her only condition. Meanwhile, in a different location, a hooded figure, Lady Arya, stood between two other cloaked individuals, holding a glowing orb as a ritual commenced. One of the cloaked figures confirmed the readiness to proceed. With the ritual complete, the contract was finalized. Lady Arya, now unhooded and smiling, declared her job there was also finished. As the contract concluded, the cloaked figures prepared to depart in a carriage. One of them, Lord Hakuba, expressed his gratitude to Alan for everything he had done, while Alan, still hooded, admitted his initial poor impression of slave merchants had changed. After the merchants departed, Lady Arya, now fully revealed, bowed deeply to Alan, calling him master. She expressed profound gratitude, stating that her debt to him was something she could not repay in a lifetime, and looked forward to being under his care. He quickly interjected, startled by her formality, asking her to simply call him Alan, or Hakuba as his alias, and insisted she did not need to be so formal with him. She then observed him, tapping her chin thoughtfully, and declared him quite handsome for a human. Alan, flustered, panicked, and reiterated that she should speak in whatever way she found comfortable. She clarified further, explaining there was no need for such deference as she was born no different from a regular elf, and moreover, they had no contract between them. This made Alan wonder if, given her royalty, he was the one who should be paying her respects. He, however, remained focused on her past, acknowledging the incredible amount of magic power she possessed, even though he had expected it. He wondered aloud what kind of monster could have injured her so badly. He mused to himself, looking up at the grand building, that he would like to hear more about it someday. He watched as Lady Arya, captivated by her new surroundings, exclaimed that the house was truly incredible. Akira, however, quickly intervened, reminding Arya to remove her shoes, a custom Arya found to be a strange cultural practice. Despite the initial confusion, Arya's excitement was palpable as she prepared to explore. Alan offered a deep apology for the cultural difference, but Akira reassured him, stating it was fine and encouraging Arya to proceed with her exploration. During her exploration, Arya discovered a peculiar device and inquired about its nature. Alan explained it was a portable electric power source, capable of generating electricity. Arya reacted with surprise to the concept of electricity, a term unfamiliar to her. Alan admitted he had only recently learned about it himself, assuring her it was not dangerous. Suddenly, Akira called out the name, Yuuyuu. Moments later, Arya found herself on a plush couch, delighting in its softness. She exclaimed with childlike wonder how amazing and fluffy it felt. As Arya continued to explore with unbridled enthusiasm, Alan observed her with a gentle smile. He expressed his contentment, noting that both Arya and Yuuyuu seemed to be doing well. Arya's curiosity remained insatiable. She continued her thorough inspection of the house, opening cupboards and drawers. 10 minutes later, her exploration showed no signs of slowing. Alan, observing her relentless search, gently suggested that Lady Arya did not need to inspect every single storage space. Arya, however, insisted that she was still only 15 and that her actions were simply not adult-like, to which Alan countered that 15 was indeed an adult age. As the conversation about her age continued, Aria's cheeks flushed slightly. Just then, a loud growl emanated from her stomach, betraying her hunger. Despite this, she stubbornly declared she was still not done exploring. Alan seized the opportunity, suggesting it was about time for dinner. Akira agreed, playfully remarking that Aria's hunger was proof of her full recovery. Aria, however, vehemently protested, insisting that this was not the case. A feast of various dishes, both traditional and modern, lay spread across the table, promising warmth and satisfaction. Alan, observing the eclectic spread of Japanese and Western cuisine, remarked that while everything looked delicious, the dishes didn't quite seem to go together. As they settled down to eat, the elven princess apologized for making Alan prepare everything, believing it should have been her duty. He, however, dismissed her concerns, explaining that these were merely leftovers and she shouldn't worry. He then introduced a dish of seasoned raw fish, salmon carpaccio, explaining that eating raw fish was a cultural practice in his hometown. He offered it as a rare opportunity, but assured her she wasn't obligated to try it. As the two elven women hesitated, he suddenly realized his potential mistake, wondering if elves were, in fact, vegetarians. Despite his concern, both Arya and Yuuyuu took a bite, their eyes widening in surprise and delight as they declared the food delicious. Later, feeling completely full and content, Arya relaxed on the couch with a stuffed rabbit, marveling at the strange yet delicious combination of foods, including rice. Alan, pleased she enjoyed it, then offered to prepare a bath for her, reassuring Yuuyuu that it was fine for her to take it easy on her first day. As Arya rested, Yuuyuu reflected on their situation, concluding that they had indeed been bought by a good human, though she acknowledged it was still too early to be entirely certain. Yuuyuu gently nudged Arya, who was still resting, asking if something was the matter. Arya, stirring, murmured the word slave. Arya, now fully awake and visibly distressed, reacted strongly to the term, her small hands clenching as she expressed her displeasure. Her distress lingered, but Arya found a small comfort in the realization that Alan had, in hindsight, proven to be a good person. Clutching Yuuyuu close, Arya reflected that if Yuuyuu had been purchased by a cruel individual, she might have regretted ever awakening. Yuuyuu, in turn, softly addressed her as Lady Arya. Yuuyuu, with a determined smile, promised to do her best, but Arya, still looking troubled, sternly warned her never to do something like that again, demanding a firm promise. Suddenly, Arya's eyes widened as she tapped her fingers, a thought striking her. She had almost forgotten something important. Just then, Alan appeared, his voice cheerful as he offered them an after-meal dessert. Both Arya and Yuuyuu looked up at him, their expressions now softened with contentment. Later, outside his new home, Alan stretched, enjoying the peaceful chirping of birds. He opened his mailbox, discovering a letter inside. He mused that it was indeed good to have his own house. Alan examined the envelope, uncertain of its contents or sender. The seal on the letter, however, clearly bore the name, Rei Casciano. As Alan prepared to depart, Arya, with a bright smile, urged him to return home quickly. Beside her, Chris, with a more serious demeanor, instructed him to do his best in his duties. He apologized, acknowledging that staying home all the time must be boring for her, but Arya quickly countered, stating it was far more enjoyable than when she had been hiding in the forest. She then asked him to endure the current commotion a little longer. He then bid farewell to the group, including Arya, Chris, Nana, and May, as he prepared to leave. Arya, in a playful chibi form, mentioned her formidable task of reading all the manga in the study, to which Alan simply acknowledged, finding it a good arrangement. As he departs, Alan reflects on his current responsibilities, noting that he presently holds 3 main jobs. His first role is as a member of the Dawn Moon Brigade, where he is primarily tasked with arranging supplies and managing accounting. He continues, describing his second job as the brigade's merchant. Despite being an iron-rank beginner, he operates with a degree of independence, dealing with various imported goods from Japan, such as sweets and books. His third and most ambitious role is as Hakuba Issei, a Krems-ranked merchant. In this capacity, he plans to create purple potions using magic roses as the core ingredient, intending to market them to adventurers who require the restoration of severed limbs. Later, he encounters someone greeting them with a casual, "Yo, long time no see." He is greeted by Rei Casciano, who apologizes for bothering him during his busy schedule, but expresses that it is good to see him again. Rei then states he has something important to consult with him about today, prompting Alan to inquire about the nature of the consultation. Rei then reveals that the merchant in charge of the Great Eagle Dormitory is stepping down. He explains that in this academy, each dormitory maintains its own store, receiving product from various companies. Because of this, Rei thought to recommend Alan as the successor. Alan, taken aback, acknowledges the offer, but expresses concern that handling the daily necessities for a massive academy with thousands of students might be difficult to manage on his own, though he would do everything he could. Rei then presses him for his thoughts on the proposal. He listened as Rei Casciano clarified his request, assuring him that he would not ask for anything unreasonable. Instead, he sought Alan's expertise in handling entertainment and luxury items. Alan, still processing the scope of the offer, inquired further. Ray then explained that his subordinates and younger brother had thoroughly enjoyed the trading cards Alan had sold previously. He wished to purchase similar items from him wholesale. Understanding the nature of the request, Alan confirmed its feasibility. A relieved smile spread across Ray's face as he expressed his gratitude. He confessed that his younger brother, Rowan, was particularly obsessed with the trading cards, often throwing tantrums daily for new packs, which had caused him considerable trouble. With the agreement settled, Ray extended his hand, stating that he would be relying on Alan from that moment forward. Alan met his gaze and firmly shook his hand, sealing their new business arrangement. Later, Alan found himself alone, deeply engrossed in studying a book. He meticulously turned a page, his expression one of intense concentration. Suddenly, a small, curious face peeked over the counter, startling him. It was Yuuyuu, the elf slave, who asked what he was doing. He explained that he was studying the mechanics of the trading card game. Her eyes lit up, and she eagerly declared her desire to learn as well, prompting him to offer her some cards. Yuuyuu held the cards in her hands, her eyes wide with wonder and sparkling with excitement. She exclaimed that they were truly amazing. He began to explain the game's fundamentals, detailing that it involved building a deck and engaging in duels. He further elaborated that there were 7 types of card rarity, with the rarer cards possessing greater strength. He then suggested they learn the intricacies of the game together. Alan continued his explanation, describing how character cards possessed attributes such as race, cost, attack power, health, and skills, while magic cards had their own distinct effects and costs. However, Yuuyuu, with a confident smirk, misinterpreted his words, believing that the stronger her cards were, the stronger she herself became. Alan realized with a sigh that she hadn't understood a single thing. He gently tried to correct her, explaining that it wasn't about individual strength, but about balancing the cards, drawing an analogy to how a hamburger tastes better when paired with curry. Yuuyuu, still looking bewildered, simply acknowledged his words without truly grasping the concept. Alan continued to patiently instruct Yuuyuu on the intricacies of the trading card game. As she called out his name, he offered her a pack of cards as a reward for her assistance, prompting her to eagerly request some for herself as well. He then found a moment of peace, enjoying the quiet as he tended to his hobby of gardening. Someone nearby, perhaps sensing his calm, inquired if there was anything they could assist him with, to which he clarified that gardening was merely a personal pastime. As he considered the logistics of his new merchant role, he realized that once the initial stock-taking was complete, he would need Yuuyuu and Aria's help. The packaging, specifically the cardboards and vinyls, would require replacement. He knew he would have to study the business more thoroughly to handle it officially moving forward. Meanwhile, he arrived at the Academy luggage inspection area, a bustling checkpoint where various individuals and guards processed incoming goods and personnel. He approached the inspection counter, where a guard, after a brief check, granted him passage. Alan offered his thanks before proceeding further into the Academy grounds. He surveyed his surroundings, trying to orient himself and locate the Great Eagle dormitory. Just then, a young man approached him, introducing himself as Minor from the Student Life Department of the Great Eagle Dormitory. He explained that they had been expecting Alan, having been informed of his arrival by Lord Ray. Minor then led Alan to a designated area, indicating that it would serve as a shop for future product deliveries. Alan acknowledged the information, understanding his new operational base. As Alan began to unpack, Minor observed a box filled with sweets, remarking that he had never encountered any of Alan's products before, his expression a mix of curiosity and slight bewilderment. His curiosity piqued. Minor inquired about the contents of another box. Alan revealed it contained a card game known as trading cards, explaining that their introduction was a personal request from Lord Ray himself. Minor's eyes widened in understanding, realizing the true reason behind Lord Ray's recommendation. Alan, seizing the opportunity, offered him a free sample of the trading cards, leaving Minor surprised and intrigued. He pondered the implications of his new venture, realizing that even if the trading card packs were a bargain from the student's perspective at 3,000 yen, building a full starter deck would still cost a significant 50,000 yen. He wondered if the cards would truly be that popular. Minor, holding one of the cards, then inquired if there was a suggestion box, explaining his desire to hear people's opinions. Alan confirmed that they did indeed have one. Minor then offered a reassuring statement, claiming that if it was Alan, everything would be fine. Alan, confused by the remark, questioned what he meant. Minor clarified that the previous owner had completely ignored student requests, but since he was backed by a powerful noble, they couldn't push the issue too hard. He concluded that it was a good thing the previous owner had been dismissed. Alan realized the former proprietor must have had a difficult time. Minor then added a crucial caveat, reminding Alan that while he should keep the suggestions in mind, he didn't need to accommodate every single request, only what he could manage. Alan acknowledged this, promising to keep in mind. Later, Alan was back at his shop, diligently writing the grand dormitory building visible in the background. As he continued his work, counting items and ensuring everything was in order for the brigade, a voice called out, informing him that he had a visitor. He turned to see Cannon, the innkeeper's daughter, who informed him that a student was waiting outside. She added that, by the looks of it, The student was from the Northern District. As the door creaked open, Alan's mind raced, wondering who this student could be. He considered if it might be Sakakibara Yui or even Lord Ray. Cannon pointed towards the entrance, drawing Alan's attention to the young student standing there, awaiting his presence. The new student, a young man, approached Alan and inquired if he was the Mr. Alan he sought. Alan confirmed his identity. The student then introduced himself as Daibro Porthley, offering a deep apology for his perceived rudeness in addressing a noble. Alan, however, seemed more focused on the crest on Daibro's uniform, recognizing its affiliation with the Great Eagle Dormitory. Alan quickly dismissed Daibro's apology, assuring him that he was not the type of person to demand such formality. He then prompted Daibro, indicating that there was a more important request he wished to make. Daibro then revealed his request, asking Alan to sell him a few cross-world packs privately. Alan, however, immediately declined, explaining that he did not engage in private sales. Hearing Alan's refusal, Daibro deeply apologized again, acknowledging that his request was unreasonable, especially after Alan had gone to the trouble of meeting him. Alan reassured him, telling him not to worry. Alan internally mused that this was the first time someone had made such a direct request, noting that they usually reserved allocated slots for special customers. He wondered if others had already reserved the available stock. Alan then informed Daibro that he did plan to sell some of the packs at an upcoming bazaar in 2 days, though he intended to set a purchase limit. Daibro, absorbing this information, inquired if Alan intended to share this news with others as well. Alan confirmed he would answer if asked. A shadow of gloom crossed Daibro's face as he processed Alan's straightforward response, understanding that Alan would indeed share the information. Noticing Daibro's sudden change in demeanor, Alan, with a hint of concern, asked if he was mistaken about something or if there was a particular reason for Daibro's question. Daibro quickly waved his hands, dismissing his reaction as nothing important, calling it truly trivial, though he still seemed to be holding back. He reflected on his origins, explaining that he came from a small barren family in the countryside. He admitted he lacked the magic power or ability typically required to qualify for the prestigious In-5 Academy. Despite his humble background and the challenge of being a transfer student surrounded by the country's top-ranking nobles, he revealed that he possessed an aptitude for a rare magic, which allowed him to enroll half a year prior. He recalled hearing a rumor about trading cards around that time, and began to consider that perhaps they could serve as a trigger to help him get along with everyone. Alan expressed surprise that his efforts had already become such a widespread rumor, then apologized to Daibro for his selfish reason of wanting to quickly master the game to fit in. He then asked Daibro if he had his cards with him, to which Daibro confirmed. Alan, however, found himself in a dilemma, feeling a pang of sympathy and a desire to secretly sell the packs to Daibro, yet knowing he would be in trouble if he didn't stop himself. Alan then asked if he could examine Daibro's cards. Daibro readily agreed, opening a small box to reveal his deck, which he claimed was more or less done, along with some leftover cards. As Alan observed the collection, he noted its impressive quality, recognizing it as a rare assortment of cards. He paused, a thoughtful expression on his face. With a confused expression, Alan inquired if it was a hamburger curry deck, leaving Daibro looking utterly bewildered by the unexpected terminology. Alan explained that Daibro possessed too many powerful, high-cost cards, which would make his early game difficult since such cards could not be used until the second half of the match. Daibro, looking concerned, asked for guidance. Alan advised Daibro that the best strategy was to build his entire deck around a single ace card, demonstrating how even support cards could become useful if they shared the same race, such as the dragon race, as the chosen ace. He smiled, explaining that one of the great aspects of a trading card game was the ability to win through creativity, regardless of a card's rarity. Even with the cards Daibro currently possessed, Alan believed there were plenty of viable strategies. Yet, he quickly added, everything he had just shared was merely information he had read in a book, apologizing for the advice coming from someone he considered newbie. Daibro, surprised by Alan's self-deprecation, asked if he had been too nosy. Alan quickly reassured him, stating that Daibro's words had truly opened his eyes. Daibro then looked down at the cards in his hands, softly uttering Alan's name. He then looked up, a smile gracing his face as he declared his newfound understanding. There were no such things as useless cards. With a renewed sense of purpose, he announced his immediate return to conduct further research, expressing his sincere gratitude for Alan's help that day before dashing off. Alan watched him go, the door slamming shut behind Daibro, leaving him in silence. He then turned, a thoughtful expression on his face, wondering if they had indeed reached a good conclusion. Moments later, Alan sat alone, contemplating his next steps. He considered reaching out to Akira soon to discuss increasing his stock, but realized he still had other, more immediate matters to attend to. He found it surprising that someone like Akira would visit him directly. Outside, a grand, ornate building stood under a dark, stormy sky, as thunder rumbled in the distance and lightning flashed. He then acknowledged his significant debt to Sakakibara and reminded her of his promise to grant her any wish, reaffirming that he was fully aware of the risks involved in this undertaking. He found Sakakibara Yui approaching him, holding out a book. She asked him to purchase it, and though he questioned the request, she reiterated her desire. He ultimately agreed. As he had agreed, she began to explain the nature of the item. It was no ordinary book, she stated, but a forbidden item drawn by fellow enthusiasts, infused with passion and heartfelt wishes. She then revealed its true classification, a BL Yaro Dojin. Alan stared, a flicker of surprise crossing his face as he processed the words, BL Ero Dojin. Across from him, Aina sat with her hands clasped, her expression unreadable, a faint rumbling sound emanating from her direction. She, in a moment of internal reflection, questioned if he truly understood the nature of what she was asking. He, however, seemed unfazed, responding with a simple huh, before dismissing it as not a big deal, asking if they were merely self-published books. Alan then articulated his philosophy, stating that hobbies and preferences were a matter of individual freedom, and as long as they were enjoyed privately, they did not bother him. His words brought a profound reaction from Aina, who, with a thumping heart, declared them to be priceless sacred scriptures. She wondered if even this was enough as a thank you gift, internally musing that she would be fine with something more expensive. She found him commendable, not only resembling Hakobakyun, but also possessing an angelic inner spirit. Still somewhat bewildered, Alan inquired about a request. Aina, clearing her throat, confirmed that he simply needed to retrieve the books that were written there. She then looked at him with a serious gaze, emphatically instructing him to absolutely not look at the content. He, in turn, internally affirmed that he had no intention of doing so. Later, Alan, now outside, contemplated the task ahead. He acknowledged the significant amount of work, but decided to defer it until after tomorrow's bazaar, walking away with a distinct clack of his boots. As he approached the team house, he noticed a large crowd gathered, forming a queue. He wondered why there was such a line in front of their residence. Suddenly, Aina appeared, grabbing his arm with a firm grip. She demanded to know what he was talking about and what he had done this time, her expression one of exasperation. He looked at her, a look of dawning realization on his face, as she clarified that the entire queue consisted of merchants, all of whom claimed to be his customers. Alan, looking down, offered his deepest apologies for keeping the merchant waiting. The merchant, however, dismissed his concern, stating he would deal with the situation for now, and Alan agreed to leave it to him. The merchant then introduced himself, explaining that he hailed from a family that had operated a shop in the royal capital for 5 generations, now conducting extensive business with numerous noble families. He then inquired how he could assist Alan. Alan realized the rumor of his goods had spread far. The merchant continued, revealing he had been tasked by a client to secure cross-world packs. Alan, still confused, wondered what exactly the man was referring to. He apologized again, stating he could not accept such a request at that moment, nor could he accept the merchant's offer to purchase all his remaining stock for up to 1 million gold each. The merchant, undeterred, reminded him with a slight smile that several nobles were involved in the matter. Alan internally noted the merchant's threatening, yet distinctly merchant-like, personality. He resolved that if this was the game the man wished to play, then he would respond in kind. With a confident smile, he declared that showing favoritism to one party might incur the displeasure of the heir of the Castiano family. The merchant's eyes widened in shock, repeating the name. The Castiano family? The merchant, now visibly distressed and sweating, quickly apologized, realizing he had been foolishly borrowing the tiger's authority without proper backing. Alan, also sweating, looked down, acknowledging the tense situation. The merchant, having regained his composure, stated his understanding and prepared to take his leave. He then informed Alan that he planned to sell a few packs at tomorrow's bazaar, with purchase limits, suggesting he might still be able to acquire some. Alan, in turn, expressed his anticipation of seeing him again tomorrow. Alan sighed, pondering how many other individuals would make similar requests. He looked thoughtful, then a determined expression settled on his face. Later, Alan arrived home, the sound of the door clicking shut echoing in the quiet evening. He announced his return, his voice tinged with weariness. He returned home to a warm welcome from Yuuyuu and Arya. Yuuyuu, diligently preparing dinner, insisted that all household tasks, including cleaning and cooking, were her responsibility, stating it was her job and she would handle everything. Alan, observing her intense dedication, felt she was overdoing it. Yuuyuu, however, was thinking that if she worked too hard, there would be less for others to help with, which would mean fewer rewards for her. Meanwhile, Alan mused to himself that he should probably create a task chart to manage the workload. Her expression then turned serious as she questioned Alan about the another job he had mentioned, reminding him that he had not hired her for housework. She conceded his point, but then, with a sudden shift in focus, declared her hunger, insisting that dinner must come first. Alan and Arya watched her, a hint of surprise on their faces. Moments later, Yuuyuu presented Alan with a bowl of food, announcing that it was ready. He thanked her, eager to begin his meal. As he tasted the dish, Alan was astonished, exclaiming that it was amazing that Yuuyuu had managed to make Odin, especially since she had never even eaten an instant version before. He noted that their previous meal had also been just ready-made food. Yuuyuu, however, simply explained that she had merely followed the recipe with the ingredients provided. While Alan savored the delicious meal, Arya, observing him use an unfamiliar utensil, inquired about the thing he was holding, admitting she had been wondering about it for some time. Eula also looked on with curiosity. Arya herself struggled to use the new implements, prompting Alan to explain that they were called chopsticks, a utensil from his hometown. He assured her that they were quite convenient once one became accustomed to them. Alan then pondered the nature of electronics, noting that devices like the coffee machine and refrigerator, which were not magical tools, still functioned with electricity. Arya, intrigued, expressed her own curiosity about Alan's hometown, Japan, and its culture. Holding a piece of the food with her chopsticks, Arya remarked that while the so-called electronics were one mystery, the food itself was equally perplexing, referring to the slime she held. Alan clarified that it was konjac jelly, a processed product made from yams. Arya, still pondering the culinary mysteries of Alan's world, expressed her confusion, noting that even his cooking methods were a puzzle. He explained that yams, if you remember correctly, originally contained poison. To make them edible, one needed to crush them, boil them with lime, and let them harden before consumption. As they shared a meal, Alan felt a sense of contentment, glad that both Eula and Arya were growing fond of his lifestyle. Eula, enjoying the food, affirmed that it was indeed delicious, adding that thanks to Alan, she was never bored. Later, Alan turned to Eula, asking what kind of tasks she needed to perform. He then clarified, revealing a stack of trading card game cards, explaining that he needed her help to sort them into paper bags. Eula, ever diligent, immediately understood and agreed to assist. Arya, her eyes sparkling with enthusiasm, also volunteered to help. Eula, with a confident smile, declared that she had already completed her preparations for the following day and would join them in the task. Alan looked on, a hint of surprise on his face. He watched Eula move with remarkable speed and efficiency, her hands a blur as she diligently worked on the cards. Arya, observing Eula's meticulous process, inquired what she was doing to the cards. Eula calmly explained that she was infusing them with both anti-theft and anti-scrying magic. Alan, taken aback by this revelation, admitted that such protective measures had not even crossed his mind. He mused aloud, realizing that see-through magic must truly exist in this world. Eula, sensing his surprise, asked if her efforts had been unnecessary. He let out a sigh, reflecting on the 2 decades since his reincarnation. He acknowledged that he had done nothing with magic, attributing this oversight to his lingering Japanese mindset. Arya, her curiosity piqued by the mention of protective magic, then wondered aloud about other potential methods of cheating if someone were to attempt it. Alan, still deep in thought, suggested that wish upon a star might be another possibility. Arya, her eyes wide, immediately asked what kind of magic that was. She continued her explanation of the wish upon a star magic, revealing it was a powerful spell designed to manipulate a target's fate for good fortune. However, she cautioned, it demanded a tremendous toll, consuming vast amounts of magic power and life force. She added that the human race could not naturally withstand such a drain, and the individual who originally stole this grand magic, devised by the High Elves, resorted to using beast folk and slaves as sacrifices to fuel its immense cost. Eula, listening intently, acknowledged the terrible nature of such magic. She then quickly dismissed its immediate threat, stating that it was now considered lost ancient magic, and there was no need to worry about anyone going to such extremes just for the cards. Alan, however, still seemed thoughtful, pondering the existence of such terrible magic. Despite his contemplation, Eula and Arya urged him to refocus. Eula, with a determined expression, insisted they finish packaging the cards quickly so Alan could finally get some rest. Arya, equally eager, echoed her sentiment, emphasizing the importance of continuing their task. He continued to package the cards, internally concluding that for now, they did not need to worry about cheating methods involving such powerful magic. Still, he knew he needed to study more about magic in general to be prepared for any future contingencies. Sometime later, Alan found himself in the bustling Royal Capital Bazaar, specifically on North Main Street. He observed his surroundings, noting that opening a stall in this northern district felt distinctly different from his previous experiences in the western district. He recalled the extensive paperwork required for the stall, a process reviewed by both the Merchant Guild and the Northern District Administration, which had been quite a hassle. Looking around, he mused that perhaps due to the presence of many students and related personnel, the area had a lively, almost school festival-like atmosphere. As he walked through the vibrant market, Alan resolved to dedicate his full effort to the day's endeavors, whatever they might bring. Suddenly, a man approached him, politely inquiring if he was Lord Alan. Alan confirmed his identity. The man then introduced himself as a representative from the RE Trading Company, explaining that he was the merchant favored by the N5 Academy students. He stated his intention to sell TCG cards that day, acknowledging that there were purchase limits. Alan, unfazed, replied that he had no issue with that. The merchant woman standing beside the man observed the growing crowd, remarking that it seemed many people might come, just as she had anticipated. The male merchant reiterated his primary goal, to fulfill his client's request, stating that was enough for him. The merchant found himself amidst an even larger crowd than the day before, a throng that seemed impossibly vast. He wondered aloud if this was truly too much, noting the significant increase from yesterday. As the crowd swelled, 2 other merchants observed the scene, murmuring amongst themselves. One asked what was happening, while the other admitted ignorance, noting that all these people seemed to be related to the N5 Academy and questioning their presence. Amidst the growing commotion, a merchant with a distinctive cap and mustache directly confronted Alan, his gaze sharp. He demanded to know who Alan was, stating he had never seen his face in the Northern District before and asking if this was his first time there. Alan, slightly taken aback, confirmed his identity as Alan, a merchant, and admitted that he had somewhat anticipated such a confrontation. The merchant, still scrutinizing Alan, continued his explanation, sighing at Alan's apparent ignorance. He informed Alan that merchants in the Northern District had their own established territory, and Alan had brazenly disregarded it. To clarify the situation, the merchant mentally outlined the district's layout. He understood that Area 3, where Alan had set up his stall, was designated for companies supplying the Sworn Knight School and Liathal Magic School. However, Alan's customers were primarily from the N5 Magic Academy, meaning he should have been operating in Area 15, the supposed area for N5-related businesses. Alan, absorbing this information, offered a sincere apology, acknowledging his oversight and admitting he had not studied the local customs sufficiently. The merchant simply affirmed his regret with a thoughtful, "Yeah, really." Despite Alan's apology, the merchant emphasized the nature of the transgression, stating that what was done, and Alan simply had to deal with it. He explained that such territorial divisions were unspoken rules, not something one could learn from books or formal study. He then sharply questioned Alan, ensuring his words were understood. Alan, startled, quickly affirmed that he was indeed listening. Alan, now fully understanding, expressed his gratitude for the merchant's time and explanation, promising to be more careful in the future. The merchant, observing Alan's earnestness, mused internally that Alan seemed to be a nice person. With the explanation concluded, the merchant shifted to the next step, requesting Alan to present his guild card. Alan readily complied, extending his hands to offer the card. He informed the merchant that it set a purchase limit of 1 box for all merchants, to which the merchant promptly agreed, requesting his single box. The merchant then inquired if the rulebook and playmat were available, expressing a desire to purchase them as well. Alan apologized, explaining that he was only selling the card packs at this time. The merchant, relieved, thanked him, noting that it seemed he wouldn't be scolded after all. Alan, observing the merchant's demeanor, remarked that he too seemed to be having a tough time. As the merchant departed, Alan heard the distant chime of a clock, realizing it was already noon. He mused that the widespread knowledge of TCG accessories indicated how popular the game had become. Nevertheless, with the customer traffic having calmed, he decided it was time to take a small break. He sat down to eat a snack, reflecting that even though he had prepared for a large crowd, his stock had sold out far quicker than expected. The boxes lay empty. Moments later, a young woman approached his stall, apologizing for disturbing his break. She politely asked what the product was used for. He explained that these were TCG cards, part of a competitive card game that utilized the illustrated cards. She then questioned if it was akin to something one might play in a gambling den. He clarified that it was far more complex, allowing players to build their own decks with cards of their choice, leading to rich tactical gameplay. She acknowledged his explanation, understanding the concept. Alan assured her it was no problem, expressing gratitude that she even considered it. He then pondered the significant reason why so many people from N5 Academy were eagerly buying the cards, concluding that it must indeed be an interesting game. Later, Alan arrived home, where Yuuyuu and Kita greeted him warmly, noting his unusually early return. Alan reflected on the recent trading card game sales, noting that everything had sold out within 3 hours. He acknowledged that getting people from N5 Academy interested had been a particularly good outcome, even if it meant the ordeal was far from truly over. He then turned to Yuuyuu, offering his thanks. She, in turn, presented him with a letter, informing him that it was addressed specifically to him, Lord Alan. As he took the envelope, Alan immediately noticed its unusual thickness and considerable weight, prompting a surprised inquiry about its contents. He explained that the sender was the very person responsible for the goods they had previously wholesaled to the school, implying a significant connection. The letter, from Minor of the Student Life Department, confirmed the sales report and the overwhelming demand from students, with over 90% of the requests being for the trading cards. It concluded with a polite but firm request to significantly increase the delivery quantity for the next shipment. His companions, Yuuyuu and Kita, celebrated the news with enthusiastic congratulations, exclaiming that it was a huge success. Alan, however, looked utterly overwhelmed, realizing with a sigh that he would not be getting a break anytime soon. A popular streamer, Lux, greeted his audience, beginning a discussion about the first generation of Crossworld titled The Attack of 1,000 Dragons, which had been re-released just last month. Meanwhile, Alan, engrossed in watching the stream, heard a doorbell ring, pulling him from his focus. He acknowledged the sound, indicating he would answer. He opened the door to find Akira, who had brought him coffee, and asked if he had a moment. Alan, inviting her in, assured her that an entire warehouse's worth of stock had already been secured, and if it proved insufficient, they could make adjustments. As they settled, Akira observed him, noting that he was quite hardworking, watching videos about the TCG. She pointed out a specific card on his screen, mentioning it was banned under regulations ever since the second standard set. Alan then revealed his intention to host a tournament at the academy where they conducted business, explaining that a child had expressed a desire to use the TCG as a means to connect with others and promote the game. Akira acknowledged his reasoning, understanding the importance of the business succeeding, but cautioned that dealing with children of nobility made a full-scale tournament a bit much. She suggested something more akin to a meet and greet. He then asked if she meant involving a trainer. She confirmed, explaining that since the company developing Crossworld, was part of their group, they could invite a trainer to the event. She gestured towards the screen, where Lux was still visible. Alan, however, expressed doubt, wondering if someone as prominent as Lux, a streamer and the national Crossworld champion, would truly attend, given his busy schedule. Akira, with a confident smile, firmly declared that he would definitely come, repeating her assertion for emphasis. She acknowledged his request, stating she would keep it in mind. However, she cautioned him not to make unreasonable demands of the individual she was about to introduce him to. He simply told her to proceed. Akira then apologized to Alan once more for always troubling him, even though he had recently prepared furniture and appliances for her. He admitted that acquiring the furniture had been a little difficult, but insisted it was merely his duty. Meanwhile, Akira and several other Academy staff members were reviewing documents. A dispute had arisen regarding who should arrange what, but Akira firmly declared she would handle it, as it was a direct request from the young lady herself. Alan observed that Sayoji was still cherished by everyone. Akira confirmed this, but quickly reassured him that despite any current appearances, their team was usually very organized and he should not worry. Akira then presented a document, informing Alan that the reward for his cooperation on the research of red potions and related topics had been deposited. She added that she had a couple of other things to share, prompting him to ask what they were. She then revealed that, from now on, security guards would accompany him whenever he went out, with most of them blending into the general public, around 10 at most. Alan, taken aback, questioned if she was serious, and she confirmed that she was. Akira explained that while she didn't believe such extensive measures were entirely necessary, they were definitely for surveillance purposes. She elaborated that even though the Otherworld project had not yet been made public, there were already people in the business world who knew about its existence, making it difficult to allow the key figure of the project to act alone. Turning away, Akira pondered the situation. She acknowledged that the materials from the Otherworld might be impressive, but questioned the wisdom of pouring billions into something that only Alan could supply. She then asked Alan if he was aware of the immense cost to develop a new drug, explaining that it typically costs around 50 billion yen and decades of development, with no guarantee of success. He admitted he was not. However, the red potion was different. It allowed for the regeneration of limbs and internal organs, and even eradicated cancer cells, all within a single month. Akira explained that while the red potion's reliance on magic made it impractical for widespread use, the successful cultivation of herbs from the Otherworld presented a new possibility. She projected that with modern science and technology, mass production of materials from the Otherworld could become a reality within 2 decades, making the potion incredibly valuable. She further elaborated that a single dose of the potion would easily fetch over 100 million yen, and its ability to resolve global issues meant its true worth transcended monetary value. Akira then bluntly informed Alan that he was, in essence, the source of this immense wealth and potential. Alan, processing this overwhelming information, let out a sigh. He now understood why they had so readily agreed to secure TCG stock and prepare the roses. He then pondered whether it was truly better to keep such a powerful item hidden or to reveal it to the world. Akira reminded him that he was the sole individual connecting them to the young lady, implying his irreplaceable role. She asserted that even if he wished to leave, the Sayoji group would never permit it. He acknowledged her point, a quiet understanding settling over him regarding his unique and inescapable situation. Akira then shifted her demeanor, offering a warm smile as she expressed her personal high regard for him. He thanked her, admitting he was happy to hear her kind words, even if they were mere flattery, and playfully denied having been sulking. Later, Alan visited a friend's house, apologizing for the intrusion. His friend, Kazuki, welcomed him warmly, expressing his delight at once again drawing Alan into his hobbies, though Alan playfully pointed out he was the one who initiated the visit this time. Kazuki then enthusiastically offered to recommend anything from his incredible collection of manga, anime, and light novels. Alan expressed a slight concern about getting the books dirty, but Kazuki quickly reassured him. He offered potato chips, complete with a chip tong, and a glass of juice, inviting Alan to sit and enjoy himself. He explained that this time he was looking for a light novel, specifically curious to explore something that girls typically enjoyed. Kazuki understood, noting that works targeted at women often possessed a distinct and interesting flavor. He agreed to help and asked Alan to wait a moment while he searched, as Alan continued to munch on his chips. He stood in his friend's room, surrounded by towering bookshelves, as Kazuki reached for a book. Kazuki explained that he had received many requests from female students, prompting him to seek Alan's advice on the latest trends, despite Alan's feeling that this attention was unexpected and somewhat awkward. Kazuki, holding a book and smiling, declared that he genuinely enjoyed recommending such things and felt he should be the one expressing gratitude. Alan, holding a cup, looked at him, asking what he meant, then quickly apologized, assuring Kazuki that any recommendation would suffice. With a soft thud, Kazuki presented a stack of books to Alan, announcing them as his personal recommendations. Alan looked at the pile with curiosity, asking what kind of stories they contained. Kazuki explained that these were villainous stories, a genre incredibly popular at the moment. He elaborated that they typically involved a protagonist reincarnated as, or taking over the role of, the villainess who had previously tormented the heroine, subsequently attempting to alter their predetermined disastrous future. A look of concern crossed Alan's face as he pondered if such narratives could inadvertently become a direct antithesis to the ruling class. Kazuki, however, remained enthusiastic, asserting that there were countless refreshing and interesting variants, and he was eager to share his top recommendation. Kazuki confirmed he had many more examples to offer. Alan, however, politely declined the villainous stories, admitting he feared he might be executed for reading them. He then asked if Kazuki had any other recommendations, to which Kazuki readily agreed to find something else. Later, as the day concluded, Alan stood outside Kazuki's home, expressing his gratitude for the help in finding suitable books. Kazuki, waving from his doorway, cheerfully replied that he was glad to have been of assistance. Kazuki, giving a thumbs up, encouraged Alan to visit again, stating that was the best way to show thanks. He then remarked that Alan hadn't changed, prompting Alan to retort with a slight frown that Kazuki wasn't one to talk. As Alan walked away into the twilight, he turned to wave goodbye to Kazuki, who returned the gesture from his doorway. Walking alone under the night sky, Alan reflected on his good fortune, realizing he truly had a good friend. He diligently typed on the keyboard, the rhythmic clicks filling the quiet space. Having successfully placed his book order, he stretched, a sense of accomplishment washing over him. All right, he thought. Thanks to Kitakun, I was able to order the books without any trouble. Still contemplating his reading choices, he considered the N5 library building, known for its rare collection. He mused that while it might hold many unique volumes, it likely lacked entertainment books. A deeper concern surfaced. Is censorship going to be an issue? He wondered, reflecting that this situation felt different from his time with the brigade. As he reviewed a document, a subtle flutter of paper caught his attention. He decided it would be best to confirm the details with Minor beforehand, ensuring everything was in order. He then remembered another task, holding a piece of paper in his hand. All right, he thought, there's also the books Sakakibara had asked me to order. I guess I'd better order these two. He returned to his keyboard, typing once more. He considered the convenience of buying books directly from a bookstore for same-day acquisition, but the thought of encountering security personnel made him hesitate, finding the situation definitely awkward. With a click, he began his search, focusing on finding the specific book by its author's name and title. There, is this it? He murmured to himself. The search results displayed an image of two young men, one with light hair and the other with dark, in a tender, almost romantic embrace. He stared at the screen, a look of utter surprise and discomfort spreading across his face. Overwhelmed by a rush of conflicted feelings, he closed his eyes, a bead of sweat forming on his temple. Of all things, he lamented internally, it had to be a Hakuba Issei book, more similar than I expected. Suddenly, a sharp ding-dong from the doorbell startled him, pulling him away from his thoughts. He saw a confirmation message on his screen. Thank you for your purchase. An email has been sent to your email. He quickly dismissed the thought that the person at the door looked similar to someone, telling himself, no, he just looked similar, that's all. He opened the door to reveal a young woman with long, dark hair. He quickly apologized for the wait, still slightly flustered. She, in turn, apologized for her sudden visit, explaining that she had something brief to report. His expression remained one of surprise. He is informed by the long-haired visitor that the cross-world training session has been scheduled for this Saturday. She notes his impressive speed, having only requested the information yesterday, and presents him with the details. He thanks her for arranging it so quickly, but explains that he has work in the morning and will be unable to guide her there personally. She briefly wonders if he truly agreed to an entire training session just for her, then dismisses the thought, acknowledging that his reasoning makes sense. He simply responds with an okay. She then assures him that the person in question is not that kind of individual, and he will understand once he meets him. Alan, now alone, rustles through a document, his gaze falling upon a picture of Lux. He admits to himself that he only knows what Lux looks like from videos and ponders what kind of person he truly is. He considers the upcoming training session, scheduled for the afternoon, and decides it would be wise to grab lunch while he is out. As he walks through the bustling city, he recalls being told that security would be present. He glances around, wondering if they are already there, but finds it difficult to discern from a casual observation. He pulls out a device, swiping across a digital map. He notes a good sober restaurant nearby, and concludes there is no need to worry about the security for the moment. He finds the restaurant, a bell chiming as he enters, and a voice welcomes him. Inside, he spots Lux already present. He looks around, surprised to find the restaurant much emptier than he had anticipated. He stepped into the restaurant, a sense of unease washing over him as he observed its unexpected emptiness. He took a sip from his drink, his thoughts drifting to the unsettling quiet before he suddenly froze, his attention caught by something within the room. His gaze fell upon the only other person present, a young man with light hair and earrings who met his eyes. A wave of recognition washed over him as he realized. "You are Lux-san." A young man with light hair, Yakutani Ryuki, known as Lux, greeted Alan with a cheerful smile, expressing his pleasure in their meeting. Alan, in turn, introduced himself and extended his gratitude to Lux for making time despite his demanding schedule. Lux, beaming with excitement, declared he was thrilled to finally meet Alan and encouraged him to ask anything he wished. Alan, though not entirely understanding the enthusiasm, felt Lux was a good person. As they continued their conversation, people nearby began to notice Lux, whispering amongst themselves about his presence. Alan remained oblivious to the growing attention. The whispers intensified as the crowd recognized Lux as Hakuba Issei from Wonder Stage, with some even questioning if Alan was a cosplayer due to his resemblance. Lux, realizing the situation, seemed surprised by the sudden surge of recognition. The crowd swelled, with individuals eagerly asking for photos, causing Alan to realize the situation was rapidly escalating. Just then, a car pulled up and Akira, leaning out, urgently called for them to get inside. Akira, her expression serious, insisted that both of them get into the vehicle quickly. Alan felt a wave of relief wash over him as they were ushered to safety. The car sped away, leaving the disappointed crowd behind, who continued to call out for Lux-san and Hakuba-kun as it vanished into the city traffic. Later, having arrived at their destination, Akira offered her deepest apologies for the earlier commotion, admitting she had not anticipated such an incident. Lux explained that their combined presence simply made them stand out. Alan, meanwhile, observed their surroundings, noting that they had reached the venue. The interior of the venue was vast, a large hall filled with rows of tables and chairs, suggesting a significant event was about to take place. Alan, looking around, remarked that the venue was far larger than he had imagined, noting the considerable number of staff present. Lux stood beside him, observing his reaction. He had just arrived at the venue with Akira, who introduced him to Toda, a man from Sanubei's Crossworld Development Department. Toda explained that he was primarily responsible for adjusting game balance, while Alan politely thanked Akira for the introduction. Following the introductions, Toda acknowledged the presence of everyone, and Kazuki, the other trainer, readily agreed to commence the day's workshop. As Kazuki prepared to begin, standing by a whiteboard, Toda interjected, stating that he wished to ask a few questions before they proceeded. Alan sat at a desk, observing the exchange. Toda inquired about the duration of Crossworld's popularity and the expected demographics for their planned small-scale tournament or networking event. Kazuki responded that the game had only been popular for about a month, and they anticipated around 30 middle and high school students. Alan, listening to the discussion, mused to himself that Crossworld had not yet become widespread in this country, despite it being an actual otherworld. Considering the limited popularity, Toda suggested that holding a tournament would be inappropriate under the current circumstances and recommended focusing on a networking event instead. He then shifted his inquiry to the types of cards currently in circulation. Kazuki clarified that only the first release, titled The Attack of 1,000 Dragons, was available, which surprised Alan. Kazuki elaborated that the majority of cards in the first release, The Attack of 1,000 Dragons, featured straightforward abilities, often leading to battles that were simple stat checks, as users needed to familiarize themselves with the game. Toda added that while the first release offered sufficient play value for tournaments, the strategic aspect increased significantly with the second release, Wisdom of Magic, and advised waiting until it became widespread before hosting competitive events. Alan listened intently, absorbing the information. He reflected that choosing the Attack of 1,000 Dragons had been the right decision for its ease of use, but a deeper thought lingered. Did dragons truly exist in that other world? Kazuki then suggested that since they were dealing with students, lending out beginner-friendly half-decks would be a good idea, as it would simplify the game and make the rules easier to grasp. Toda agreed, noting that a half-deck game mode, using half the usual cards, could also be implemented. Suddenly, Kazuki realized they had gotten carried away in their planning and apologized profusely. Alan, meanwhile, appeared lost in thought, perhaps still processing the implications of the game and its connection to another world. He reflected on his initial, somewhat careless thought of hosting a tournament, realizing that attempting such an endeavor entirely on his own would have been truly impossible. He was quickly reassured by Lux, who, alongside Toda, declared that their presence was precisely for that purpose. Lux confidently stated that everything would be fine, and Alan only needed to learn as they proceeded that day. Lux then elaborated on the value of certain Crossworld cards, mentioning that a well-kept, super-popular old edition card like Dragon King Valhard could fetch several million yen, a fact that astonished Alan. Lux then suggested they move on to the detailed explanations, as they had all the cards available. The workshop concluded, and the evening drew to a close. As they prepared to leave, Lux presented Alan with a bag, thanking him for his participation, even at such a late hour. Alan, in turn, expressed that it had been a pleasure. Alan, surprised, received the bag, wondering aloud what it contained. Lux explained that it held posters and guide for explaining the rules, along with DIY cards and a rule dictionary. He questioned if he was truly permitted to receive such items, especially the DIY cards. Lux, however, quickly reassured him, telling him not to worry about it. Lux, however, turned to him, asking why he was doing so much for them, setting aside the training for a moment. Toda interjected, stating that he was merely fulfilling his job, while Lux added that it was simply because they all liked Crossworld. They continued, explaining that the joy of a smoothly running deck was unparalleled, and in Crossworld, everyone had a chance, as there was no deck or opponent that could guarantee an absolute win. Even in defeat, one could learn many things from their opponent. He found himself in a state of dejection, pondering Lux's words. Lux explained that while his methods might seem unconventional, they were necessary because many people felt inferior when confronted with overwhelming skill, often leading to comments about unfairness. She continued, asking if he would not want others to also become interested despite such feelings. He understood, realizing this was the core of Yakutani-san's work. He then excitedly proposed that if Alan's deck became popular, he should consider streaming, suggesting it would attract the wants to fans. Toda, standing nearby, seemed surprised by Lux's forwardness. He internally mused that both Lux and Toda were truly passionate about Crossworld, but then dismissed Lux's suggestion as counterproductive, while Lux playfully laughed it off. Meanwhile, the grand edifice of the Academy stood tall under the open sky, its banners gently flapping in the breeze. Inside, Minor approached him, asking if he was indeed planning to hold a TCG meetup soon. He confirmed that he had heard about it. He clarified that it would be both a meetup and a sales event. Minor, intrigued, asked if there would be sales as well. He explained his hope that this opportunity would help balance the overall strength of players and assist newcomers, especially since the supply of cards had been insufficient until now. Minor agreed, believing everyone would be happy with such an event. Minor, however, excitedly added that he also planned to hold tastings of sweets that would be sold at the shop, noting that Lord Ray Casciano himself preferred sweets. He then shifted to a more serious tone, expressing concern about managing an event where the participants would be nobles, given his commoner status, and asked Minor to be his backer. He offered a sincere apology for not having asked him sooner, to which Minor responded that he did not mind. Alan listened as Ray Casciano clarified that he was at fault for the previous situation, stating that by recommending Alan to the Academy, he already considered himself Alan's supporter. Alan simply acknowledged this. Ray then warned him that while there were no such students in their specific dorm, others in the Academy acted arrogantly towards commoners. He recounted a severe case where unreasonable demands were placed on a commoner merchant, leading to their collapse from overwork. Ray then smiled reassuringly, declaring that since he was the one who brought Alan to the Academy, he would protect him with all his power, invoking the Casciano name. Alan, however, shivered at the thought of the terrifying possibilities Ray had just described. He expressed his gratitude, feeling that his earlier worries had been unfounded. Ray, holding a cup, reiterated that given the circumstances, no one would dare try anything against Alan, especially since everyone knew he was Ray's favorite. He looked directly at Alan, his expression serious, and instructed him to report immediately if anyone caused him trouble, emphasizing that such an act would be seen as disrespecting the Casciano family itself. Alan, relieved by Ray's powerful assurance, thought to himself how glad he was that Lord Ray was not his enemy. Ray, still smiling, then stated his anticipation for the upcoming event. Later, as Alan left the building, he considered that once he returned home, he would need to double-check his luggage, but first, he had other matters to attend to. As he walked, he spotted Akira and greeted her, asking if she was on duty. Akira, surprised, replied that she was not, having just gotten some free time. She explained that she had come to give sweets to everyone in the brigade as an apology, as people had flooded the team house the other day, causing trouble. Alan thanked her for the sweets, but then shifted the conversation, stating he had something more important to discuss. He asked what it was. Akira, holding a bag of sweets, admitted she didn't think anyone would mind, but she would give them out just in case. She then informed him that 3 new members would be joining soon, and they were planning a welcoming party for them. She asked if he could attend, to which he readily agreed, stating that if it was next week, it would be no problem. She explained her plan to assign one person from administration to assist with the welcoming party, acknowledging that she had caused Aina a lot of trouble until now. She also noted that while she had heard about 1 new member of the regular meeting, 3 people joining was quite impressive. She continued, asking if she could prepare a few things herself, if permitted, and mentioned their intention to book an entire restaurant. Alan then inquired about the location of the event. He explained that he saw it as an opportunity to get to know the current members he hadn't yet spoken with. Akira gasped, asking if he intended to bring Japanese food. He confidently assured her that he had the preparations under control, while she, in turn, agreed, urging him not to compromise on quality since he was handling it. The scene shifted to a tranquil night, with a full moon shining brightly over a distant building. Later, Alan was seen rummaging through a box, listing the items for the meetup: TCG packs, a starter deck, and sweets. Suddenly, he looked utterly shocked, exclaiming in disbelief at something he had discovered. His shock was mirrored by Arya Faincheese, who trembled as she held up a book, also exclaiming, "What is this?" Alan, equally stunned, recognized the book as a BL book and wondered what Arya was doing with such dubious material. He then questioned if the character in the book wasn't him, but quickly dismissed the thought, noting the character only looked similar. Arya, still looking at the book, agreed with Alan, noting that the character's name was different to begin with, and asked if it was Hakuba. Alan gasped, realizing his mistake, and internally cursed that he had dug his own grave. He quickly tried to explain that he just happened to look like the character, and that some important person had given him the same alias. Arya, still trembling, accused him of lying and asked if this was his hobby. Alan vehemently denied it, insisting the resemblance was purely coincidental. He immediately apologized to Arya, acknowledging that the situation had been too much for her. He tried to explain, pointing out that the character's hair color in the book did seem different upon closer inspection. Minor, observing the tense exchange, asked what had happened between them. Alan quickly dismissed it, claiming everything was fine and that he had merely been cleaning the bath. Internally, he realized his attempt at baggage inspection camouflage had backfired spectacularly. He continued to insist that it was careless of him, offering to sort the books himself to prevent any further mix-ups. He suggested that Arya should label and separate the boxes. She watched him, her expression unreadable. She, however, remained silent, her eyes downcast and glistening with unshed tears. With a small, trembling voice, she simply stated, "It's nothing." The next morning arrived, marking the highly anticipated meetup day. Alan stood by a large, covered carriage, ready for departure. He stood beside a carriage, speaking with Dibro Porthley, who inquired if all the luggage had been loaded. Alan confirmed that it was, expressing his gratitude for the assistance. He observed the loaded vehicle, noting that the sheer volume of items was just barely manageable. He mused on how convenient it would be if he could utilize the Moon Gate for such transport at times like these. Dibro then offered to accompany Alan to the meetup, asking if he would appreciate the company. Alan, surprised, seemed to consider the offer. He mused on the different kind of tension this event held compared to the bustling bazaar. As the carriage began to move, he hoped that the meetup would proceed without any trouble. Minor greeted Alan, informing him that a worker would handle his luggage before offering to show him around the venue. Alan politely accepted, stating he was in Minor's care. The grand hall stretched before them, an expansive space adorned with numerous chandeliers and long tables, ready to host a large gathering. As they stood at the entrance, Alan expressed his awe at the sheer size of the hall. Minor confirmed it was indeed the primary gathering place for everyone in the dormitory. Alan, still processing the scale, questioned the number of participants, recalling that only about 30 people were expected. Minor explained that the smaller venues were already reserved, necessitating the use of this larger hall, which could accommodate around 200 people, the entire dormitory. Minor reassured him not to worry, stating that the staff would fill the remaining numbers to make the event feel complete. Alan, though still somewhat surprised, acknowledged that if that were the case, it would be fine. He then presented the day's schedule, which began with a sweets tasting party, followed by a TCG meetup split into beginner-friendly and experienced player workshops, and concluding with product sales. Alan listened intently, confirming he understood the plan. Minor continued, explaining that he would be leading the beginner-friendly workshop and suggested it would be beneficial if Alan could oversee the experienced group. Alan considered this, asking which group he should assist with. Minor, with a confident wink, told him to leave it to him, revealing that he had already learned most of the rules himself. Alan found this news more than reassuring, noting that simply sticking to the basics would suffice. Minor, however, humbly admitted that he had actually learned a lot of the rules from the students themselves, emphasizing his need to thoroughly understand the product since he was in charge of the shop. Minor then passed a small book to Alan, explaining it was a list of card types and their effects, something a friend had made. He urged Alan to use it if he encountered anything he didn't understand. Alan looked at the book with a gasp of surprise. He was engrossed in the rulebook when Minor, observing him, inquired if he could actually read the text. Alan, surprised, realized that the rulebook was in English, just like the item Yakutani had given him earlier. He mused that while people in this world could read Japanese, his current task was in a different language. Confused, he asked Minor what she meant, admitting he had never seen these particular characters before. Minor, however, calmly assured him that it was no problem at all. She then began to explain that in this world, certain spirits govern language and writing, and they were to thank for the ability to communicate. Minor then shifted the conversation, asking if he had attended a magic academy. He quickly clarified that he was merely an ordinary commoner. Minor continued, elaborating that these entities were known as the spirits of emotions, and they conveyed all written and spoken language. Consequently, any being above a certain rank could communicate effortlessly, as the spirits facilitated translation. A realization dawned on him. This was why he could read English and why other transferred individuals never encountered language barriers. He expressed his amazement at this revelation. Minor confirmed his understanding, assuring him there was nothing to worry about. Just as the explanation concluded, Minor noticed the package had arrived precisely on schedule. She suggested they begin their preparations for the event. He internally noted the need to keep his personal BL book separate and decided to store it away. Meanwhile, Minor asked if he would mind holding onto a box. He readily agreed. As he prepared to move the items, The door creaked open, startling him. Minor looked up, surprised, as Daibro Porthly, the student visitor girl, Lux, and Kazuki entered the venue. He wondered where he should place the remaining items. Minor, recovering quickly, addressed the students, reminding them it was still early and urging them to take their time and wait patiently. Minor remarked that everyone had been restless with excitement the previous night. He added that he had never imagined some students would be looking forward to this event with such intensity. Minor affirmed that this eagerness was precisely why they needed to ensure the event's success, promising his unwavering support. He, with a grateful smile, acknowledged her commitment and stated he was counting on her. He stood before the assembled students, a quiet determination settling over him. He had relied on many to reach this point, and failure was not an option. Around him, the students chattered excitedly, their voices a low hum of anticipation. Addressing the group, Alan thanked them for coming and introduced himself as the one recommended by Lord Ray Castiano, responsible for supplying products to the shop. He announced that he had brought new sweets, which he was considering supplying in the future, as samples for everyone to try. He would also provide a detailed explanation of the game, Crossworld, which was sold at the shop. The students reacted with enthusiastic cheers. As soon as he finished speaking, the students dashed towards the designated tasting corner, eager to sample the sweets. He reminded them that if the sweets were well received, they would be stocked next time, and asked for their thoughts. He then confirmed that the Crossworld meetup would officially begin at 9:30. Meanwhile, Minor observed the students' excited reactions, noting to himself that even the children of nobles still retained their childlike sides. With the tasting underway, Alan declared it was time to move on and prepare the workshop for the main event. He then held up a card, explaining the basic mechanics of the game. He concluded his explanation by asking if there were any questions before they transitioned to hands-on practice. A student praised Minor, remarking that his explanation was surprisingly easy to understand, a testament to his materials. Minor, caught off guard, blushed at being called Minter. Another student, eager to begin, declared they had no questions and were ready to start. A small spirit of emotions manifested near Minor, glowing softly. Alan then presented a demo deck to a student, who gratefully accepted it. He announced that it was his turn first, ready to initiate the practical session. As the practical session began, Alan noticed a significant commotion emanating from another area, likely where the more experienced players were gathered. Shouts of encouragement echoed through the space, drawing his attention. He turned to the students, explaining that things had settled down on their side, and he needed to take a quick look over at the source of the commotion. The students readily agreed. He turned towards the source of the commotion. A group of students gathered around a game, wondering if this was the disturbance he had heard. As he approached, he saw a young man named Diero engaged in a card game. Whispers circulated that Diero was doing his best, but facing an opponent with a high-rare deck was proving too difficult, and he was almost certainly at his limit. Diero's opponent, a confident student, smiled as he held his cards, telling Diero not to hold back just because he came from a Viscount's family. He then added, with a slight smirk, that such consideration only mattered if Diero even had a chance of winning. The opponent continued to press his advantage, detailing Diero's dire situation. He had only 1 life point remaining and no character cards in play. Meanwhile, the opponent boasted of having 5 life points and a powerful SR card, Flame Dragon Galdron, on the field, boasting an attack of 15 and a defense of 10. Alan observed, thinking that while he wanted Diero to do his best, a comeback seemed nearly impossible at this point. The opponent, shuffling his cards with a smug expression, reiterated that Diero's loss was guaranteed if he couldn't make a comeback this very turn. Despite the overwhelming odds, Diero declared it was his turn, recalling Yakutani-san's words that there should always be a chance. With renewed determination, he picked a card from his hand. He then announced his first move, summoning Sea Beast Luminous, a creature with an attack of 2 and a defense of 2. With its ability, he drew an additional card. The opponent scoffed, dismissing the play. He questioned Diero's desperation, pointing out that the Sea Beast Luminous was a common card with a rather plain ability. However, Diero then revealed another card, Blessing of the Azure Sea. This card, he explained, increased a character's attack power by +10 for 1 turn. The opponent's confident demeanor faltered as he realized the card's cost of 3 and the additional bonus it would grant if it was a water attribute card. A look of shock crossed his face. He watched as Diero's Luminous, with an attack power of 15, struck down Galdron, which had only 10 defense. The excess damage directly impacted his life points, signaling the end of the match. The game concluded with a resounding victory for Diero Postley, leaving his opponent stunned and lamenting the defeat of his strongest deck. Meanwhile, Alan, Minor, Kazuki, and the long-haired woman applauded Diero's impressive comeback. After his victory, Diero approached his still-reeling opponent, offering a polite thank you for the match. The defeated player, head bowed, could only manage a quiet acknowledgement of Diero's strength. Still overwhelmed by the loss, the opponent looked up, his eyes wide with a mix of shock and admiration. He confessed to Diero that he was deeply moved by the match and had never encountered such a strong player before. Observing the exchange, Alan smiled, pleased for Diero. The opponent continued, expressing disbelief that Diero had won with a low-rarity deck and eagerly asked to be taught his strategies. Minor, Kazuki, and the long-haired woman also chimed in, praising Gyero's amazing comeback. However, Gyero quickly denied their praise, insisting that his victory was merely a stroke of luck. He then clarified that it was Alan who had taught him that even with low-rarity cards, one could win with creativity. Gyero, beaming, expressed his sincere gratitude to Alan. Alan, in turn, humbly deflected the praise, stating he hadn't done anything and that the victory was entirely due to Gyero's own ability. The others, still impressed, reiterated their desire to learn cross-world from both of them. As the day progressed, the grand clock tower chimed, marking the passage of time. Later, Alan reviewed a book, seemingly satisfied with his work. He then raised a glass, celebrating with Minor, who confirmed that the meetup had gone smoothly and all the products had sold out, deeming it a complete success. He approached Ray Casciano, who was seated at a table, and apologized for interrupting. Ray, with a gentle smile, dismissed the apology, stating that only the cleanup remained, and Alan thanked him for his understanding. He considered Ray's words, acknowledging the honor of such praise. Ray continued, mentioning that even students who hadn't participated had come to observe, and everyone was saying they wanted him to hold the event again. He looked at Ray, curious as to why the event had garnered such interest. Ray simply reiterated his deep gratitude. Ray then began to explain, stating that while most students at the academy were high-ranking nobles, the institution itself valued ability and talent above all else. He continued, noting that because of this environment, there were quite a few students who struggled to fit in, and he believed the meetup had proven to be a great opportunity for them. Alan, still pondering, asked for clarification on Ray's meaning. Ray, with conviction, emphasized that it was precisely why they had to ensure no talent went to waste. Ray elaborated further, asserting that those who possess power had a duty to protect the people, and to fulfill that duty, connections and information were paramount. He expressed his hope that this event would serve as a catalyst to dismantle old traditions. Alan, deeply moved by Ray's philosophy, praised him, calling him truly amazing. Ray, however, humbly stated that his status and abilities were merely fortunate gifts, and it was his duty to use them for the benefit of others. He then apologized for speaking at such length. As Alan turned to depart, Ray suddenly stopped him, indicating he had one more thing to discuss. He declared his intention to take full responsibility for cracking down on the TCG fraud, instructing Alan to focus solely on his own work. Alan, observing him, felt a familiar mix of reassurance and terror, wondering what Ray was truly planning. Ray then turned away, his thoughts drifting to the concept of using a given power for the benefit of others. He reflected that neither his current skills nor this second life were things he had earned through diligent effort. He was not, after all, a noble by birth. These were gifts, he realized, and he wished to employ them to help other people as well. Meanwhile, Alan found himself conversing with Minor, who greeted him warmly. Alan considered the ideal of business, where both seller and buyer benefited, and society as a whole prospered, though he admitted he had no intention of sacrificing his own interests. Minor expressed his gratitude, stating that he should be the one thanking Alan, as his help had meant a great deal, and the cleanup had proceeded smoothly thanks to his hard work. Alan, in turn, offered Minor some snacks he had prepared for the staff, insisting he share them with everyone. Minor, surprised, thanked him profusely. He humbly explained that it was no trouble at all, as he had enjoyed watching the event, and offering the snacks was the most he could do given the established rules. Minor then offered to see him off, but Alan politely declined, explaining that he still had something else to take care of. Minor gasped, clearly taken aback by this revelation. Minor looked at Alan with a questioning gaze, calling his name, as Alan remained lost in his own thoughts, his expression unreadable. He, with a slightly worried expression, apologized to Minor, asking if she knew what had happened to the book that was there. Moments later, a candle on a nearby table was snuffed out, plunging the immediate area into deeper shadow. As darkness settled, Minor let out a soft sigh, her steps echoing faintly as she moved away from the bed. She then settled onto the bed, admitting to herself that the day's errands had truly exhausted her, leaving her feeling weary as the hour grew late. Lying there, her thoughts drifted to her goal of forging connections for the Seahart family, a meetup that had proven quite fruitful. She mused that it had turned out to be an interesting game when a sudden realization struck her. She quickly sat up, her eyes wide with surprise as she looked at a picture she had found. She recalled mentions of retrieving books, specifically Rule Buck, and wondered aloud about the meaning of the image